In a beautiful and bright palace, a scream is heard, echoing throughout the entire room. Someone is loudly calling for a girl. This tall, slender, red-haired girl is our heroine, the one who was desperately called to warn Rosetta. The next step was the last. A foot in a black-heeled boot awkwardly steps on the liquid and begins to inevitably tilt its owner downwards. The fallen girl, who is called the Trembling Doe of the Imperial Palace, is a famous servant girl and is known to the entire palace. Rosetta is famous for her excessive tenderness, which makes her constantly lose consciousness at any convenient opportunity. Her absent-mindedness leads to great destruction and trouble, like the day before, when she, while dusting, knocked over the shelves with plates, breaking them into large pieces. Such people are considered to be incredibly resilient, but Rosetta easily disproves such thoughts by fainting at least 3 times a week. However, despite all the chaos that follows her, the other maids do not feel any ill feelings towards Rosetta. And this depends not so much on beautiful appearance and noble origin as it may seem at first. The whole point is that the girl has an inexplicable charm that attracts everyone around her. However, the main reason for their sympathy was something completely different: stopping work. The rest of the maids sent Rosetta to him. After all, everyone who worked with him ran away from the palace, falling in tears without having worked even 3 days. And here he is, our hero, gloomy, unsociable, with a face on which there is absolutely no emotion, the one they call the Mad Prince. Smiling, Rosetta thanked the others and left, since it was she who now played the role of the chambermaid of Prince Armand Baldwin von Ragnar. As she approaches his chambers, she sees 2 men, one of whom is holding a tray with tea utensils. But taking another step, she notices something strange. A glimmer of light flashed under the tray. The servant hid a sharp dagger under the tray he brought to the prince's chambers, and the second, who clearly saw this, did not react in any way. Smiling strangely, Rosetta asked them what they were up to. With her hands folded on her stomach and her eyes growing darker, she seemed to doubt and asked whether they wanted to harm the prince with this. The 2 men looked at each other with a smile at such a strange and, in their opinion, naive question. The first man waved his hand and yelped mockingly, saying that the Trembling Doe of the palace was also here. The owner of the knife, gripping it more comfortably in his hand, noticed that someone had seen something he shouldn't have, and would certainly die. It seemed as if dark forces were gathering around Rosetta, but there was no one around, and the men were not worried that someone could interfere with them. Taking pity on the girl, one of them shouted an apology, relentlessly swinging his dagger, wanting to kill her. A sharp jerk, a dagger aimed at the girl's heart, a quiet ringing of the blade, a rustle and ragged breathing. The dagger pierced the heart of the man, who did not expect to receive resistance from such a weak girl. As she let go of the falling body, she managed to hear the dying man's surprised words, asking if it wasn't a pity for her to work here with such skills. The second man, frozen in shock, remembered all the events that had happened before and realized that Rosetta had been hiding her true identity all this time. The last thing he managed to say was the conclusion that all the previous attempts to assassinate the prince had been unsuccessful precisely because of her. A sharp movement, the flash of steel from a dagger and a splash of blood. Everything happened too quickly. The bodies of men lie in front of the prince's chambers. There is absolute silence, and only a beautiful female voice says that the one who saw what he should not have seen must certainly die. Continuing to smile softly, the red-haired girl carefully wipes the blood from her hands. Suddenly, a cry is heard calling the girl by name, and another maid quickly catches up with Rosetta. Rosetta turns around, to which the girl who caught up with her asks in surprise where she had been for so long. Awkwardly scratching the back of her head and smiling sheepishly, Rosetta admitted that she had accidentally fallen into the pond, and that was why she had been delayed. At the same time, remembering how the bodies were drowning and the white apron with bloodstains was fluttering in that very pond. Looking at Rosetta, the girl smiled condescendingly and, waving her hand, hurried the heroine, saying that the prince was looking for her. Having thanked him, the prince's maid jumped up and ran towards his chambers. Having run to his chambers, the first thing she did was apologize for being late and began to wait for an answer. Black hair, snow-white skin, an unperturbed look, and a sharp gaze of yellow eyes that makes you shudder nervously, that's what Armand is. Looking at him, Rosetta could only think that he was the real Trembling Doe who had already died 4 times. The girl's eyes sparkled with determination to save him at least in this life. That's why she made the right decision now and became the prince's servant, not his knight. Her thoughts were interrupted by a low male voice, practically whispering her name. Lifting her chin with his finger, Armand attracted everyone's attention and finished the sentence, saying that she was only his Rosie. Leaning closer to her and smiling with the corners of his lips, he continued to whisper about how he thought he would go crazy while he waited for her. His face suddenly turned red, making her wonder about the reasons for this phenomenon. The thumb of the hand moved from the chin and, stroking the skin, lay on the girl's lips, tracing their outline. The two are standing in the middle of a large, bright room. There is practically no distance between them, and only the thought that this is unacceptable allows Rosetta to wake up. The huge castle seems majestic and mysterious until this magic is dispelled by someone's loud scream. The castle is shrouded in the darkness of the night and is only periodically illuminated by ominous flashes of lightning. A female voice calling a man is heard in the silence. Valerian. Rosetta, dressed in knight's armor, holding a sword and with only lightning illuminating her body, addresses the man in the room, asking him to turn back time. A man with long blonde hair sits on a chair, looking sadly at the girl. He worries about the consequences of such a decision. However, Rosetta doesn't care and he can only remain silent, looking at her with his sad eyes. Rosetta Mayfield, the Crown Prince's personal knight, who failed to protect him, and in order to correct her mistake, returned to the past 10 years using a sword given to her by the prince. Returning for the first time, she wanted to correct her mistake. But she came across a prince lying in his own blood and reaching out his hand to her. Holding his bloody palms, she only managed to hear his name spoken before his death. As she leaned over his body, she was shocked that he had been killed before she returned. If Rosetta fails to prevent Armand's death, she reverts back to her 20s. Returning to the past, each time I tried to prevent the tragedy, but I only encountered death. In order to break the path of death, she tried to tell the prince about her return in order to resist together, but this plan was also doomed to failure. And now Rosetta, who has not given up hope of saving the prince, is awaiting her 5th return. After trying other methods, she chose the only one that allowed her to calmly enter the prince's rooms, to be constantly nearby and guard. This is how Rosetta became a chambermaid in the imperial palace. The prince's chambers, 2 maids stand in front of the door, one of whom tells the prince that they are here to introduce a new maid. And so Rosetta enters the prince's room, in which, being his knight, she could not be. Smiling happily, the girl quickly said hello, introduced herself, and promised to serve the prince faithfully. Armand sat by the window, crossing his legs and reading a book. An oppressive silence reigned in the room. After a long silence, without taking his eyes off the book, without a drop of emotion, he said only one word: good. While remaining outwardly absolutely calm, a raging flame opened up inside Rosetta, threatening to burn everything around her, because the prince did not even look at her. The hurt girl was very surprised by the difference in the prince's attitude towards her, because before he had not been so impolite. Closing the door to the room, the sad girl thought that this was the first time she had been greeted so coldly. This attitude would have broken another girl, but not Rosetta, confidently walking down the palace corridor and making plans. This behavior of the prince only became an incentive to act slowly in order to penetrate the prince's heart. Rosetta, continuing to plot the further paths of her plan, completely failed to notice the girl standing behind her and looking after her. A smirk on her face, raised eyebrows, a short snort that escaped the lips of the girl looking at Rosetta. Melanie was puzzled. She thought that since Rosetta had applied for the position of the prince's maid, there must have been something special about her. But apart from her face, she saw nothing special. Smiling maliciously, she thought about the need to show Rosetta her place before she started bragging about her position. Thought, done, and meeting Rosetta in the corridor, Melanie casually remarked that the maid's uniform suited her better than an ordinary dress, thinking that the nondescript rags were literally made for her. Turning to Melanie, smiling shyly into her fist, Rosetta said that she also really liked these clothes and thanked the girl for the compliment. Opening her eyes in shock, Melanie looked at the maid, coming to the conclusion that instead of brains, her head was full of flowers. Now Rosetta has another nickname, a fool with a cute face. Taking Melanie's hands, Rosetta noted that the uniform suited Melanie as well, leaving her no choice but to agree. Without losing hope, the other maids, led by Melanie, were constantly watching to catch her in hypocrisy. Turning around, Rosetta once again saw Melanie calling her. Holding a package of cookies in one hand and holding out a cookie to Rosette with the other, she asked her to try it, as she had brought it especially for her. Literally shoving it into her mouth, she ordered her not to give the cookies to others and to eat them only herself. Chewing her biscuits with difficulty, Rosetta went about her business, and Melanie, smiling contentedly and humming, approached the other maids. Another maid did not miss the opportunity to notice that Melanie now treated Rosetta like a child, although before she hated her more than anyone else. Sighing awkwardly and placing her hands behind her head, Melanie admitted that this was indeed the case, but it did not last long. If Rosetta was pointed out her mistakes, she would immediately apologize. She didn't stand still after finishing the work assigned to her, but looked for it herself, doing it the way Melanie taught her. Another plus was that she helped the other maids do their work. Melanie said that it was impossible not to love such a person, but that was not the main reason. Holding a cookie and smiling, Rosetta's face seems to radiate light, illuminating everything around her. Giggling shyly, the girls notice that Rosetta's smile blinds even their eyes, even though they are girls too. Continuing to discuss Rosetta, they conclude that people who can smile like that definitely have an easy life, and even Prince Armand will not influence her. Remembering the prince, Melanie realizes that she is the one on duty cleaning that very room today. A loud exclamation is heard again throughout the quiet palace, echoing throughout all its nooks and crannies. Hearing Melanie's scream, Rosetta immediately approached them, wondering why she was screaming so loudly. Hugging and calming Melanie, she explained that today it was her turn to clean the prince's room, but Rosetta still didn't understand what was so scary about it. Continuing to look at the girls, she heard a question about whether she had heard any rumors. A terrible rumor is spreading throughout the palace, which is being discussed by absolutely everyone. His Highness is crazy. Wiping the tears from her face, Melanie turned towards the sound of Rosetta's voice calling her. Pointing to herself, Rosetta offered to clean the prince's room instead of Melanie. Touched, Melanie burst into tears as she said Rosetta's name. The girl walked down the corridor, remembering the instructions given to her to knock twice, to say why she came, and to humbly wait for the prince's answer. The girl's fist confidently knocked on the door of the prince's chambers twice. Remembering the next point in the instructions, she said that she came to clean and began to wait for an answer. A bright room, the shadow of a man holding a book in his hands, one word that sounded loud and clear in the silence of the room, come in. Smiling happily, illuminated by the light from the opening door, Rosetta thought that it was finally time to tame Armand. Leaning his back against the wall and folding his arms across his chest, the man silently and attentively watched Rosetta. The girl in turn was thinking about what she needed to do to win the prince over. Making the bed, not paying attention to Armand watching her, Rosetta concluded that the prince seemed to prefer silent maids, but that way she would be the same as everyone else. Thinking about this, Rosetta glanced furtively at the prince. His whole appearance seemed to say that if she behaved too friendly, he would treat Rosetta with even greater caution than before. Initially, Armand was only the second contender for the throne. He had to endure many dangers, as a result of which he stopped trusting anyone. Because of this, he did not have a personal servant and closely supervised the cleaning. Touching the dried bouquet with her finger, the girl thought that this was the reason for the rumors and the reluctance of the others to serve him. Turning her head towards the prince and smiling, Rosetta thought that he was only so demanding at work. Looking out the window, the girl turned to the prince and fell silent. Armand continued to silently look at the girl, waiting for her to say more. A girl with a gentle face, illuminated by a smile and the light of the sun, a ringing voice saying that she has finished cleaning. All this makes Armand freeze, his mouth open in surprise. He continues to look at the girl silently, not understanding what just happened. Rosetta, continuing to smile tenderly, says that the weather is too good and asks permission to open the window to enjoy the warm breeze. Having come to his senses, Armand interrupts her, saying that if she has finished, then she can go. The girl has to agree. Rosetta gloomily walks towards the exit. The prince continues to look after her. Suddenly, near the door, she turns around sharply and, smiling, asks him to call her at any time if he needs anything. The door closes quietly, and there is absolute silence in the room. The silence was short-lived. Suddenly behind the closed door, there was a loud crash and a voice asking Rosetta why she had hit herself again and that she should watch her feet, and a whimper in response. Continuing to look at the door, the prince could only assume that all the strange things that had happened earlier were because the girl was simply a fool. As she followed Rosetta, Melanie continued to ask if she was okay and if something terrible had happened. To which Rosetta, putting her hands on her hips, cheerfully and calmly replied that she shouldn't worry because she was very strong, but Melanie didn't agree with this at all. Continuing to speak, Rosetta told Melanie that from now on, she simply had to become the prince's personal servant. Melanie looked at Rosetta, not sure if she had heard her correctly. After all, even experienced maids refuse to work for the prince. Will Rosetta cope? To which the girl says that she will cope because the prince is very friendly with her. As if sensing that someone was actively discussing him at this moment, the prince's ears began to itch. Melanie thanks Rosetta and asks her not to faint in front of the prince under any circumstances. The girl quietly hums a song and slowly wipes the beautiful table. Watching her every action, Prince Armand felt something was wrong. Her words and actions contradicted each other. She came to clean every day, although she initially said that cleaning was done once every 3 days. However, despite this behavior, unlike others, she did not engage in extraneous affairs and did not disappear without warning, which was not so bad. The girl's ringing voice broke through his thoughts, asking if he wanted to go for a walk today, since the weather outside was fantastic. Rosetta continued speaking, and the prince, closing his eyes, lowered his head in resignation. The girl had one big minus: she talks a lot. Not noticing Armand's reaction, Rosetta offered the jam-filled cookies that she was treated to. The prince interrupted her flow of words with a single word: enough. The girl, as if not hearing the gloom in his voice, happily agreed. But not intending to give up so early, she continued, changing the subject, which forced Armand to remind her that she could go if she was finished. And so Rosetta again gloomily walks towards the door, thinking that she does not allow herself anything extra, and she does not even have anyone to complain to about it. Giving into a moment of weakness, the girl thought that after several weeks of her efforts, his heart had not warmed up to her at all. The weakness was short-lived, and, encouraging herself, she told herself that she shouldn't despair, and that tomorrow she should be a little more persistent. The next day, Rosetta greeted the prince, who, as usual, looked at her in silence. Armand sat at the table, holding the cup with 2 fingers and drinking carefully. Rosetta suddenly froze, stopped her work and called out to him in a strange voice. Surprised, Armand turned his head to Rosetta, who suddenly asked for forgiveness. The cup, knocked out of the prince's hands, falls down, splashing in all directions. An overturned chair, Armand lying on the floor and Rosetta holding him with her whole body. The prince's eyes are wide open in shock. He can understand what all this means. Still holding the prince, Rosetta opens his mouth with her thumb, trying to resist. Armand only manages to shout out a name, calling for help: Richard. Rosetta, not paying any attention to this, only asks him to open his mouth wider. In response, Armand bites her finger until it bleeds, causing her to whimper in pain. Deciding to change tactics, the girl uses both hands to pull his shirt closer to her. A quiet voice asking for forgiveness for rudeness and a tickling warm breath. The warm touch of lips completely confuses Armand. Without closing his eyes, he watches as Rosetta continues to kiss him. Opening her eyes, Rosetta realizes that she is lying in bed, her loose scarlet hair scattered across the bed. As she rises, she hears the prince's voice asking if she is awake. Armand sits on the chair, covering his face with one hand. Rosetta is extremely surprised because now she heard the impossible. The prince promised that from now on, he would be responsible for her. Before Rosetta lost consciousness, she kissed the prince. Unexpected kisses always have a reason. While cleaning the room, the girl thought about how to quickly become friends with the prince, but she had been a knight all her life and nothing came to mind. Her thoughts were interrupted by the pleasant aroma of tea. The smell was familiar to her, the smell of deadly poison. Not knowing how much he had drunk, she decided to drink at least the tea that was in his mouth. It was at that moment that a fair-haired man with a terrible scar on his left eye, the one called Prince Richard, flew into the room. Seeing the picture in front of him, he did not immediately understand what was happening. Richard began to ask the already unconscious prince how he felt, not hearing Rosetta's request. With the last of her strength, she shouted an order to Richard to call the priest immediately. Remembering what had happened, she realized that she was still thinking like a 30-year-old, not understanding how she had lived before. Armand, looking intently at the girl, asks how she realized that there was poison in the tea. Laughing awkwardly, the girl wriggled out of it, saying that she had already encountered this smell. Remembering the main thing, Rosetta excitedly asked whether the criminal had been caught. Armand, looking into her eyes, replied that the criminal had already committed suicide. Worried, Rosetta asked if the prince had recovered his health, to which the man reassured her that everything was fine and that was why he was there. Looking at the prince, Rosetta thought that nothing had changed, and his manner of speech was not the most pleasant. However, the man sitting in the chair clearly answered her questions, and for this alone she was ready to drink the poison 100 more times. The prince's hand, lying on his knee, suddenly clenched into a fist. Looking into the girl's eyes, Armand clearly told her that she had drunk too much poison, and therefore she could die in a few days. Rosetta froze, slowly realizing what he had said. Now it became clear why he had treated her so well. The man, deciding that the girl was ill, asked her to contact him, and he would fulfill her request before she died. So that Rosetta would understand exactly what he said. He said that she was dying in his place, but the girl continued to look at him in confusion. Rosetta knew that normally the girl would have died from such a dose of poison, but with her, the ballmaster, everything would be completely fine. Smiling slyly, Rosetta thought about how, without telling the truth, she could say that it would not harm her. But she immediately pulled herself up short for such thoughts, because this could become an excellent chance for her. With a smile on her face, she told the prince that everything was fine and that she shouldn't bother herself. Perhaps she wouldn't die, because she was very strong. Looking at her, he had previously thought that she was a fool, but apparently the poison had worsened the situation. but he said out loud that she had almost no chance of survival. The upset girl lowered her head and desperately asked for her cherished wish to be fulfilled. And quickly, before he changed his mind, she asked permission to be with him to serve until the end. Armand looked closely at Rosetta and reminded her once again that she was dying and that she did not understand him if she asked for such a thing. Irritated by his suspiciousness, the girl said that she saw no point in jewelry and wanted to serve for posthumous glory. Armand considered this request too burdensome, but he understood the girl's desire to find the meaning of her life. Lightly touching the girl's shoulder, he quietly promised that he would guard the last days of her life. Rosetta sat smiling happily. She got what she had wanted for so long. While reading the document, the prince listened to the girl's proposal to call her by her short name and was surprised that she had little time left, but her habit of chatting remained the same. Smiling at his words, Rosie promised to be quiet so he could read the document out loud. The man raised his fist to his lips and cleared his throat to read the parchment. As he read, he said that he, Prince of the Ragnar Empire, Armand Baldwin von Ragnar, appoints Rosetta Mayfield as his only personal servant. In conclusion, this agreement will last until Rosetta Mayfield's death. Melanie flies in and, practically hysterically screaming, asks how this is possible. Why is Rosetta dying? She burst into tears and continued to say that this couldn't be happening, despite Rosie's words that it was just a misunderstanding. To calm the girl down, he said that the priest had already treated her and that she shouldn't worry. Rosetta twirled around in front of Melanie, showing that she wasn't scratched, to finally convince her. Finally believing that everything is okay, Melanie jumps towards the girl joyfully, hugging her. Without letting go of Rosie's hands, he invites her to spend the night together in her room. Lying in bed, holding hands and laughing, they talked about how it brought back memories from their childhood. Looking at Melanie, Rosie thought that she had never had time to make friends before, and it was a very nice feeling. Giving in to her feelings, the girl confessed that she wanted to make friends with someone and asked him to tell her how she could get closer to him. Hearing such news, Melanie jumped up, wondering if this person was a man. Remembering the prince, Rosetta confirmed Melanie's thoughts and wondered if it was a good idea to ask her about such a thing. Melanie blushed and assumed it was Richard, which surprised Rosetta greatly. From Rosie's reaction, the girl realized that her option was wrong and sympathized with the guy. Not forgetting to give the best advice for getting closer to a man, more touching. Arms folded across his chest, Armand categorically refused help with bathing, denying that he had any indecent habits. Rosetta did not give up and listed the advantages of such help, making me nervous. Pressing his index finger on the girl's shoulder, the prince reminded her once again that he didn't do such things, and if she continued asking, he would think that she was planning something. Armand smiled. He was sure that after such words, any noble lady would run away. Rosetta took his hand, which was extended to her, and tucking a strand of hair behind his ear, asked what would happen next. The man jumped back in horror, and Rosie smiled contentedly, thinking that now he understood that she wanted to get closer to him. Hands holding a towel dry wet hair after washing. Rosetta sees this and immediately offers to help Armand change his clothes after washing. The man's patience runs out and a scream is heard. The man reminds that he can handle everything himself. Closing the door, Rosetta says discontentedly that the prince is too stubborn, not noticing Richard standing there. The man smiles and asks if these words are about the prince. Rosetta gets scared and asks the man to keep it a secret. Richard, laughing, promises her to keep quiet. The man inquires about the girl's health, worried after rumors from other maids. Rosetta reassures him, saying that she is full of strength and energy. Remembering yesterday's rudeness, the man apologizes, but the girl says that she is fine and advises to worry more about the prince. Richard places his hands on the girl's shoulders. He is amazed by Rosetta's devotion. He considers it worthy of respect. Rosie doesn't understand what's going on. It's very strange to hear such praise from the senior knight. The man continues to shock the girl and asks if she is free this weekend. However, Rosetta does not have time to answer anything. Armand is standing next to them, telling the girl that he has urgent matters and needs help. The man looks at the girl gloomily. He is unhappy that, having aimed at his body, she stands and flirts with another. Armand leaves. Having come to his senses, Rosetta asks if they are going to the main palace. If she can accompany them there, the prince refuses. With a pitiful face and folding her arms, the girl promises to carry an umbrella from the sun and tell interesting stories along the way. Looking around with displeasure, Armand scolds the girl silently. However, he says that he allows it as long as she carries the umbrella, and Rosetta happily agrees. 3 men in uniform are holding one umbrella, which looks incredibly heavy. Richard is amazed. The umbrella is too heavy. How can fragile Rosetta carry it? The girl carries an umbrella, a smile on her lips. She talks about the earrings, the tears of Erki and their owner, the king of the Aspel Empire. Rosetta looks at the prince and smiles happily. He is interested in listening to her. She has known him for 10 years, so she can immediately understand this by looking at his face. Surprised, Armand asks how she knows all this. Embarrassed, the girl replied that she didn't know it was a long time ago, so she couldn't remember. A memory flashes. Rosetta stands over the fallen king and holds those very earrings in her hands. The girl suddenly stops and says that there are enough stories today because they have already arrived and did not notice it. Interested in the girl's story, the men continue to stand and look at her. Richard woke up first, apologizing for his inattention, because due to the interesting story, he did not have time to ask how she managed to carry such an umbrella. Taking the folded umbrella in her hands and laughing, she reproaches the man for underestimating the work of the maids and admits that she is considered strong among the others. Richard laughs loudly, but Armand remains silent. The man remembers how she grabbed him hard with her lips. Dissatisfied, he interrupts his thoughts and quickly moves forward, urging others on. Rosetta smiles, thinking that an umbrella is no match for a sword. However, despite this, the body at 20 is much weaker than it was at 30, and it will take at least 5 years to become a swordmaster. The girl is upset. The work of a maid is difficult and there is no time left for training. Only Valerian Windsorfruit can do anything, the one who became a great wizard at 15, a young genius. He is the pride of the Empire. He gave up the title of the Master of the Magic Tower and dedicated himself to the imperial family. For Rosetta, he was a close friend, closer than a family member. Now she rarely saw him because of her work as a maid. A male voice called out her name, Rosie. The surprised girl looked towards the screaming man. She couldn't believe her eyes. Valerian was actually running towards her, telling her as he went how much he missed her. Valerian tried to hug Rosetta, but she lifted her leg, unhappy that he was doing it in front of everyone. A lowered foot in a small black boot steps with all its might on the man's toes. Rosetta became even more angry. She shouted that Valerian was a pervert since he could have dodged, but did not do so. With tears in his eyes, the man said that he did not shy away from making her happy. When Valerian was young, his family fell. Rosetta's mother decided to shelter the boy, accepted him into her family. Rosetta was his sister's protector and peer, and he cared for her as if she were a lost little sister. Rosetta also considered him an older brother and felt very comfortable with him. His only flaw was the excessive tactility he showed towards the girl. One, looking at his pitiful face, immediately forgave him for everything. Folding her arms across her chest, a disgruntled Rosetta reminded them that she was a maid here and that she was tired of suffering because of the rumors about them. Rosetta sighed and promised to come to the man's laboratory as soon as she sorted out her affairs. Finally, she asked him not to worry, because she had made friends in this life. The man laughed, hardly believing it, and asked permission to hug her. While they were talking, they didn't notice that the prince was already standing right next to them, looking at them without stopping. Rosetta and Valerian stood close to each other, their arms wrapped tightly around each other, and there was a gentle smile on Rosetta's face. Continuing to hug Valerian, Rosetta promised that she would not fall for this again, because she was, after all, a well-mannered girl. The man wished the girl not to get sick while he was away. Turning away from each other, the couple went their separate ways. After taking a few more steps, Rosetta meets the prince and greets him. The man is silent and looks at the girl gloomily. Armand leaned over her sharply and demanded to know who the man was next to her. The girl wondered if the prince could have seen her hugging Valerian because she had completely forgotten that Armand, trained to be the crown prince, had developed vision. Telling herself to act more naturally, Rosetta replied that it was her friend who worked in the main palace. Armand said that her friend was quite tall, and Rosetta, laughing, confirmed that he had a wonderful physique. The prince thought with a gloomy face that Rosetta might be secretly dating someone. Reading all his thoughts on his face, Rosetta smiled, but was unhappy that everything was ending because of his suspicions. The man continued his interrogation, asking what the girl's friend was doing. Rosetta coughed violently, pressing it to her lips. The girl immediately says that she is fine, but a bloody handkerchief falls from her hands, after which she herself, rolling her eyes, faints at the prince's feet. Armand, bending down sharply, manages to catch the girl, hugging her waist with his hand. Time seemed to stand still. Breathing stopped. There was practically no distance. Rosetta was confused. She did not expect at all that the prince would catch her because he doubted her. But whether his conscience tormented him, she does not know. Rosetta decides not to let this opportunity slip through her fingers. With a smile on her face, the girl thanks the prince for catching her and that she is alive thanks to him. The prince's hand clenches into a fist with a crunch. The same thought keeps going through his head, because everything happened because of him. He thinks that he has already killed her. Rosetta looks at Armand in confusion. His reaction was not at all what she expected. Wanting to correct the mistake, the girl said that it was fine, but if the prince was in the sun for a long time, his skin would suffer. Armand raised his hand and commanded to return because of the tingling in his hand. Returning to the palace, Rosetta, admiring the prince's dexterity, thanked him again and offered to help him change his clothes. But Armand refused. Trying to avoid the girl's advances, he said that he caught her so as not to ruin his reputation. Rosetta cursed under her breath because she was sure that he had just been looking at her with sad eyes. Armand's behavior reminded her of the behavior of the cat she had when she was a child. He pretended that he didn't like her, but in reality he was worried. Surprised by her smile, the prince told her to hurry up and go, because he had only told her to clean the bedroom. Rosetta continued cleaning, and Armand returned to watching her. Looking at the table and seeing a vase with long faded flowers, Rosetta doubted that the prince was interested in such things, and assumed that another maid had left it. Armand saw that Rosetta took the vase and told her to leave everything as it was. Rosetta, realizing that these flowers were a gift from a special person, asked if someone dear to him had given them to her. The man nodded briefly, confirming this fact. The girl thought that the bouquet that was given to her most likely belonged to Leia Runiel, whose family was closely connected to the royal family. The girl was the only daughter in the family. Her name was enough to become a member of high society. In the past, Rosetta's half-sister tried to get Runiela's attention. Rosetta was not interested in such things, and being the best knight, she did not cross paths with the lady. However, despite this, the name remained in memory, because several years later the lady married Armand. The marriage between Runiela and Armand was formal. Armand's difficult character led to the fact that they developed a rather cold relationship. Smoothing out the blanket on the bed, the girl thought that if these two could get along this time, she would be better off. Armand abruptly interrupted her thoughts. The man noticed that Rosetta had been cleaning more often lately. Rosetta smiled and replied that changing your underwear every day was good for your skin. The man dismissively noted that it was just appearance. The indignant girl screamed. She could not understand how someone could say such a thing, having such an appearance. A man's skin is soft and beautiful. What's the point of talking about it if just looking at it makes you feel better? The man never doubted his appearance. Those around him were afraid to say a word to him. The girl was the first to talk about his appearance. The girl continued to be indignant all this time. She could not understand how the prince could say such things if the prince's appearance was his main advantage. And if it were not for his face, she would not be here. The prince was angry. He could not understand whether the girl had gone mad or lost her fear because of her imminent death. Rosie realized that she seemed to have gotten very excited and had gone too far in telling the prince all this. Trying to calm the prince, the girl bowed her face and asked for forgiveness. Armand looked at the girl and could not understand whether she was crying or not. He was struck by the fact that she did not react so sharply to her imminent death. Rosetta did not understand whether the prince had forgiven her, and, with the unconventional logic of a knight, she decided to kneel as usual. Turning his head to the side, Armand told her to forget because she was sick. The girl, apologizing once again, abruptly dropped down, sitting on her knees in front of him. Stunned and angry, Armand tugged the girl's hand, asking what she was doing, and then his heart sank, realizing something. The girl's hand was too thin and weak, and upon realizing this, the man immediately calmed down and told her not to do meaningless things. Rosetta sat on her knees and smiled contentedly. The fall on her knees worked perfectly. Armand could not forget the tenderness of her hand in his and clenched his hand into a fist, driving away these sensations. Suddenly, Armand asked an unexpected question, which stunned Rosetta. He asked if she liked boats. Frozen with surprise, the girl raised her hands up and assured the prince that of course she liked him, and heard in response that they would meet tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning. And he added to the girl, who didn't understand what was happening, that he decided to give her good memories before he died. Rosetta left the chambers and leaned against the door, wondering whether the prince had intended to confuse her with this action. The next morning, a girl in a beautiful white dress stood in the park and looked around. Two men were walking along the path towards her, Prince Armand and Richard, walking side by side like two opposites. The man ordered her to stop yawning and sit down. The girl pinched her cheek. Since the prince was so rude to her, then this was definitely not a dream. A harnessed carriage drives through a green forest, taking Rosetta on a boat ride. Looking at the girl, Armand wonders if she had to wear such clothes today. The girl, folding her hands on her knees, replied that she had nothing to wear. Richard was surprised, thinking that the girl still had not been brought clothes from home. The girl refuted his version of the clothes he had brought. This was the most suitable outfit for a boat ride. Armand looked out the window. He couldn't believe that there were no more dignified clothes for aristocrats. She is an aristocrat turned servant, kneeling, her hands calloused. The only conclusion to be drawn from all this must be that she was abused at home. Without taking his eyes off the window, he thought that this girl had been abused all her life and had become a servant, and now she would die in his place. Rosetta, in contrast to the prince's gloomy thoughts, thought that it was inconvenient to train in skirts, so she only had trousers. Was the lack of clothes really such a big problem, she wondered, looking into space. Having made his conclusions, Armand turned to the girl and offered his help in buying clothes, if necessary. The girl, who didn't know about the conclusions he had come up with, refused since she didn't need it at all. The men, amazed by her, looked at the girl. Rosetta thought that the most important thing for her was his life. The wheels of the map stop abruptly. They have finally arrived at their destination. The girl easily jumps out of the carriage and, turning to the door, extends her hands to help the prince get out. The men are shocked. Rosetta is embarrassed. Her chivalrous habit has confused her. A beautiful picture opened up before them, a clear lake, surrounded by greenery and flowers, a white boat waiting for them at the shore. The delighted girl calls the prince to hurry to the boat, but tells her that she can go. The stunned girl realizes that the prince is asking her to sail alone. The girl continues to stand. She does not understand how someone could enjoy riding a boat alone. After all, despite what she told the prince yesterday, she doesn't even like it, but because she wanted to be alone with him. The girl touchingly wipes away the tears from her eyes, her voice quietly asking the prince if she will really swim alone. Looking at this incredibly touching picture, Armand becomes uncomfortable and he agrees to go with her. A happy Rosetta jumps towards her, holding his big hand with her own. The annoyed prince makes a condition for Rosetta to keep her mouth shut for the entire trip. The girl covers her mouth with both hands. Richard, following the prince, is incredibly happy. He can't believe that he got such an opportunity. Imagining the wonderful moments of a future trip with a girl, he wants to be sure to thank the prince. He does not immediately see the prince, who turns around and blocks his path. The astonished Richard has not yet said goodbye to his fantasies and cannot understand anything. Armand calmly says that for safety reasons, there should be at least one person on the shore. Richard can't say anything. This is a good reason. A beautiful white boat with passengers on board moves automatically across a clear lake. Rosetta thinks that this is better than she imagined. The girl does not take her eyes off the landscapes and views in front of her, beyond all praise, like a painting. Noticing her gaze, the prince looks at her. Rosetta decides to ask if he likes boating, to which the man honestly admits that he does not. The boy screams, floundering in the water. There are many people standing around him. Laughter rings out. No one helps. The boy slowly sinks into the water. His thoughts are about one thing: he cannot protect anyone, not even himself. Armand admits that he doesn't like swimming because of bad memories. Rosetta is worried and wants to say something, but the prince tells her not to worry about it. Wanting to distract himself, Armand says that Rosetta was appointed to his palace and had to endure a lot. The girl interrupts him, admitting that she left voluntarily. Armand is shocked by this confession. He knows that the servants do not want to work in the palace and wants to understand why she volunteered. Rosetta stands up and, holding out her hand to him, admits that she is here to protect him. Armand covers her mouth with her hand, looks away and asks if she has enough strength for this. Rosetta reminds him that he saw her holding an umbrella and that she had already saved him once. Armand is angry because it is because of this that her life is lost. A sharp push, a foot in a black boot, inevitably tilts its owner down. Rosetta falls into the prince's arms, her hands resting on his shoulders, the distance between them reduced to a minimum. The girl, shocked by what happened, cannot say a word and continues to stare into his eyes. Feeling her in his arms and not taking his eyes off her, Armand finishes his thought. She couldn't save her life. Holding her thin and delicate wrist, he thinks about how she is going to protect him if she falls from such a slight push. The prince continues to look into the girl's eyes without taking his eyes off her, and there is absolute silence between them. Rosetta blushed. Her heart was beating unbearably fast. The girl did not understand what was happening. In the middle of the lake there is a boat. On board there is a man and a girl. They continue to lie in each other's arms. There is silence between them, broken only by the beating of their hearts. Tactile contact was not something shameful for Rosetta. She did the same with Valerian. Holding hands, lightly hugging, it was done casually. But having fallen on the prince, Rosetta felt completely awkward. In her mind, the girl continued to order herself not to show embarrassment and to imagine that it was Val. This is Val, the girl continued to convince herself. Finally, Rosetta smiled and thanked the prince for saving her life. The prince asked how long she was going to sit on it, to which Rosetta cheerfully replied that she would continue to sit so as not to fall again. This answer completely disarmed Armand, after which he went deep into his thoughts. The girl immediately jumped up from his lap, saying that she didn't dare because it was His Highness's thigh. Armand sat down, telling Rosette that he did not understand how she could be at ease with a man who was risking her life to protect him, because of whom the girl had no time left at all. The two are sitting in a boat opposite each other. There is an awkward silence between them. The girl begins to say that the reason is to protect him. The reason Rosetta kept coming back was because Armand was her first failure. The girl blamed herself. She couldn't protect her master. But after I returned, all other emotions were gradually forgotten. There was only one single desire left in my head. She wants him to live, but he will never know. Smiling slyly at the man and sticking out her tongue, Rosie finishes saying that the reason will remain a secret. Armand is absolutely shocked by the girl's behavior and is dissatisfied with the girl's answer. Rosetta continues to laugh and says that every maid has her own secrets. Armand calls it all just funny. Rosetta interrupts him, confessing her sincere desire to protect him. The boat's engine was making noise. Armand was silent. There were many people who were saying the same thing as she was. The engine began to roar even louder, increasing the tension. Rosetta and Armand sit in the boat, listening to the noise and trying to understand what happened. Listening, Rosetta thought that the engine malfunction could not be a coincidence. While warning the prince to be careful as it is very deep here, he does not notice that he is no longer in the boat. Prince Armand slowly sank, continuing to look up. All he could think about was that everyone who spoke like Rosetta had always betrayed him. With difficulty opening his eyes, he saw Rosetta. She was reaching out her hand to him. The girl placed her palm into the prince's palm, tightly intertwining their fingers. Having emerged from the water, the girl breathes heavily, trying to calm her breathing. Turning to the prince, the girl asks how he feels and, hugging him, pulls him to the shore. Richard meets them on the shore and throws them a rope to help them get out. Richard is amazed. Rosetta carries the prince out of the water, holding him in her arms. A girl with scarlet hair, blue eyes sparkling with the shine of a blade, she is ready to fight. Prince Armand lies on his bed, covered with a blanket. Opening his eyes, he sees Richard and Rosetta sitting near the bed. Richard reports to the prince that while he was unconscious, he was dried and redressed with the help of magic, and that he need not worry about the rumors. Armand asks how much time has passed, to which he receives the answer that less than an hour has passed. When asked if anyone else had seen him, he was assured that Richard had carried him as unnoticed as possible. When asked why the priest had not come, Richard fell silent and hesitated before admitting that the younger priest had provided assistance. Continuing to listen to how the high priest had arrived late because the first prince had gotten injured during the sparring, he nervously clenched his fist. He already knew that the current empress and mother of the first prince was trying to subjugate the temple. Looking into the stream, he remembered everything that happened. Everything was planned in advance. Having heard everything he wanted, he let Richard go. Rosetta also headed for the exit, but was stopped by the prince. Returning to the prince's bed, the girl thought that she deserved it because she was impudent, or because she carried Armand in her arms. All the more unexpected were the words of gratitude from the prince, who owed his life twice. Rosetta turned away, covering her face with her hand. The prince became nervous, thinking that Rosetta was crying and demanding an explanation of what was wrong. Turning around, Rosetta smiled and admitted that His Highness had thanked her and that she was very happy. Armand heard the answer and asked her to tell him if she needed anything. Rosetta again refused the offer. The girl said that she was completely fine and it was enough for her that the prince was safe. The prince insisted that this was the price for his life and he was ready to pay in any way. Only she had to say what she wanted. Lost in thought, Rosetta remembered their embrace on the boat. After a short silence, Rosetta resolutely asked for a hug as her reward. Armand froze, after which he asked the girl again, doubting what he had heard. The man picked the girl up in his arms, saying that if she really wanted it, he would do it. Leaning his knee on the bed, Armand lays the girl down on the bed, leaning on his palm next to her. Rosetta lies on the prince's bed, with Armand kneeling over her, looking down at her. Surprised, Rosetta asks if it was necessary to cuddle on the bed, and when he answers her with embarrassment that he thought it was more comfortable, she laughs merrily. Reflecting, Rosetta says that the prince is right in that it is natural to charge a large price for life. Armand sits on the bed and asks what she wants. The light gently embraces the figure of the girl standing near the window. A gentle smile on her lips and words that make your heart stop. She wants something more. Rosetta lifts the hem of her dress, revealing the parchment hidden on her thigh, saying that it is okay to hug. Hugs and tea parties would also be appropriate. The girl lists her desires. Opening the contract in front of him, she asks him to fulfill her request every day. Armand was amazed and could only ask when she had managed to compose it. The satisfied girl answered honestly that she had done it a long time ago and wore it just in case. Sighing, the prince admitted that he did not like all this, but his life required an equal price. Surprised by his quick consent, Rosetta thanks the prince. The man gets out of bed and going to the table signs the contract. He thinks that the contract will be short-lived because she doesn't have long to live anyway. Rosetta and Armand turn around. There is a knock on the door of the chambers. The maid reports that a priest has arrived to see the prince. The maid continues to report that the archmage arrived with the priest. Rosetta freezes. She is very surprised. Valerian has arrived in the prince's chambers. She quickly realizes what a fuss it will be if he sees the rumpled bed, wet clothes, and disheveled hair. When they were children, Valerian once beat up a rich boy who was hitting on her. Rosetta wants to warn Valerian about this, but he asks her to wait. The door to the chambers is closed, but noise can be heard from behind it. The maid and two men are waiting for an answer. They do not understand what is happening behind the door. Finally, the prince allows entry. The door opens, letting light into the corridor. The priest bows before the prince, greeting his majesty. Valerian also greets the prince, watching as the prince's hand touches the hair on Rosetta's back. The man's eyes narrow with displeasure. He really doesn't like what he sees. Armand's fingers continue to touch, stroke, and run through the girl's hair. Rosetta doesn't move. She feels the prince's fingers running through her hair. She can't say a word. Rosetta turns slightly towards the prince, wondering why he is touching her. Understanding her question from her look, Armand leans down and whispers in her ear that her hair is very disheveled and the others will definitely notice it. Valerian watches what is happening without looking away. He began to say that that is, the prince, had an unpleasant situation, so he dared to visit him. Looking gloomily at Valerian, Armand wonders if the rumors have already reached the main palace. Valerian laughs and says that there is no place in the imperial palace that can be hidden from his sight. The man says that since the priest has already arrived and the prince is in good health, he and the prince's maid can leave the room. Armand looks gloomily at the speaker. Rosie quietly moves towards the exit, and Valerian remarks that the prince needs to get treatment and they will wait outside. The archmage tells the girl to leave, but they do not have time to leave the chambers. Armand tells them to wait. They stand opposite each other, waiting to see what happens next. The prince's finger points towards the girl and tells her to stay. Embarrassed, Rosetta only quietly asks why. Anger radiates from Valerian in waves as he looks at the prince. The man and the girl think about different things. The man is ready to protect if the prince makes fun of her, and Rosie wants her friend to control himself. Armand tells the girl to stop being stubborn and get treatment if she is not in a hurry to go to the afterlife. The girl calms down and happily agrees. The prince sits with his shirt unbuttoned. The priest performs the treatment. Rosetta continues to compare the prince with her cat, who also treats the girl. The girl looks at the prince and is surprised. Last time the prince was shy in front of her during bathing, but now he is completely calm. The prince's voice interrupts her thoughts, telling the priest to look at Rosetta after his treatment. The girl continues to smile, and the prince continues to tell the priest that she drank a sip of deadly poison a few days ago. Rosetta is shocked. She didn't expect something like this to happen. The prince asks the priest if he can ease her suffering, because according to others, Rosetta is about to die. The priest is struck by Armand's concern for Rosetta and promises to do everything in his power. Rosetta is shocked because if the priest does this, then everyone will know that she is not dying. The girl gathers her strength, realizing that nothing can be done, since this is how it turned out. Rosetta puts her hand to her chest and admits that she cannot accept the treatment. Armand looks at the girl. He wants to know why she can't do it. Rosie, clutching her face in her hands, admits that she is naturally very shy and wants a woman to treat her. Hearing this, the man is full of questions. Pushing the priest away with his hand, Armand turns to the girl and asks her again about shyness, knowing that it is nonsense. Valerian laughs and puts his hand on the girl's shoulder and notes that during the treatment it is necessary to expose some parts of the body. Looking at Rosetta, he assumes that she is uncomfortable showing them to a man. Armand's expression darkens as he watches Valerian's actions. As if not paying attention to this, Valerian promises to take care of the maid, telling the prince to calmly take care of the treatment. Continuing to smile, the archmage speaks of haste and asks to take his leave. Armand is in complete shock. This archmage is absolutely impudent and unceremonious. Rosetta and Valerian walk gloomily from the prince's chambers in absolute silence. However, after moving a decent distance, they can't stand it and start laughing loudly. A man sits at a table and asks what kind of tea to make the lady. Rosetta says that she doesn't like it when magical powers are wasted and receives the answer that everything that concerns her is not wasted. The girl tries the tea and asks why Valerian came to the palace, but the man interrupts, asking why she didn't say anything. The man wonders who tried to poison her. Rosetta, frowning, says that the man has already died. It is either suicide or they shut his mouth in this way. Looking at the reflection of her face in a cup of tea, the girl is reminded of her resistance to poison. Valerian is full of anger, and even despite this, he cannot close his eyes to what is happening. Rosetta looks at the man. He regrets that she didn't tell him earlier, and now he will grumble. Valerian continues his questioning, asking how she ended up in the lake, and the girl tells him about the boat's problems. The girl takes a piece of sugar, adding that the prince suddenly lost consciousness and they both fell into the water. With his arms folded across his chest, Valerian says that the prince's breakdown and fainting look suspicious and is most likely a reaction to the poison. The girl looks at the knife and says that if this is true, then it can be considered attempted murder. After thinking about it, Valerian asks Rosetta if she has seen any strange things in the room. Rosetta says that it is difficult to say because the room is very clean. The only thing that haunts her is the wilted flowers in the vase. Valerian promises to find out about the flowers, but he is worried about the situation that, although she was a knight, she does not have a sword. Rosetta tells him not to worry about it, and a sword appears in front of him in a blaze of light in the girl's hands. She hides it with mana. This is the same sword that the prince gave her and that possessed time magic. Looking at this, Valerian asks if he is really that important to her. The girl, not understanding, says about the sword. The angry man jumps up from the table. He shouts that he is asking about the prince, because it was him that she tried to save so many times. And hearing an answer that literally takes his breath away is naturally important. The girl holds the sword with a smile and says that the prince is her master, whom she has sworn to serve. Fighting his feelings, the man clenches his fist, saying that he respects her choice. And pressing his hand to his chest, he says that he is not going to silently watch as she puts herself in danger, so he will also act. The touched girl hugs him and thanks him for his help. The man helps her in every life, and this time she will try to make it the last one. Rosetta walks down the palace corridor, thinking that she can tell the prince that she has already met the priest. Continues to think about the flowers, hoping that they weren't the problem. These wilted flowers that the prince kept were a gift from Lady Runiella. However, reading Valerian's message, she learned that she was right about the flowers, and the situation with the boat was not accidental either. Realizing that she was right, she realized that now she shouldn't relax. Rosetta approached the prince's chambers and greeted Richard, who was guarding the chambers. The girl wanted to go in, but turned around to face the man who spoke to her. The blushing man with a smile on his face wished the girl a good day. Surprised that Richard had not been like this in his past life, the girl opened the door to the prince's chambers. Entering inside, the girl, as usual, greeted the prince with a smile. The prince, not changing his habits, silently greeted the girl with his gaze. The girl noted out loud that the room was a little messy today, and thought that he looked even better with his hair down. Suddenly, the prince said that something was bothering the magician, and that was why he came to check the reaction to the poison. Pretending that she didn't know anything, the girl asked with a smile what the result was. Armand gloomily said that those flowers were in a vase, but without finishing the sentence, he fell silent. Looking up, he demanded the girl tell him. The man stood up abruptly and walked quickly closer. Bending over Rosetta, he demandingly asked if she had met the priest and what he had told her. Nervous about his reaction, the girl said that she had met him, and he told her that she was stronger than she looked, and therefore would live a long time. Holding his chin, the man chuckled darkly, asking how long it was, a few days. Smiling, the girl thought that he didn't even know how much longer. Wanting to stop the questions, Rosetta said that she would clean the rooms. The girl didn't have time to take a step before she was stopped by the prince, who told her not to touch anything. The girl thought that the prince wanted to rest, but he dispelled her assumptions, saying that he did not want to force her to work. Rosetta, not understanding what was happening, reminded Armand that she was a servant. The embarrassed prince looked angrily at the girl, who did not want to calmly obey him. The prince turned away, sighing angrily that he didn't want her to faint from overexertion. The girl quietly wiped away her tears of emotion. Drinking the poison was good for her. Lifting the hem of her skirt and removing the broom from her hip, the girl said that she was his personal servant. Rosetta, with a languid look and a quiet voice, asked him not to take away her joy, because she served him with all her heart. Looking at the prince who turned to face her, she was indignant that if she didn't clean here, she wouldn't be able to see him. The man, having resigned himself, allows Rosetta to do as she wants. Two women approach the prince's chambers. A woman's hand confidently knocks on the door of the prince's chambers. The voice of a servant is heard, introducing the woman who has come to the prince, Madame Roblanc, asking for an audience. Armand turns to the door, telling them to wait for him in the living room. However, the door swings open, and Madame Roblanc runs into the room with an unhappy face. Running up to the prince, he takes his hands in his own. The prince looks at the woman and asks in a soft voice what brought her Betty here. With tears in her eyes, the woman cries out that the reason is yesterday's events. Continuing to hold her hands, the prince tells the woman to calm down and sit down because he is healthy. A woman sits on a chair, her head sadly down, and there is an empty vase on the table opposite her. The woman looks up, her gaze becoming surprised. Putting her hand to her chest, she tells the prince that she could have brought him fresh flowers, but he will leave the dried ones. Hearing this, Rosetta grinned. The dear woman turned out to be not Lady Runiella at all, but Madame Roblin. Now everything became clear to the girl, because it was Madame Roblin who was the nanny who raised Armand. It is quite natural to observe her care for the prince, and to see tenderness in his attitude towards her, as it was in his past life. Valerian nervously asked if the nanny remembered through whom she had delivered the flowers that day. Madame Roblin said that she gave them to a maid. Armand asked if it was Countess Milliam. Madame Roblin confirmed this, saying that she could not refuse her request. Madame was not a criminal, she had no reason to kill, but the Countess was a henchman of the current Empress. Now Rosetta understood why there was no evidence anywhere. Having said that she should not remain so long in the chambers of a grown man, the woman left, Rosetta going with her. Smiling, Madame asked if Rosetta was the new maid, and the girl confirmed that she was. The woman laughed, saying that she wondered how long she would last, and Rosetta laughed back, telling her not to worry, as serving the prince was a joy for her. The woman was delighted and asked her for a special favor, afraid to ask others because of the rumors that might spread. Clenching her hand into a fist, Rosetta declared that she would do anything for the prince. The woman asked to serve the prince at night, which left Rosetta dumbfounded. The girl refused and said that she could not fulfill such a request. Madame laughed and apologized, saying that she had meant something completely different, that she wanted the prince to be served if necessary. Only now did Rosetta understand the meaning of what was said and imagined Armand sleeping. The girl agreed, but doubted that the prince would like this idea. Laughing again, Madame suggested that in that case they refer to her, then the prince simply would not be able to object. Getting into the carriage, the woman said that she was very glad that Armand had such a good girl next to him. Rosetta walks down the corridor and is called again. The girl who turned around sees the head maid, who is interested in what Rosetta was talking about with Madame. Smiling, the girl speaks about Madame's request. The woman coughs and says that Rosetta visits the adult man's bedroom too often, and she is afraid that this will cause unnecessary talk. Rosetta continues to smile, to which the woman emotionlessly warns Rosetta not to get close to the prince and not to go to him at a late hour if she values her life. While carrying firewood for the fireplace, the girl thinks that she has already been reborn 4 times. However, for the first time she noticed that the senior maid was so unpleasant. Rosetta reached the prince's chambers and met a guard fast asleep near the door. She said with displeasure that she saw how hard he worked. Hearing the girl's voice, the man woke up, was surprised to see Rosetta, and asked what she was doing there at such a time. The girl nods at the firewood in her hands and talks about the fireplace. The guy says that the prince asked not to let anyone in at night, but he thinks that Rosetta is an exception. Rosetta is silent and smiles. The guy clearly doesn't know what common sense is. Rosetta, come into the chambers. She doesn't like this guy. He's negligent in his duties and not vigilant enough. Rosetta leaned over the sleeping prince, thinking that he slept like an angel, and wished that he would be like that in life. Continuing to watch, Rosetta did not come to life when the prince suddenly opened his eyes. The smile froze on the girl's face. She had absolutely no idea what to say. The girl began to smear her hands in front of her, saying that it was simple. But before she could continue, the prince's strong hands grabbed her wrists. The next moment, Rosetta found herself lying on the bed, with Armand leaning on her hands above her. Nervous in this situation, Rosetta asked for forgiveness, saying that the prince had misunderstood her. Looking at the man carefully, the girl noticed his strange look, and the thought came to her mind that perhaps the prince suffered from sleepwalking. But before finding out everything, she decided to first get out of this situation. The girl moved awkwardly, trying to slip under the prince's body, but she realized something. She nervously realized that something was sticking out. Getting even more nervous, the girl asked His Highness to wake up, but it did not help. Leaning even lower, the prince pressed a kiss to her lips. Realizing that she wouldn't be able to get through to him like that, the girl kicked him in the stomach with all her might. Grabbing his wrist, she flipped their bodies over. Now she was on top, holding his body down. The man's face was angry, his lips twisted into a grin. The girl understood that this was not like him, and now he was behaving like an animal. Now Rosetta realized that the rumors about his madness were not due to his character, but to this disease. The girl raised her hand, wondering if he behaved like that with other maids, but quickly pulled herself back. After apologizing, the girl placed her palm on the prince's forehead and used magic. The prince, who had come to his senses, cleared his throat, realizing what was happening. Looking at the girl, he asked what she was doing here. The hand lowered the cup into the saucer, and a ringing sound was heard. The prince offered the girl a soothing tea. Rosetta thanked the prince. Rosetta continued to be in shock, now because the prince himself had brewed her tea. The upset girl admitted that she had come there not just like that, but at the request of Madame Roblant. Armand asked her to tell him what she had just seen. The girl spoke, listing. There was no reaction to her words. He demonstrated great strength, immediately attacked her. Clenching his fists on the table, Armand asked that apparently he was like an animal that followed only its instincts. The prince looked away, realizing that he had once again caused a disturbance while he was sleeping, and the girl realized that this was not the first time. Armand looked at the girl and apologized for what happened. Rosetta replied that she was not hurt at all. Armand asked the girl how she managed to deal with him if he used considerable force. Rosetta smiled and reminded that she had already said that she was very strong, to which Armand asked her to stop joking. Putting down the cup, Rosetta put her hand on his elbow, offering to arm wrestle if he didn't believe her. Armand smiled cheerfully for the first time that evening. He placed his hand on the table, clasping her hand with his own, and advised her not to cry after she had suggested it herself. Smiling, the prince thought that she would see the result and would no longer be able to speak like that. He told her to start, but she had already started, their hands tensing, trying to overcome their opponent. The prince was amazed, looking at their hands. He could not understand where the girl got so much strength from. Rosetta laughed, saying that she was born that way, and teasingly asked the prince if he could do it again. The next second, the prince watched in shock as his hand, under the girl's force, fell onto the table. Armand continued to look at their hands. He could not speak. Removing her hand from his, she asked permission to ask him a question since she had won. Pointing at herself, Rosetta asked if he was going to kick her out too. The prince was silent. Rosetta reminded him that she had not yet asked him to fulfill her wish today. According to their agreement, he had to fulfill 1 wish per day. Taking his hand in hers, she voiced her wish for today not to fire her. The prince sighed, lowered his head and asked if she was afraid of him. The girl noticed that he was not acting this way on purpose. Armand asked how she could be sure of this. Continuing to hold his hand, the girl said that he was a good man and that she wanted to protect him. Armand was silent. He was thinking about his madness, which he had been suffering from for 3 years already, and which even the priest could not cure. If the first prince finds out about this, it will give him a reason to attack. And because of this, not a single maid who learned his secret survived. However, Rosetta has already saved him twice. She is a special servant. Looking at the prince, Rosetta listened to how the prince was offering her to move in with him, closer to the room next to him. With his arms folded across his chest, the prince asked Rosetta to serve him at night. The prince thought that it would be strange to call her special. It would be more correct to call her unusual. Standing in front of the beautiful doors, Rosetta called out to Valerian, saying that she had arrived. The man immediately opened the door, smiling happily and surprised that the girl had come to him herself. And already from the doorway, I heard the question about what she was doing in this guy's room at night. Rosetta was surprised by such an address to the prince, asking the reason for such a dismissive attitude. Putting his arms around her shoulders, Valerian asked her to tell him that these were all empty rumors and that she had not been in his room last night. The girl was silent, looking at the man's hands, which were squeezing her with force. Rosetta was surprised and asked why he was so angry, to which she received the answer that according to rumors, she shared a bed with the prince yesterday. The angry girl screamed. She was angry at the one who spread this nonsense. At this time, yesterday's night shuddered on the street. Valerian breathed a sigh of relief and said that he knew it was all a lie. Pointing his fingers into the room, he offered to make her some coffee. While devouring the pancakes, Rosetta said that after them, everything else seemed bland. Putting a piece in her mouth, Rosetta was surprised at how nice and calm it was in the palace. Rosetta suggested that Valerian tell about his past lives, and that was all he was waiting for. When she finished, the girl asked the man what he thought about it. Gloomy Valerian said that he didn't like that she came back so many times because of some guy. Looking at her friend, Rosetta wondered why in this life Valerian really disliked Armand. Suddenly, the man stood up and walked up to the girl, wiping the cream off her face with his finger, and saying that he was surprised how she, being so sloppy, managed to be a servant. He licked the cream off his finger with his tongue. Leaning on her hand, Rosetta stood up from the table, smiling slyly, took Valerian's hand and said that the remains should be licked to the end. Rosetta, looking into Valerian's eyes, licked the remains of the cream from his finger. The man was surprised when his little sister managed to become such a luxurious lady, shouting at her, angry at her behavior. But then he asked with tears if she just wanted to work in his laboratory. The girl silently refused, but looking at his sad face, she began to doubt. But it was not in vain that she returned more than once. Lowering her hands to her chest and unbuttoning her dress, Rosetta said that if he wanted to please her, he could fulfill her request. Valerian stared at what was happening, shocked and unable to understand anything. Showing the scroll that she took out of her bodice, she asked to make a device that could detect all the poisons from this scroll. The man continued to look at the girl, who said that such a device, of course, exists, but it does not detect all poisons. Valerian closed his eyes, trying to calm down. Without opening his eyes, he asked if the prince needed this device and that he did not like the prince. The girl was upset, but the man continued that he would, of course, help her. But all this is only so that she does not expose herself to danger. The girl, thanking him for his help, looked at her friend with a warm smile. Having hugged her friend, she hurried away, saying goodbye that she was moving into the chambers next to the prince and that she needed to move her things there. Watching the girl go, he opened his mouth and thought about where she was moving to. Turning away from the door, he remarked out loud that he had never been so jealous before. Rosetta, smiling, looked around the room. She dealt with it quickly since she had few things. Interrupting her thoughts, Melanie ran towards her. The girl was glad that she was there and that she was looking for her. Without thinking, Melanie asked if it was true that Rosetta had slept with the prince last night, and the indignant Rosetta screamed that it was certainly not true. To clarify once again, the girl asked that Rock's words about Rosetta spending the whole night in the prince's bedroom were a lie. Rosie, crossing her arms, said that she was just cleaning up and fell asleep on the sofa. Melanie sighed, having calmed down, because she had already managed to imagine all sorts of things. But remembering, she asked why then Rosetta was moving to the neighboring chambers. The girl reminded Melanie that she was a personal servant and should always be nearby. Hearing the word next to her, Melanie laughed slyly. Armand walked into the chambers and heard Melanie asking if the prince was the man Rosie wanted to get close to. Interested in the conversation, he listened and heard Rosetta confirm that it was him. His eyes widened when Melanie asked Rosetta if she loved him. Embarrassed, Rosetta said that even if she answered Melanie no, he would not believe her. Armand looked at the girls who were laughing and talking to each other. One question completely captured his attention. Did Rosetta love him? Looking at the girl leaving, he wondered if this meant that she had feelings for him all this time. The three maids looked menacingly at the man, ready to tear him to pieces. A gloomy Richard orders to go even lower. Standing with one foot on Roy's back, he forces him to bend over even lower. The boy, in tears, asks Rosetta for forgiveness. But then Richard's foot presses harder on his back, telling the guy to address the girl as you. The guy apologizes again. Rosetta asks Richard not to do this, because the guy could seem simple. However, Richard says that he didn't like the guy before, and finally there was a reason to deal with him. Rosetta asks him to simply not spread such rumors anymore. Melanie indignantly asks Rosetta if she thinks this is enough, but the girl simply does not want rumors. Richard is amazed by her generosity. Rosetta explains it by the fact that the guy has been looking tired lately, and that she saw him pecking at his post. A stunned Richard repeats once again that the guy was pecking at his post. Grabbing the guy by the collar, he dragged him away, saying that they needed to talk separately. After thinking, Rosetta said that perhaps she shouldn't have said the last thing. The prince's chambers, the light dissolves into the room, filling the room with lightness and freshness. Armand almost completely covered his face with a book. Can you see his eyes that are following the girl? Rosetta cleans her room as usual, dusting, but feels that something is wrong. Turning sharply towards the prince, he notices how sharply his head turned away. The prince completely covers his head with the book, pretending that he was not looking in her direction at all. Rosetta does not understand why Armand is behaving so strangely and asks the prince if she did something wrong. Still reading the book, the prince says that everything is fine and tells her not to pay attention. When Rosetta asks if he feels well, since his face is red, he abruptly repeats that he already said that he is fine. The girl leans towards the prince's face and asks him to look at her. The girl looks at the prince's flushed face, who thinks that she doesn't even know that he overheard her conversation. Remembering that conversation, he wonders if this was the reason for her strange behavior. This girl just liked him. However, why does he feel so uneasy when he looks into her eyes? Looking at Armand, Rosetta can't wait for a reaction. Leaning towards the prince every time, she says that she has finished cleaning and asks him to fulfill her wish. The prince looks up at the girl and agrees. Folding her hands, Rosetta asks the prince to call her by name. Looking at the surprised Armand, she explains that he never called her that. When the prince asked why by name, she answered that when a special person calls you by name, your mood immediately improves. Repeating to himself her words about a special person, he understands that she does not even hide her feelings. With a sigh, he agrees to call her by name whenever he needs anything. Rosetta was upset. She thought that he would not fulfill this wish. Armand suddenly asks what the priest told her today. Rosetta says, embarrassed, that according to the priest, she is healthy and will live another 100 years. The prince nods and allows the girl to go if she has done everything. Rosetta agrees, upset. The door to the prince's chambers quietly closes behind the departing girl. Sighing, Armand remembers Rosetta's words that she is healthy and will live for 100 years. Rosetta walks down the corridor, alarmed by the prince's strange behavior today. She thinks that something unexpected might happen. The head maid calls the girls again. She tells her to follow her. Countess Milliam is looking for the girl. A woman who is a supporter of the current empress. Why did she need Rosetta? Entering the countess's chambers, Rosetta sees a woman sitting in a chair and greets her. A beautiful woman dressed all in black looks at Rosetta and asks if she is the prince's most personal servant. Looking down, the girl quietly and modestly confirmed that she was the prince's personal servant and her name was Rosetta. The woman narrowed her eyes and grinned. She found it unusual that the prince allowed a servant so close to him. Looking at the girl, who continued to stand modestly and motionless, she summed up by saying that Rosetta was quite pretty. Irritated, Rosetta thought that at such moments it was important to pretend that she didn't understand anything, and smiling, she thanked the woman. The woman continued the interrogation, asking whether the girl had really spent the night in the prince's room. Rosetta, continuing to look modest, replied that, on Madame Roblin's orders, she had changed the wood in the fireplace and left immediately. The countess listened to the girl's answer and smiled even more. Laughing, she said she had no doubt that this was how it happened. After which, continuing to smile lightly, she asked if the girl had seen anything suspicious. After a pause, she asked if she had seen something in the prince's room the previous night. The women looked at each other silently, trying to understand what the other was thinking. Rosetta smiled darkly, wondering whether the countess was checking her or not. Looking at the woman, dismissing this guess, the countess can only know what Maria's senior maid told her. Rosetta remained silent, thinking that the woman, knowing about the death of the servants, knew that at night the prince became very cruel. Having thought about this, the girl asked about the suspicious thing and seemed to think about it. Having decided what not to talk about, she began to say that the prince was sleeping so soundly that he could not even be heard, which made Rosetta afraid for his health. The woman smiled and began to talk about how and when Rosetta had arrived, after which she paused. After a pause, she continued talking about how the girl's tongue could turn to lie so brazenly. Rosetta remained silent, waiting to see what would happen next. Bowing her head and smiling, the woman asked the girl if she knew that she could not tolerate those who were dishonest with her, after which she gave a short order to cut out Rosetta's tongue. At that moment, the door to the countess's room opened and men in black cloaks entered. Grabbing Rosetta, they twisted her arm behind her back, causing the girl to grunt in pain. The men held the girl's hands behind her back, directed her head down, not allowing her to turn back. Rosetta thought that she would have laid them out with one blow. However, the presence of a woman sitting in the chair changed everything. If Rosetta showed her abilities, she would be suspected. Rosetta decided to try a different tactic and shouted that she couldn't and that what she had been told was true. The man holding Rosetta told her to struggle and asked if these would be her last words while her tongue was still in place. Rosetta closed her eyes, forcing herself to calm down. The girl was wondering what to choose, to use force and run away, or to sacrifice her tongue and keep the prince's secret. After thinking for a bit, the girl chose the second option, deciding that although it would hurt, Valerian could heal her afterwards. The lowered head and quiet voice of a girl who did not dare to resist punishment, but did not admit that she knew anything. Smiling maliciously, the man asked if she would continue chatting and told her to stand still so that he could finish everything quickly. Looking resolutely into the man's eyes, the girl thought that for the sake of the prince, she could endure the pain. However, everything was interrupted by a male voice asking what was going on and what kind of entertainment was going on here. Rosetta looked in shock at the man who entered the room. Folding his arms across his chest and smiling, he asked why they had captured the poor servant, Grehan Isabet von Ragnar. The dagger that was previously in the man's hands flew to the floor. Everyone in the room bowed deeply to greet His Majesty. Without looking up, the Countess asked what brought His Highness here. Without changing his position, the prince said that he had come to visit his mother and heard screams. He could not leave when they were treating the beautiful girl like that. Pointing with his palm at the girl who continued to sit, he said that he too was interested in this poor servant. The Countess immediately replied that what was happening was not worth His Highness's attention. The girl was only the prince's servant. The man began to move, saying that this was even better. He didn't know that Armand was served by such a girl. He leaned towards the girl and, lifting her chin with his finger, whispered to her to follow him. The girl chuckled, feeling how tightly the prince's hand was squeezing her shoulder. As she watched the man leave, the girl thought that Grehan was the most disgusting person she had ever met. In his past life, he laughed at her and said that it was not appropriate for girls to hold a sword in their hands. When he learned about her abilities, he tried to hire her. The girl continued to follow the prince through the garden, thinking that it was good that her tongue had not been cut out, but still did not want to get involved with the prince. The man stopped, turned over his shoulder and asked the cutie's name with a smile. The girl thought that the prince had gone completely crazy, but she still named him. The man turned to the girl and asked if Rosetta understood that he had pulled her out of a dangerous situation. He extended his palm to the girl, asking her to thank him for this, Rosetta asked again in bewilderment. Bending down, the man asked why she was pretending not to understand anything. He put his hand on the girl's cheek, clarifying that she should work with her body. The man was the first prince of the Ragnar Empire and Armant's rival for the throne, Grehan Ishabet von Ragnar. But if Armant, being a prince, was brought up and trained in severity, Grehan was raised by Countess Mortmar, since the boy had imperial blood in his veins, and the prince grew up in such conditions. Moving even closer to the girl, he reminded her once again what he wanted. The prince's palm fell on the girl's waist, pulling her even closer. The prince was notorious for his bad behavior. Grehan threw his arm over the girl's shoulder and moved closer to her ear. Clenching her hand into a fist, Rosetta tried to calm down, dreaming of just one time. The girl considered it necessary to teach this bastard a lesson at least once. The man pressed the girl's back against the tree more and more tightly. Rosetta stood, thinking over her plan, starting with the blow to the leg. Suddenly a male voice was heard, saying that he had been wondering where the girl had gone. Armant stood in front of them, menacingly asking what she was doing here. The girl, pinned to the tree by Grehan, looked at Armant in fear. He was here. The man extended his hand forward and demanded that Rosetta come to him. The girl was shocked. The prince just called her by name. Rosetta looked at Armant, admiring his sensitivity. Pushing Grehan away, the girl happily agreed and ran to Armant. The girl stood behind Armant, while Grehan rubbed his chest and wondered where Rosetta got so much strength from. Armant asked menacingly what Grehan was doing here with his servant. In response, the man only laughed. Grinning, Grehan was surprised that Armant had come all this way for some servant girl. Looking at the man and the girl peeking out from behind his back, he mockingly asked why he didn't look for a bride for himself instead of taking care of such scum. After which he suggested that Armant prove himself to his mother, after which she might find him a good bride. Rosetta thought that this was true, because while the emperor was unwell, the right to choose a bride for the prince belonged to the empress. It is for this reason that Armant is in no hurry to get engaged, Rosetta thought, looking at the man. In response to Grehan's suggestion, Armant smiled and advised him to worry about himself. He folded his arms across his chest, feeling sorry for his bride, who would have to keep an eye on the prince who was constantly pestering young ladies. After this, he voiced his guess that Grehan was simply unhappy with the low status of his bride. Hearing this, Grehan became very angry, cursing Armant silently, whom he had never liked. A palace balcony, late evening, a little boy with blonde hair looking down. The boy happily thinks that he has finally been recognized as a prince, allowed to live in the palace, and now the whole country is at his feet. His happy thoughts were interrupted by a female voice, saying that a new prince had appeared in the palace. Two maids passing through the castle courtyard passed under the balcony, discussing the new Prince Armant of imperial blood, who someone could not treat properly. The child, hearing this, clenched his fist, trying to cope with his emotions and calm down. At first, everything was fine. Armant was younger, and Grehan knew that the boy had no answer to the bullying. But at some point, everything changed. People started comparing them. Everything was compared, from academic achievements to swordsmanship. In response, Grehan tried to harass him or beat him, but Armant only ignored him. Grehan ran into Armant's room, shouting and indignant that he dared to complain to his father about the bullying. Armant, without looking up from reading the book, objected he did not tell anyone anything. Slamming the book shut and looking up, he added that despite his silence, the people around him could see everything. Grehan cursed silently, because if he had known that this would happen, he would have gotten rid of all the evidence. The boy came to see his mother, complaining, but she told him to be patient and humble, otherwise he would never become taller than Armant. Kneeling before his mother on the throne, the boy forever filled with these words. From that moment until now, Grehan tried to contain his emotions. But now everything had changed. The man closed his eyes and lowered his head, calling Armant by name. Thinking that he would not become emperor while Armant was alive, he rushed at the prince, shouting that he was a bastard. Armant smiled indulgently. He knew he could easily dodge it, but if Grehan hit him hard, it could be a good lever of pressure. Both men froze. Something happened that neither of them were prepared for. Rosetta, having received a blow, fell to the ground. The girl, unconscious, lay on the ground. A scream rang out over the park. A man was calling her by name. Armant looked at the lying girl. His heart was beating madly. He desperately screamed her name, wanting to hear an answer. Grehan, standing to the side, watched what was happening and hoped that the girl had not died, because if they found out about it, there would be consequences. The man took a few small steps in confusion. The man turned around and ran away, with Armand shouting after him, calling him by name. Armand watched Graham leave, promising that he would not get away with what happened. Armand clutched his head and told himself to calm down and concentrate. First, he had to help Rosetta. The man cursed, looking at the girl. Why was she always trying to protect him? The girl opened one eye slightly and, looking around, asked if Graham had left. The man was shocked, his eyes wide open and his mouth slightly open. He didn't expect this. Rosetta, sitting on his lap, innocently asked if the prince liked her little scene, if she had managed to act it convincingly. Armand could only squeeze out one question. Why, Rosetta, without answering it, thought that someone like Graham could not harm her. Armand stood in front of the girl, who continued to sit on her knees, asking once again why she was putting herself in danger. Rosetta bowed her head, saying that of course it was necessary. Standing up and looking the prince intently in the face, she said that she simply wanted to protect him. The prince looked sadly at the girl, realizing what was said. Suddenly, the man sharply tilted his head towards the girl and looked intently into her eyes. At that moment, the girl thought that Armand was angry, perhaps shocked that a woman had been hit in front of him. In her thoughts about how Armand couldn't imagine her as a swordsman, she missed the moment when the prince extended his hand to her. The next moment, the girl could only indignantly call out to His Highness. The man took the girl in his arms. Without paying attention, he ordered her not to move and explained that he was taking her to the priest. Without listening to the girl, who indignantly said that she could walk on her own, that she was not even bleeding, he told her to be quiet. He himself would carry her to the temple. Rosetta was shocked by the prince's actions. She did not know what to say to convince him. He carried her right there in front of everyone. He completely lost all shame, the girl decided in the end. Trying to somehow improve the situation, she said that she was ashamed to appear in the temple in such a state and suggested calling the priest who had come to his chambers earlier. The prince agreed, told her not to move and scolded her, saying that despite feeling unwell, she continued to chatter. Two men stand near the chambers, Prince Armand and Knight Richard. Breaking the silence, Richard asked why Armand was standing here instead of inside with the wounded lady Rosetta. Armand replied that Rosetta did not want anyone to see her while the priest was helping her. Richard chuckled knowingly and thought, smiling, that His Highness was being very gentle with Rosetta. There was silence in the corridor again. Each man was thinking about something of his own. Armand thought that he should admit it honestly to himself. Looking at this girl, he feels like something will happen to him if he stays with her for too long. Every time he sees her, his face turns red and his heart beats faster. Moreover, he feels like he wants to hug the girl tightly and wants to spend more time with her. The man smiled tenderly as he thought about this. He put his hand on his head and laughed briefly at his thoughts, causing Richard to turn in his direction. Not noticing Richard's surprise, he asked himself out loud whether he had gone crazy after all. Meanwhile, Rosetta asked forgiveness for the deception of the priest, who expected him to treat the prince. The priest generously replied that everything was fine. He considers it an honor to know that she thinks so highly of him. Looking at the man, Rosetta thought that Theodore was a very talented priest. However, at this time the man's talent is again not recognized because he is not in high esteem with the archbishop. All this is very good for the prince. The girl smiled at Theodore and confessed in secret that His Highness wanted to make him his personal physician. The man was amazed by such a secret. All he could say was an uncertain question, really. Rosetta thought that since Theodore was not on the side of the archbishop, it meant that he was not on the side of the empress. Sitting in bed and looking at the priest, she thought that all this allowed her and Armand to lure him to their side. Embarrassed by the fact that he had become excited and forgotten about the girl's treatment, he asked where her wound was. Rosetta hastened to reassure him, saying that it was fine. The man looked at the girl in confusion, forcing Rosetta to say that His Highness had simply overreacted. Gently touching her neck, she said that she only had a scratch and asked the man to deal with it quickly. Armand turned at the sound of the door opening. Two people, Rosetta and Theodore, walked out of the chambers with a calm step. Arms folded across his chest, Armand asked if they were finished and immediately received an answer from Rosetta that she was fine. Turning his gaze to the priest, he thanked him for his prompt arrival at the palace. A joyful Theodore folded his fingers and thanked her, saying that it was an honor for him. The girl froze at the prince's next phrase because Armand asked Theodore about Rosetta drinking the deadly poison setter, but after so much time she was still alive. Reacting immediately, Rosetta indignantly called out to the prince. The men turned towards the girl, surprised by her behavior. Rosetta froze. She shouted without thinking because she almost got into trouble. Trying to play up her behavior, she said that she had urgent business with the prince. Rosetta quickly approached the prince, after which she stood on her toes and, covering her mouth with her hand, whispered something in his ear. There is a moment's pause, after which Armand asks the confused and bewildered Father Theodore to leave them. Having thanked His Highness, Theodore quickly leaves, leaving only Rosetta and the prince in the corridor. In absolute silence, Armand heads to his quarters, Rosetta following him. Armand suddenly stopped and, looking over his shoulder, asked the girl if she would come to the chambers today. Rosetta looked surprised. Why did she suddenly need to come there? Armand asked the question again, clarifying what she had just meant. Explaining her answer, Rosetta recalled his words that the attack appears on days when he worries a lot. The prince looked down and replied that he was not the one who should worry. He was fine, and she should worry about herself. Two pairs of legs stand pressed against each other, male and female. Rosetta, pressed against the wall, indignantly calls out to His Highness, trying to push him away and orders him to wait. Taking her hand in his, Armand pulled her closer to his lips. Looking at what is happening, Rosetta understands that everything is bad. The man runs his thumb over his lips, not taking his eyes off her. Watching her reaction, the prince has gone crazy. Armand, in his normal state, is far more elegant than any aristocrat Rosetta had ever met. But now, hugging her and pulling her towards him, he looks more like an animal than a human. Rosetta was displeased with how shamelessly he showed his desires. The couple continued to struggle. He tried to pull her towards him, she pushed him away. Trying to reach the prince's consciousness, Rosetta looked into his eyes and said that this was not right. The girl held the prince's violently trembling hands by the wrists. Rosetta reasoned that the archbishop had said that there was no cure for the disease, but being on the side of the first prince, he could have lied. It is quite possible that Armand was simply cursed and that Valerian would not be able to do anything about this curse, which turned the prince into an animal. The prince tore himself away from Rosetta's hands, and the girl began to swear indignantly again. The man who jumped back, his shirt unbuttoned, carefully squatted down, leaning on both hands. Looking at the man, the girl wondered whether he did it because she was holding him too tightly or not. The girl noticed the man's gaze. It strongly reminded her of something. After thinking, the girl remembered her cat Velo and his look before each bath. Could it be that Armand had really turned into a beast? Smiling at her thoughts, Rosetta reminded herself that the prince was not Valo. The girl looked at the man, who was clenching his teeth, and called out again. Taking a feather duster in her hands and waving it from side to side, she told the prince to look at what she had in her hands. The girl claimed that it was very funny. Moving the stick to the sides, the feathers rustled cheerfully on the floor. The girl continued to ask the man what was in her hands. The prince's gaze followed the moving feathers. The pupil on the man's face narrowed. The girl offered the man to play. The man growled like a wild animal, not taking his eyes off the feathers. The girl looking at this picture stretched her lips into a satisfied smile. The girl playfully moved the stick to the other side, and the man immediately jumped after her. The man jumped excitedly, watching every movement of the broom. The girl continued to play. She couldn't believe her eyes. Prince Armand really did act like a cat. Moreover, looking at what was happening, she found it much more fun than she expected. The girl extended her hand towards the prince. The man, taking advantage of the fact that Rosetta had lost her vigilance, rushed at her, knocking her off her feet. He laid his entire weight on the girl, not allowing her to move. Lying on the cold floor and crushed by the man's body, Rosetta told him to wait, but the prince did not react to the girl's words. Grabbing the prince by the shirt, she yanked him and screamed with all her might, telling him to stop, because she said no. The man who jumped back froze like a frightened cat, looking at the girl in confusion. Freed, Rosetta rose from the floor and moved forward. Turning over her shoulder, she gave the order to the man sitting on the floor in a word to the bed because she was in charge today. In the room filled with silence, only the logs in the fireplace crackled, burning in a strong and bright fire. Lying on top of the man and pinning him to the bed, the girl firmly said that she would teach the man the meaning of the word no. As Rosetta looked at the growling man, she thought that she had noticed something while training the cat Velo. The girl covered the man's mouth with her hand, reminding him that this should not be done, that in order to teach the beast something, one must be patient. The couple lay on the bed, not opening their eyes to each other, his hand reaching for her waist, her hands resting on his shoulders. Intercepting the prince's hand, Rosetta once again reminded him of the prohibition. She reminded the prince over and over again, yawning to the point of tears. Until finally they both fell into a restless sleep. The girl continued to say no in her sleep. The dawn was shining brightly in the sky. The whole world began to awaken. The castle also woke up. People hurried to their workplaces, chatting cheerfully. Richard approached the prince's chambers and knocked, asking if His Highness was up and could enter. Armand woke up from the noise outside the door and, clutching his aching head, thought that this had happened to him again today, and at the same time allowed Rich to enter. Looking at the blanket covering his body, he thought that it was sticking out in a strange way. Lifting up, he dressed. He looked in shock at Rosetta. Sleeping with her hands folded on his bare chest, Richard announced that he was entering. The man frantically thought about what was happening. Continuing to watch the girl sleeping sweetly on his body, he wondered what she was doing here. The door to the chambers began to open, causing the heart to beat wildly. Richard looked at the prince's bed, surprised that he had not yet gotten up. Worried about Armand, I asked if everything was okay. The man stirred under the blanket and said he just didn't feel well. Concerned, Richard suggested sending for a priest. However, Armand's voice under the blanket objected, saying that he wasn't that bad and didn't need to call anyone. Armand, lying under the blanket, held the blanket with one hand and covered the sleeping girl's head with the other. Rosetta woke up, opening one eye and moaning sleepily. Opposite her lay the beautiful Armand with his shirt unbuttoned, not covering his body in any way. Rosetta froze in shock, realizing the reality of what was happening and remembering what had happened earlier. Richard continued to stare in confusion at the strange movements taking place under the blanket. While healing the girl's mouth, he answered another question from Richard about his health, saying that he was fine and was just stretching. Rosetta, with her mouth covered by the prince's hand, thought she had gone crazy, listening to Richard, surprised by his stretching under the blanket. Meanwhile, Armand, without letting go of his hand, ordered Richard not to pay attention and say what he wanted. Rosetta continued to be surprised at how she managed to fall asleep in the prince's bed. Lying close together, the man and woman began to listen to Richard, who was ready to report. Watching how the muscles of Armand's neck moved and listening to Richard's story about how a stranger had been spotted during the night and an investigation had been conducted, the girl thought she was going crazy. The man was afraid of only one thing: Rosetta should not hear his heartbeat. The rational part of the man wanted to move away, while the other wanted to be even closer. He looked at the girl and thought that if it had been another servant in her place, he would have thrown her out and punished her long ago. But for some reason, he couldn't do that to her. Up until this point, everything was completely different. Before that, looking at the girl, he thought that he felt guilty in front of her. But now he feels an inexplicable feeling boiling in his body. The way his body tenses in her presence against his will can't be explained by guilt alone. He needs to admit it to himself. He, Prince Armand, simply likes this strange servant Rosetta. Strange movement began again under the blanket. Richard, holding a parchment in his hands, called out to the prince in embarrassment. Armand closed his eyes. Trying to calm down, he told Richard again that he was not feeling well. From the large ball under the blanket came Armand's voice, asking how much longer Richard was going to torture him. Upset, Richard literally cried and asked for forgiveness. Armand, under the blanket, felt as if his head was in a fog. Richard finally said that he thought it was time for him to take his leave. Rosetta looked at the dissatisfied Armand. The door closed behind Richard as he left. Armand immediately threw off the blanket, sharply moving away from the girl. Rosetta asked in bewilderment why he was angry at poor Sir Richard. When the prince shouted at her, asking what she was doing there, the girl put her finger to her lips, asking her to be quieter. After which she explained that everything was not at all as one might think. She was simply helping His Highness cope with his illness at night, but it so happened that she fell asleep. The man was surprised by the girl's words and asked again. He was surprised that the girl had managed. Rosetta told him that she had simply spoken, and His Highness gradually calmed down. The girl turned away and smiled. Everything she did looked more like training. The shocked Armand wondered whether his feelings for Rosetta had influenced what had happened, because no matter how many priests tried to deal with him, no one succeeded. Rosetta turned to the prince who had spoken to her. He thanked the girl and said that all this happened only because of her. The couple sat on the bed and looked into each other's eyes. Rosetta immediately rebelled against her merit. Rosetta said that she just wanted to help him, to which Armand noted that it must have been difficult. Rosetta agreed with the prince's assumption and, coughing into her fist, added that he was very assertive. Armand closed his eyes and replied that he knew that he became stronger at such moments. The two were silent and thought about their own things, Rosetta, about the fact that he was confident in himself, although not just like that, Armand, about the fact that he always knew that she was stronger than most men. Distracting the girl from her thoughts, Armand reminded her that today Rosetta wanted him to fulfill one of her wishes. The girl immediately lowered her legs from the bed and prepared to go somewhere. With her hands clasped behind her back, the girl said that she wanted to go to the library with him. When the prince offered to give her his pass, she explained that the point was to go on a joint hike. Again, the two's thoughts were very different. The man thought that Rosetta wanted to go on a date with him, while Rosetta thought that it would be easier for her to protect him. Walking through the library with Armand, the girl said that she would look for something to read. Armand looked at the girl, who was studying everything around her with a smile. He thought darkly about how to make a good impression on her on the date. He laughed inside. He never thought that he would start to regret that he refused all women in a relationship. Armand walked towards the girl without thinking for a second. Extending his hand over the girl's head and standing very close to her, He offered to help because he knows where almost every book is. Rosetta froze, feeling Armand approach her. The girl wondered why he was so close. The maids working nearby had already gathered in a group and were discussing what they had seen and gossiping. Turning to Armand, the girl said that she was looking for a book about cat training and had already found it. Armand was surprised and asked if she had a cat. Laughing and remembering the prince's behavior at night, she said that she had recently started taking care of one cat. The girl showed the prince the book and said that she wanted to take the book with her to study it carefully. Covering her face with a book, the girl thought that there was no reason to expect the rumors to die down anytime soon and did not notice the obstacle. Having collided with someone, the girl looked up apologetically. At that very moment, having recognized the person she had encountered, Valerian, the girl, surprised by the meeting, asked what he was doing here. The man extended his hand to the girl and said that he had come to see her. Taking the man by the hand, the girl was surprised at how he knew that she would be here, to which he mysteriously replied that he had his own methods. Pulling the girl closer, the man looked at her face and asked why she was all red. The girl remembered Armand, who had helped her get the book and pressed himself against her, and replied that it was a bit hot here. Valerian looked ahead and pointed there and cheerfully asked if it was true that it wasn't because of him. Rosetta shuddered when she saw the prince looking for her, wondering if he had followed her. Hiding behind Valerian, the girl ordered him to quickly hide her. The man, enjoying what was happening, agreed. Armand shouted the girl's name loudly. However, there was no one in the corridors. No one answered his cry. The man looked down. He realized that the girl was not there. The girl, covered in a cloak, stood in the corridor of the library. Armand, who did not see her, walked away. Valerian hugged the girl around the waist, covering her with his cloak, magic flickering with its power around them. Rosetta thought about Armand. They hadn't been so close before, so why did she feel so strange? Valerian thought about the girl. Lately, she had become a stranger to him. Looking at the girl, he again noticed her long eyelashes and such blue eyes. Rosetta may have been reborn, but she is only 20 now, the age when most ladies start dating men. Looking up at the man, the girl asked if the cape was magical. Valerian confirmed and noted that she also muffled the sounds. Looking around, the girl said that they still needed to be quieter. The man asked her to take something. Rosetta turned to the man, who was holding out a red square box to her. There were 2 beautiful cufflinks in the box. Taking one in her hand, the girl noticed that the cufflinks had a magical aura. A strong spell was cast on them. Valerian ordered these cufflinks to be given to the prince. The man said that if the prince was in danger, the spell on the cufflinks would help teleport to him. Rosetta was amazed, Valerian laughed, saying that he simply thought that the girl, busy guarding the prince, would not have time to visit him. Handing the girl a pendant that looked like cufflinks, he said that it was connected to them. Rosetta looked at the pendant in her hands, hearing that a maid with an expensive piece of jewelry would attract attention, so he made the pendant look like a fake. Valerian noted that despite this, he would still suit the girl. Rosetta approved of the excellent choice of man. Rosetta looked at the jewelry, holding it in her hands. These decorations looked like decorations for a couple in love. Having said goodbye to Valerian and thanked him, she said that she was going to see His Highness. The man's cloak fluttered, and Valerian asked Rosetta to wait. The man approached the girl and took her hand. Valerian told the girl that he wanted to help her put on the pendant. Rosetta was surprised, because she could do it herself. The man doubted that the girl did this often, she agreed, giving him the pendant. Rosetta turned her back, pushing her hair aside. The man leaned over the girl, fastening the pendant around her neck. Suddenly, the man asked the girl if she had told the prince that she was not dying. Rosetta replied that she still hadn't told the prince about it, but she would one day. Valerian asked if he could help the girl in any other way, to which Rosetta asked him to go with her to buy clothes. He was free for her. Valerian promised the girl to wait for her, watching as she left. Armand is still in the library, standing discontentedly between the shelves, the maids watching him. Turning around, the man sees the girl. His gaze becomes excited. Unable to cope with his speech, Armand shouted, asking where the girl had gone without warning. Putting her hand to her cheek, the girl laughed and apologized, saying that time flies when talking with a friend. Armand continued to be indignant, asking if the girl understood how he was, but then suddenly fell silent. The man stood and remained silent, looking at the girl. Then he sighed briefly and lowered his head. Looking at the prince with concern, the girl asked if he was worried about her. Yes, the man briefly confirmed. The man looked the girl in the eyes, saying that he was worried and asked her not to leave without his permission. The girl looked at the man in surprise. She didn't expect such words from him. The girl felt like the prince was paying more attention to her today. She suggested that this was because the prince felt guilty. Remembering the cufflinks, the girl told Armand that she wanted to give him something. The man looked at the cufflinks lying on his palm. He was surprised by such a gift. The man did not understand how the girl managed to buy something so expensive with her salary. The prince asked if it was she and fell silent again. Rosetta looked at Armand, waiting for him to say more. The man couldn't believe his guess. Rosetta wants to wear matching jewelry. The girl clearly bought jewelry that would be difficult to pay for with just a maid's salary. Armand couldn't even reproach her for this and say that it wasn't necessary to try so hard. The girl, agitated by such a long silence, called out to him. Still holding the cufflinks in his palm, Armand thanked the girl. Clenching the gift in his fist, he pressed it to his chest and promised to wear them every day. Rosetta was touched, thinking that the gift was so well received. The man said that he had no gift for her. The girl reassured the man, saying that she did not expect anything in return. Armand was dissatisfied, saying that this could not be done. It was not in his nature to leave a debt unpaid. The girl was amazed, barely audibly asking if he wanted to pay back. The man noticed that the girl didn't have many clothes and decided to send for a seamstress, but Rosa waved her hand sharply, refusing. Rosetta said that her friend would buy her new clothes on the weekend. Armand immediately asked who this friend was. Rose smiled and admitted that he was a close childhood friend. The man nodded understandingly, saying that girls like to go shopping. Rosetta immediately corrected him. The girl calmly said that her friend was a man, not a woman. Armand was stunned. He did not expect such a turn of events at all. Having coped with her emotions, surprised that a man was choosing the purchases, the girl replied that her friend understood fashion better than some girls. The girl said that her friend would definitely pick out a nice outfit for her. Armand was terribly angry and immediately ordered her to cancel the meeting. Rosetta asked again in surprise. She did not understand the prince's reaction to what was said. Armand said that he would take her to the boutique himself, because there is no better gift than clothes. Rosetta couldn't understand why the prince suddenly decided this. The prince, growing gloomy, asked whether the girl doubted his taste or whether her friend's taste was better. Rosetta immediately answered that this was not so. Turning away and walking away, the man said that they would leave tomorrow afternoon. Rosetta continued to be surprised. She still couldn't understand why he needed this. A man and a girl were riding in a carriage, sitting opposite each other. They were silent and thinking about their own things. The girl thought about why this always happens in this life. After thinking about it, she finally came to terms with what was happening. Since she had gotten out, she needed to enjoy this chance. Rosetta decided that she would definitely have some fun on her day off with Valerian. While the girl was thinking about her own thoughts, looking out the window, the man kept watching her. His thoughts were like a storm. Each new thought was more and more disturbing. He thought about the fact that during the date, the girl had disappeared and that she had planned to meet another man for the weekend. Is she really so close to him that she is even willing to go into the fitting room with him? He doubted, thinking about whether there could be more than just an engaged or married couple in the dressing room. Armand couldn't believe that he was jealous of the girl. He thought about whether she had liked today's date or not, reassuring himself that he would definitely repay her tomorrow. The carriage drove on, and the man desperately continued to ask himself whether she would like him on a date, whether the girl liked him. Rosetta was relaxed and didn't need to prepare, so she had plenty of time before meeting the prince. She decided she would just arrive early and wait. However, on the way she met Melanie, who asked her to wait. Melanie approached the girl indignantly and was clearly unhappy about something. He pounced on Rosetta, asking if the girl was really going to go looking like that. Rose said that the prince just wanted to thank her for her help. Melanie screamed that it was called a date because he was going to buy clothes too. Rose said that the prince did not care what she looked like, to which Melanie stubbornly stated that she should not ruin the reputation of the imperial family, especially at a meeting with His Highness. The girl doubted, asking if this was true. Melanie grabbed Rosetta by the hand and told her to follow her quickly. Rosetta tried to stop Melanie, but she asked her not to ask any questions. Melanie said she had a lot of things in store for Rosetta. Melanie looked at the girl in a beautiful dress and thought about her own. Rosetta was always beautiful no matter what she wore. It didn't matter to her what she wore. Despite the fact that the girl was an aristocrat, she was easy to talk to, always good-natured and cheerful, dressed simply, and always found a common language with the other maids. For a person truly devoted to the throne, she was extremely strange. However, this was precisely the reason why Melanie liked her. Melanie looked with delight at how beautiful Rosetta looked. Watching the girl leave, Melanie wished her to take care of herself. Armand was already standing near the carriage, nervous and waiting for the girl. He was so nervous that he didn't see the girl and only heard how she greeted him. Looking up at the girl, he was stunned by her beauty. Armand had known before that this maid was objectively beautiful. The man stood with an impassive face, but his cheeks turned pink. When they first met, she wasn't so beautiful. But as soon as she changed her clothes and put on makeup, everything changed. Now, when he looks at the girl, he can't take his eyes off her for a second. The man wondered when the girl had become so special to him. The prince cleared his throat nervously. Rosetta immediately became worried about his health, to which he said that everything was fine. Rosetta looked in surprise at the prince, who was holding out his hand to her. Armand wanted to help Rosetta get into the carriage and ordered her to give him her hand. The girl stood without moving from her place. The prince was waiting for her. The girl could not believe that His Highness was accompanying her. In the girl's mind, it was she who should have helped him, and not the other way around. Rosetta was so embarrassed that she could not pull herself together, and her hands shook violently. The prince immediately noticed the girl's state, wondering if she was nervous because they were on a real date. The carriage set off. Rosetta asked the prince where they were going. The prince replied that they were going to a famous store to buy clothes for Rosetta. The girl was amazed and asked again where they were going. The girl knew that this was now the most popular boutique in the entire empire. It was a large, bright building with 4 floors and a huge variety of clothing. It was visited by the empress herself and the upper-class aristocracy. To the girl's great regret, this was all she knew about fashionable clothes. Rosetta tried to refuse the trip, saying that she had no need for such expensive clothes, and also that in such a boutique it was probably necessary to reserve a place. Armand noticed that sometimes Rosetta forgot who he was. The girl looked at the prince, not understanding what he meant. The carriage stopped and a girl in beautiful shoes stepped down from the steps to the ground. A man and a girl entered a beautiful store and were met by a woman who immediately greeted His Highness. Rosetta looked around with admiration. She was surprised by the beauty of this store. The girl did not notice that the owner of this place had already approached the prince. The girl introduced herself as Lydia and said that it was an honor for her that the prince himself visited her boutique and asked for whom he was buying the outfit. Not paying attention to the hostess's words and without changing his posture, he replied that the purchases were for his maid. Lydia was amazed. She wondered if the maid could afford such a thing. Rosetta was looking at the dress at this time, thinking about how good the fabric was. Meanwhile, the prince told the hostess that the price was of no importance and that she needed help choosing 10 outfits for the girl. Rosetta also complained that 10 was too many. Pretending that he hadn't heard her, he said that he would wait for her to the side while she chose. The girl was unhappy, but silently put up with what was happening. Handing the book over to the girl, Lydia said that in this catalogue she could see all the dresses in the store. Leafing through the catalogue, the girl sighed as to why the prince was so picky. Looking at pictures of dresses, the girl thought that current fashion was too glamorous for her. Of course, this boutique is the most popular now, but soon fashion will change and simpler outfits will be appreciated, after which this boutique will lose its popularity. Among all the dresses, she chose the blue one, which seemed the best to her, and she asked the owner for it. Lydia said that there was no need to rush into making a choice, that you could think about it some more, to which Rosetta said that it wasn't that she was in a hurry. Smiling, the girl admitted that she is not really interested in fashion. Lydia took the catalogue, turned away, and left discontentedly. She thought that Rosetta was very arrogant. Carrying the blue dress in her hands, she thought that if she veiledly told her to get out, then everything would work out. The girl will probably get the hint and immediately leave the boutique. Rosetta stood in the fitting room, waiting for her dress to be brought to her. Suddenly, the owner pulled the fitting room curtain. Rosetta stood with her hands over her face while Lydia addressed her. Lydia was talking about the fact that there had been some misunderstanding, while behind her, the other visitors were laughing and looking at the girl. Lydia said that someone else had ordered the dress before the girl, so she would take it back. Rosetta didn't understand why she had to talk about this in the middle of changing her clothes. Suddenly, the girl realized that this boutique was a place for aristocrats and a simple servant was not welcome here. She can't tell the crown prince about this, so she decided to insult the girl, no shame. Coming out of the fitting room, Rosetta asked if it was okay to blame customers for your mistakes. Turning to the owner, the girl said that she just wanted to buy a dress, but faced such great difficulties. And laughing, she said that other high-ranking ladies might find it even more difficult to do so. Lydia said that she understood that the girl was disappointed that she could not buy what she liked, but asked her to refrain from rudeness. She does not know Rosetta's origin and asks to behave with dignity. Rosetta said that Lydia was right that the dress didn't suit her. Well, he still asks the owner to apologize for barging into the fitting room without permission and for expecting Rosetta to ignore the mistake she made with the dress. Rosetta said that aristocrats really should behave with dignity. Lydia looked at the girl with irritation, thinking that she was just a simple servant. Rosetta, noticing that they were not going to apologize to her, decided to leave. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a girl in a blue dress who told them to stand. There was a slight smile on the girl's face. Approaching Rose, she asked if she was the one who was going to take her dress. The girl mockingly said that such dresses should be worn to the emperor's ball and not washed in them, after which she came closer to the girl and slapped her. The girl continued to mock, saying that Rosetta should know her place because judging by her worn and cheap clothes, it was absolutely not here. Rosetta smiled, thinking that she would have to teach someone a lesson. However, before she could do anything, a man's voice suddenly rang out, asking if she was just a worthless servant. Armand, who heard everything that happened, was climbing the steps of the stairs. The previously brave girl stopped, realizing who had her back. The prince asked how they dared to speak like that about his protégé. Rosetta was surprised. She didn't understand what he was doing here. The girl immediately became nervous, saying that men were not supposed to be here, while Rosetta said that there was nothing to do and that she was fine. The man was irritated, asking the girl if these were all the words she knew. Was she okay? The man came close to the girl. He asked her if, after hearing all this nonsense, she had nothing more to say, and said that even if she was okay, he was not. Rosetta was again struck by such words from the prince's lips, after which she smiled slyly and called him. The girl asked the prince to leave here. She knows the boutique better than this one. The girl asked him, knowing that if he was not stopped, then there would be no end to problems or rumors. Luckily for the girl, the prince said that they would do as she said. Smiling at the girl, he turned gloomily towards his hostess. He said that he still won't forget. The man pointed his finger at the hostess and the girl and said that he would not forget anything that happened today. As he left the boutique, the prince slammed the door hard. Lydia and the girl sat down nervously on the floor, realizing how well everything ended. The carriage continued on its way. The girl looked out the window and thought that 10 dresses tailored for her would not be expensive for His Highness. However, she's still a simple servant. Is he really kind to her because he feels very sorry for her? The girl thought about whether it was possible that she would say that she was not dying. Then he will look at the girl and be very happy. Bowing her head, the girl apologized because the prince was very worried because of her. However, the prince immediately stopped her, saying that he was not going to listen to this. He asked the girl why she was apologizing. Rosetta was surprised and asked him again what he meant. The man said it wasn't her fault, and he didn't understand why she should apologize if he was upset. Rosetta, for the umpteenth time today, had nothing to say. The carriage moved on, and the prince told the girl that if she didn't like that he was worried about her, then she needed to treat herself better. After which he continued, saying that she didn't deserve it. She doesn't deserve this kind of treatment, so she asks you not to tolerate it from anyone. The carriage completed its journey and stopped. The girl looked at the prince with her mouth slightly open. She couldn't believe his words. The girl agreed and thanked the prince, who said that she was too kind if she apologized for making him upset. The girl said that she was not so kind, but the prince did not agree with this, saying that she was more worried about him than about herself. The girl laughed, saying that it was because he was her master. Armand was shocked by these words. However, the girl continued the sentence, saying that she only behaves this way with him. It was at this moment that the prince had an epiphany. If this were a novel that girls read, then even the readers would get to this scene. Even those flying by, besides the bird, would have understood everything. These words of hers were definitely a declaration of love. Only the girl herself didn't understand this. Armand thought he was ready, but such a sudden confession threw him off balance. The man remembered something that happened in his life a long time ago. A little boy stands in front of his mother's grave, surrounded by imperturbable people who do not want to console him. The rain pounded his mother's grave, and all around there was only silence and loneliness. The man did not understand how one could muster up the courage to give his heart to someone who would soon die. An oppressive silence fell again in the carriage. Trying to break the silence, the girl said that she had no intention of leaving what happened in the boutique as is. The man thought she had changed the subject because he had said nothing in response. But he asked out loud what she was going to do. The girl smiled and gestured with her finger and said that she would need just a little help from her master. Rosetta walked down a small alley, the prince keeping pace with her. Turning to the prince, the girl said that they were now in place. She said that this was exactly the shop she had in mind. The prince was surprised at how the shop treated her revenge. Rosetta asked if he knew why noble ladies fought so fiercely for outfits. The girl said that in 2 weeks there would be a ball in the palace. And of course, as he probably knows, this is the last chance to find a partner before the hunting festival. The girl told him that she would buy the most beautiful, exquisite dress here in this shop, and he would give it to the lady who would attend the ball in it with him. If possible, to annoy the girl who slapped her, the blue dress that I liked so much on that girl would be the best choice. Looking at the shop owner, the prince was surprised what his partner at the hunting festival had to do with it. There was a woman standing at the door of the shop who asked if they were there, to which Rosetta said that yes, she wanted to order a dress. The shop owner asked if they knew the measurements of the lady who would wear it. The prince, looking at his hostess, asked if it wasn't obvious. Rosetta stood silently again, not understanding his answer. In his past lives, Armand always went to the ball accompanied by Lunella. Although the girl is worried about how the future will change because of this blue dress, but his partner has not changed, so everything is fine. The prince asked again whether it was not obvious to whom this dress was for, and seeing that no one understood him, he clarified. Point to Rosetta, he said the dress needs to be tailored to her measurements. The girl was amazed, in the sense that they sewed it according to her measurements. She sighed and a thought suddenly came into her head. Of course, His Highness probably doesn't know anything about women's clothing sizes, so the dresses will be made for her, and then, if necessary, adjustments will be made. The shopkeeper asked them to follow her, while Rosetta asked her if she could make the dress a little bigger so that it could be adjusted later. The prince looked at the women, not understanding why the dress needed to be adjusted. The naive man thought that the girl was thinking about growing even more, and therefore wanted to make the dress bigger. As she left the shop, the girl thanked the owner again, saying that she relied on her. As they approached the carriage, the prince said that since they had only managed to buy one dress, they still had a lot of free time, and Rosetta replied that it was simply an unforeseen situation. Sitting in the carriage, the girl told the prince that she really enjoyed their walk today. She admitted that this would become one of her most treasured memories and thanked the man for giving her today. The prince remained silent and said nothing. Hearing nothing, the girl said that in the remaining time she wanted to repay him if possible. The prince asked the girl what she meant, to which the girl replied that they would only need an hour or two if he agreed. Leaning towards the man, the girl asked him to undress. Armand was stunned. He did not expect such a request. The girl told the prince not to be capricious and to undress, and in the meantime she would bring him other clothes. The man remained sitting in the carriage, not having a single thought in his head. After sitting for a while, he raised his hands, stretching the collar of his shirt. Reaching the buttons on his chest, the man thought about how forcing him to undress like this right in the cart made him think that she had strange preferences. At this moment, a girl's voice was heard next to the carriage, asking whether the prince had undressed completely. Entering the carriage, the girl handed the prince some clothes, saying that they were peasant clothes and asked him to get dressed quickly. The men still didn't understand why this was necessary, to which Rosetta said that the night market was opening today. The girl said that they might encounter bandits and pickpockets, but the shashlik here was incredibly tasty, and the man laughed nervously. A girl and a man were walking through the night market in peasant clothes. All the girls around turned to look at the prince in peasant clothes. The man didn't understand why everyone was looking at him so hard, to which Rosetta said that not only blue-eyed, fair-haired men were attractive, advising him to bury his face with a hood. The princess immediately remembered Valerian, thinking about what it meant that she liked men with exactly this appearance. Suddenly, a girl's hand appeared in front of the prince's face, holding a shashlik and offering to try it. The man turned to the girl. She already had 3 kebabs in her hands, one of which she held out to him. The man opened his mouth to taste the offered delicacy. Rosetta looked at the prince carefully, waiting for his reaction. The man chewed it and said it was very tasty. The girl laughed and offered him more food, to which the man asked why she didn't eat herself. The girl said that she was fine as is. At that very moment, the prince's hand grabbed her cheeks and squeezed them. The girl was shocked, asking what he was doing. The man replied that from now on, every time she said she was okay, he would do this. Rosetta didn't expect that he could joke like that and said that he had just made it up. The girl ran excitedly through the streets of the night market, looking at everything that was sold there. The man, watching the girl's reaction, smiled easily. The man noticed that it was getting cold and they should go somewhere, but the girl noticed that when it got dark, there would be fireworks going off. The prince said that he would go and get a cloak for her and that she should wait for him here. The girl was about to say that she was fine, but she remembered the prince's promise and fell silent. Armand once again ordered her to wait for him here in silence. The girl was sitting on a bench. She was looking at the beautiful night sky, which she had not seen for a long time. Suddenly, 2 men passing by called out to her. Approaching her, they invited her to watch the fireworks with them if she was alone. The girl began to say that she was with a companion, but the man interrupted her, saying that she should not talk about it, since he had an excellent offer for her. After which he continued to talk about how their company is worth only everything that it currently has. The man leaned over the girl, waiting for her reaction. The girl thought that she had hoped for at least one quiet day, but she asked out loud if they wanted her to give them money for the date. Rosetta thought that it was good that they had come while the prince was away. Without thinking twice, the girl turned around and kicked the stranger in the chest. At the behest of her thin leg, the stranger's head rolled back. How joyfully she thought about what she could show, what she was capable of, without worrying that someone would see her saying out loud that they would not have enough money. I turned to the second man and told him to hurry because she needed to deal with them before her companion returned. One stranger was already lying on the ground opposite the second. Rosetta stood, prepared for the blow. The man screamed and cursed. He ran at the girl, shouting that he would get his today. The girl waited for the man to approach without twitching. Rosie smiled contentedly at this. Everything happened as she expected from this bully. The man ran up and the girl grabbed his hand, preventing him from grabbing herself. After which, she grabbed him tighter and threw him over her shoulder. The man was stunned. The man fell headfirst onto the ground, completely exposed. A beautiful girl stood against the backdrop of the sunset and looked away. The man, defeated on the ground, screamed that this girl was a monster. The girl happily sat down over the man and said that she was very glad she hadn't heard anyone call her that for so long. At this time, Armand walked with a cloak, thinking that he did not know the way back. Why did he so confidently promise her to return? Sitting over the men, the girl thought about what she should do with them now, not noticing the prince who was approaching her from behind. The prince called out to Rosetta. The girl stood up awkwardly. She was excited, thinking what to do. With his mouth open and his eyes wide open, the man asked what had happened here. The girl gasped. She was very nervous. Sweat was running down her face. Looking at the girl, the prince asked what happened, whether she was hurt. Running up to the prince, the girl said that a gentleman had helped her. The man asked who that gentleman was. Introducing herself, the girl said that he was as handsome as a knight, with blue eyes and blonde hair. The man was unhappy to hear the description, but said he was glad she was not hurt anyway. The man thought that a knight with blue eyes and light eyes suddenly appeared and saved her. The way the girl described the knight was familiar. Did he know him? Was this really the same friend who worked in the palace? The man didn't like this friend of hers. He wondered if the girl wanted to hide it, although it would be very stupid and seemed like nonsense. Tearing the man away from his thoughts, Rose asked him to look. The man looked up and saw a stunning fireworks display in front of them. They stood almost right next to each other and looking up at the sky admired the fireworks. Without taking her eyes off the beautiful view, the girl said that it was majestic. Turning to the prince, she asked him if the view was not beautiful. The man looked at the girl and the fireworks behind her, saying that it was all wonderful. It was the same evening and the castle to which our couple returned. The girl winced in displeasure, turning her face away from the man. Rosetta, pressed against the wall of the room, cursed at the prince. The girl thought that a new attack had occurred. Could it really have happened because of the situation in the boutique? Rosetta was happy that she was now prepared for this situation. The prince pressed himself against the girl, who was holding a book about 100 ways to train naughty cats, thinking that he would now try out these tips in practice. The man growled in the girl's ear, seeing that she was not paying attention to him. The girl pursed her lips in displeasure at the man's behavior. The girl said no to the prince because the first thing that needed to be done was to clearly show what behavior was undesirable. The man walked away from the girl, and Rosetta wondered if this method of arguing really worked. The girl looked at the book, wondering if everything would really work out, and it seemed like everything was going as it should. But then another thought came to the girl. It is quite possible that the prince remembers everything that happened during the fit of madness. Perhaps he remembers that she told him no last night. The second rule was to provide a suitable reward to make training easier. The girl showed the man incredibly delicious dried beef. The crown prince of the country, Armand von Ragnar, looked at the girl with confusion. Rosetta suddenly realized that cat treats would not work in this case. Suddenly, the girl thought that she still didn't know what exactly His Highness liked. Looking at the book, the girl was thinking about what to replace the dried beef with. The third suggestion was to stroke the cat in its preferred places. This option could tame the cat to touch. Looking at the prince, the girl thought about what places here might be preferable. Rosetta remembered that her cat liked it when she stroked his tail. The girl was nervous because she couldn't do the same to His Highness. Rosetta was nervous. She felt like she was going crazy. Approaching the prince, she asked him if he trusted her. The man growled. Holding out her palm, she said that she would not offend him. Directing her palm towards her hair, the girl thought that she should start from the head. She placed her fingers behind the prince's ear and gently stroked his hair. After some time, she decided to check the following paths. The girl placed her palm on the prince's bare chest. Rosetta was wondering whether to leave her hand where it was or to lower it even lower. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by a man who grabbed the hand that was touching him. Without letting go of her hand, the man advanced on the girl, pressing her against the wall. The man growled, overcome with incomprehensible emotions. Rosetta was nervous, saying that he had been well behaved and liked being petted. Then the man did something that shocked the girl even more. He answered her, "No." The girl was shocked that the prince spoke during his fit of madness. However, the man continued to say that he liked something else better. With one hand around the girl's waist and the other supporting the back of her head so that she would not turn away, he kissed her deeply. His lips kissed hers without stopping. The blushing girl came to her senses a little and asked His Highness to wait. However, he did not hear her, and she pushed him away from her with her hands. The girl thought about why he suddenly kissed her. She thought that he was completely conscious because he spoke. Looking at His Highness, she asked if he knew who she was. Looking at the girl and smiling happily, he said that she was Rose. The girl pressed her hand to her chest in surprise. The man called her name. Was it really because of the dosage that his mind was starting to return to him? The girl thought, feeling how quickly her heart was beating. The man looked at her silently, without taking his eyes off her. He still hadn't regained consciousness. She looked at the man and sternly told him that it was extremely impolite to kiss a person without warning, asked him not to do so and asked if he understood her. The man immediately spoke and said that no, he wanted more. Rosetta was perplexed by this reaction. Tired of such thoughts, she decided that she had had enough for today and told the prince that she thought it was time for him to sleep. However, bending over the girl and cupping her face with his palms, the man said that no, he wanted more, after which he again leaned towards the girl's face, trying to kiss her. This time, Rosetta managed to put her hand between their lips. The girl told him that if he was a good boy, then he needed to obey her and go to bed. However, looking at his face, I understood that he clearly wasn't going to do it, and I thought, is there really no way to force him? The girl convinced herself that it would just be an experiment, lay down on the bed and called the prince, promising a kiss for it. The man looked at the girl, realizing what had been said. Meanwhile, Rosetta called him again to come to her. The man chuckled contentedly. He was close to getting what he wanted. I leaned my palm on the bed, he answered. Okay. The man lay down on the bed opposite her, stretching out his hand to her and asking her to let him kiss him. The girl was excited, blushed deeply. She didn't expect it to work. The man lay stretched out next to the girl, touching her lips with his thumb. The clock struck. The girl woke up as if from a dream and agreed. She could not refuse, because a knight does not go back on his word. Rosetta pushed the man onto his back, holding onto his shoulders, and thought that he just needed a kiss. The girl slowly brought her lips closer to his, after which she quickly kissed him on the lips and asked if that was enough for him. Pleased with herself, the girl said that she had done as he wanted, and now it was time for him to go to bed. However, the man intercepted the girl, holding her by the wrist. Rosetta looked around, sighing nervously. Now the man pushed the girl onto her back, looking straight into her eyes. Without giving her a chance to say anything, he pressed his lips to hers in response. A fire was blazing brightly in the fireplace in the room. The man's and woman's hands were intertwined. The fingers were pressed tightly together. Rosetta asked the prince to stop, asked him to stop. She lay there, pushing the prince's head to the side. The girl thought that he was so surprised that he lost consciousness. Lying under the man's body, she understood that she definitely wouldn't sleep today. Morning came in the castle, and here and there the noise of things being done could be heard. Rosetta walked between the other servants, thinking that now she would not be able to look the prince in the eye. Holding onto the doors of his chambers with her hands, she thought about how ashamed she was. Rosetta took a deep breath, preparing to enter the prince's chambers. Taking a step into the room, she wished good morning to the prince. The man stood in front of the window without looking at the girl and began to talk about what happened last night. Turning half sideways to the girl, he asked if he was out of his mind again. The girl looked at the prince, thinking about what she should say. The man turned around completely and, looking at the girl, asked for forgiveness. Rosetta immediately waved her hand and said that he had nothing to apologize for. Yesterday, he was even better, and he spoke. The man was surprised that he had said something. He rushed towards the girl, shouting, asking what exactly he had said. The girl awkwardly fell silent, remembering yesterday's kiss, saying that he liked it. The man took a step closer, asking what he liked. The girl closed her eyes, thinking that she couldn't admit that he said that he liked kissing her. Looking the prince straight in the eyes, the girl answered briefly. I, or rather her body, she thought. Rosetta said that the prince said he liked it. She, the girl, did not take her eyes off, waiting for a reaction. Standing so close to the girl, the man asked again. The man was shocked. He couldn't believe it. The blushing man could not believe that he had confessed his feelings to Rosetta. Looking at the girl, the man could not realize that he had done this. At that time, she said that he had not said anything else. At these words, Armand blushed even more and coughed nervously. The girl immediately responded by saying that the prince should visit a priest to have him examine him and see if everything was okay. The prince, noticing the girl's behavior, realized that she felt uneasy and was not at all happy with his confession. Nervously, the girl continued to say that the prince looked tired and could rest. She would come later. The man told the girl to forget about what he told her and go rest. Looking at the door closed behind the girl, he thought that it was better this way. It was good that she refused him. It's hard to love someone who has little time left in this world. A woman's hands touched the prince's shoulders, and a voice spoke, saying how sad it was. Hugging the boy standing at the grave, the ghostly woman said that the boy himself understands everything perfectly well because he is smart. The woman whispered in his ear that now he understood how painful it was to lose someone, how heavy it was on the soul when you couldn't get what you wanted. The woman tried to convince the boy standing in the crowd to remember these feelings. And now I hug a crying man and tell him that he doesn't need these stupid dreams. Theodore smiled and greeted Rosetta, saying that this is where she was. The girl thanked the man for agreeing to help. Despite how busy he was, the man told the girl to sit down, that he would examine her right there. Theodore's hand was performing a check with magic, while Rosetta thought the priest would first ask how she was feeling. The girl assumed that after yesterday's conversation, His Highness was still in shock, his health was getting worse, and perhaps Theodore should be made his personal physician. The man is stunned and frozen, looking at the girl. Grabbing her hands in his, he shouted that she had been cleansed of Setar, and that this was an incredible miracle. The priest spoke about how this was an incredible incident that needed to be recorded, and that he should report it to His Highness. But the girl asked him to control himself. She knew that the reaction would be violent, but she did not think that it would be so strong. Rosetta began to talk about how His Highness had a very high opinion of his abilities and asked him to convey his goodwill to him, but she forgot to do so. The man was stunned, and the girl continued to say that the prince said that he was sure that Theodore could think of something. The man clenched his fists, trying to control his emotions. He didn't believe what was happening. The man smiled happily. There were tears in his eyes. He asked if it was true. Rosetta was amazed at how happy he was about this event, but he pulled himself together and said that there was actually something that was bothering him about her. The thing is that there is a lot of magic going around the girl's heart, and apparently this is the reason for her recovery. The girl thought that the priest was a good man. She herself, too, had recently felt how quickly her awakening as a knight was approaching. Taking her hands in his, the man said that he was glad that she was healthy, and now he could stop worrying about her. Sitting in the carriage, the girl thought that this was great. Her father would hardly be happy about her miraculous recovery. Until she became a knight, he had little interest in her. It is unlikely that he would have been saddened by the news of her death. The girl rode on, thinking that she only had to tell His Highness. The girl, smiling, blushed. She thought about the prince. He would be happy. Arriving at the castle, the girl immediately went to the prince's room, saying that she had arrived. Smiling, the girl asked how he was feeling, if he was feeling better. The man, despite the girl, answered briefly, yes, but the girl thought no, he was withdrawn today. The prince asked what happened. He told her to take a day off. The girl looked at the prince with displeasure. She did not understand what was happening and decided to tell him the news when he was in a good mood. That nothing had happened, to which the prince, raising his gaze, looked at her questioningly. Smiling and giving a thumbs up, the girl said she just wanted another day off at the end of the week. The man was silent, thinking that she had definitely mentioned some friend at the last holiday. With a wry smile, he asked if she needed a day off to meet that friend. The girl smiled happily. How did he guess she really would come to visit him? The man was amazed at how she could. When leaving, the girl asked for something else. She asked not to take off her gift, to wear it even when she was not around. The man clenched his fists, and cufflinks that the girl had given him were pinned to his shirt. Thinking about the phrase even when she was not around, he promised to do it. Rosetta, standing at the door, thanked him and said goodbye to him, but the prince asked her to wait. Rising abruptly from his chair, he thought about what she wanted to say. Did she really still have feelings for him? However, he immediately froze, remembering something. The girl, smiling, said that she was fine and advised not to think about it. Maybe she wouldn't die at all. The prince thought that the poor thing still hoped to get better. The girl looked at the pendant, thinking that she would have to spend the weekend with Valerian. The girl thought that he was always worried when she was not around. She was very worried about the state of His Highness. And then the weekend came. The girl called Valerian. Rosetta stood in a beautiful dress and shouted to Valerian that she had come. The girl opened the door to the room, but was met with deafening silence. The girl did not understand what had happened. Where was Valerian? Sighing, the girl thought that Valerian had decided to play hide and seek. Rose ran through the rooms, calling out to the man, asking him to stop. The girl went to the closet and only had to check it. That's where he hid when he was little. Rose reached for the closet door to open it. Suddenly, a man's hand appeared from the closet and took the girl by the wrist. The girl was stunned, not immediately understanding what had happened. A man's hand forcefully pulled the girl into the closet. Everything happened quickly. The closet door closed in front of him and there was no one there. The man greeted his Rose with a kiss on the girl's palm. Looking deeply into her eyes, he said that this morning she was as beautiful as always. Rosetta pulled her hand away indignantly, asking what he was doing. Getting up from the floor, she asked in surprise if the man had really created a portal to his home in the palace. Smiling, Valerian replied that no one knew about this, and if they did, they wouldn't dare tell him anything. However, he suddenly surprised the girl by asking why she dressed like that to meet him. The girl didn't have time to say anything in response when the man noticed that the dress was beautiful and he liked it. The girl became embarrassed, wondering whether the man would be angry if she admitted that the prince had bought him. Changing the subject, the girl asked how the work on the poison detector was progressing. The man replied that it would be ready in a few days, but for now it was at the experimental stage. Grabbing the man's hand, the girl said that it was excellent and praised Valerian. Rose asked the man if he could define a curse. He asked in surprise why. Was the principal really cursed? It was just the girl's guess. She really thought that someone had cursed him. Of course, it would be easier to assume that the principal is simply insane, but she cannot tell anyone about its secret. Valerian said that first we need to understand how the curse was cast. After all, usually the most powerful curses are the most ancient. Lost in thought, Rose thanked the man, saying that she would look into the matter. Putting his hand on the girl's shoulder, he noted that they were going to rest and they should stop talking about work. As he began to perform his magic, the man said that he wanted to take her somewhere and thought that it would lift her spirits. The girl looked at the man and asked where they were going. Opening the portal, the magician noticed that she would go wherever she wanted. He will definitely go wherever she wants. The man picked up the girl in his arms and ran into the open portal. Looking at the man, Rose remembered that he had always had a tendency to such antics, and now he was only 22. The agitated girl shouted at the man to stop, warning him that she was feeling nauseous. Rosetta continued to scream, thinking that the man was just like a child. Since she was practically unconscious, she hated portals. The man asked her to open her eyes, since they had already arrived. He put his hand on the girl's shoulder and turned her around, showing what was around them. The man and woman were enveloped in a ball of air and were under a layer of water, with fish swimming around them. The girl was amazed as she looked at the fish swimming in front of her eyes. The man noted that the sea view was the best for clearing the mind. The girl noted that magicians could do anything. The girl said that the man himself decided to bring her here and asked what he wanted as a reward for this. The man silently pointed his finger at his cheek. They stood silently in the water, the man waiting for the girl's reaction. Without waiting for an answer, he reminded Rose that every good deed must be repaid. The girl was sure that he had completely lost all shame. Sighing, she resigned herself and, pulling his chin up with her hand, kissed the man on the cheek. The man froze, swallowing nervously. Rosetta smiled and looked at the embarrassed man, asking if this was enough for him. Having lost his concentration, the man lost his power over magic and the airball burst. Sitting on the bed, behind the girl, a man was drying her hair with magic. The girl, pleased with this, remarked that it was great to have such an ability, to which the man promised her to do this every day. Rose was amused and said that she didn't need the care of someone who was thrown off track by one child's kiss. The man, indignant, blushed and said that it happened by accident, but they had been underwater. Squeezing his hand, the girl said that it was true, and even so she was glad to spend time with him. Burying her face in the pillow, she confessed that tomorrow she would tell the prince that she was not dying. She raised her face and looked at the man and said that she was worried about this. However, the girl thinks that everything will go well, because the prince has been kind to her lately. Remembering the time spent with the prince, she laughed and asked if he would kick her out. The man, looking gloomy, called the girl by name. The man, leaning on his hands, hung over her. The girl turned her head in shock, looked at the man and asked what it was. Looking at the girl, the man demanded that while she was with him, she think only about him. Outside the window, there was a pouring rain, pounding loudly, and bringing back sad memories to the man. The little boy stood surrounded by former servants taking everything they could carry. This boy lost everything in the same rain. This world does not look kindly on defenseless children who are good for nothing. Valerian had already completely lost hope and was ready to die, but he met Rosetta. The girl greeted the boy with a smile and extended her hand to him. Perhaps it was at that moment, when he looked at the girl holding out her hand to him, that it all began. From now on, after her smile, rainy days did not seem so terrible. Rosetta saved Valerian, and when her mother died, he promised to always protect her so that she would be happy. The girl lying underneath him smiled slyly and asked if he wanted to play a joke on her again. The man sat up and sighed, after which he fell with all his might onto the pillow next to the girl. He suggested that Rose fall asleep holding hands, as they had been doing for a long time. The girl, smiling, agreed. Their hands lay one in the other, they slept, and there was silence around them. Armand sat at his desk, gloomy and sullen. He couldn't sleep because of his excitement. As he placed his cup of coffee in the saucer, he thought that the girl must have had a great time with her friend. The man wondered when the girl would return. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. A girl's voice asked permission to enter. The joyful man choked on his drink in surprise, and coffee splashed in all directions. All the man's papers were unfortunately covered with it. The girl, waiting for an answer, became worried that something had happened. A male voice was heard giving permission to enter. The girl approached the man calmly, who was reading his documents. The man did not look at the girl, making her think that he was in a bad mood again. The girl was angry, deciding to leave if he did not answer. The girl, smiling, wished the prince good morning. Finally, looking up from the papers, the man noticed that he had not seen this dress before. Awkwardly, grabbing the hem of her dress, the girl wondered whether she should change. The girl remembered how Melanie had discouraged her from changing because it was a beautiful dress for meeting the prince. She also assured that the prince would be delighted and that Rose should not change her clothes. Hoping that Melanie was right, the girl sheepishly admitted that a friend had given her the dress. Covering his mouth with his hand, the prince complimented the girl, saying that she looked good and had apparently had a good rest. After which he suggested that Rose take a day off today and not overexert herself. The girl looked up in surprise. They hadn't discussed a single important issue, and he was already throwing her out. Clutching her dress with her hand, the girl turned to the prince, saying that she needed to say something which she had been deciding on for a long time, not knowing how he would react. Rose repeated what had been said, noting that she thought it was important for him to know about it. Gathering her strength, the girl confidently declared that she would not die. Assuring the prince of her words, the girl said that Theodore told her that she was fine and that she would not die. Pressing her hand to her chest, the girl said that she would always be by the prince's side and would remain his servant until the very end. The man froze in shock, realizing the words the girl had spoken. Rose waited tensely for the man's reaction, wondering why he was silent. Deciding that it was better for her not to think, she chose the escape route, as she had originally planned. The girl turned around and told the prince that she was leaving. The prince's hand shot out after her, shouting for her to stop. The girl turned around, startled by the prince's cry. The man asked the girl if she was sure she wouldn't die. Taking her wrist, he asked if she was sure she would stay with him. Almost shouting, the excited man asked if the girl would stay with him. The girl looked at the prince with excitement. She did not expect such a reaction. Cupping the girl's face in his hand, he said he was glad she was okay and that the news was a relief to him. Blushing, the man admitted that he felt the same as the girl. As he tucked a lock of the girl's hair behind her ear, he told her that she knew he was in an ambiguous position and that they would have to wait. Because of Prince Greyhan and the Empress, he could put her in danger. Removing his hand from the girl's face, he clarified that he would be ready when he had strengthened his position. He promised the girl that he would cope quickly and asked if she would wait for him. The girl looked at the prince silently. She didn't understand what he was talking about, what she should expect, or what it meant that he felt the same way she did. The girl folded her palms, pressing them together, and realized with delight. Has the prince finally realized how devoted she is to him, and is he ready to fight for the throne? Clenching her hands into fists, the girl thought about how touching it was and promised to wait as long as it took. Suddenly, the prince came close to the girl, hugging her. Rosetta didn't understand what was happening. Was the prince so moved by her words that he decided to hug her? Looking out the window, the girl thought that it was nothing. Let the prince calm down. She was very happy that everything was okay. But was everything really okay? Because from that day on, Armand began to behave completely differently. When the girl brought him breakfast, he told her to sit down next to him. The girl asked shyly if it wouldn't be better for her to eat separately from him. However, the prince briefly told her not to talk nonsense. Having speared a piece of food on his fork, he handed it to the girl, telling her to try it. The girl obediently opened her mouth, tasting the prince's food. Her indignation was great. The prince's behavior was unacceptable. Since she said she would always be by the prince's side, 3 things have changed. Firstly, His Highness became interested in political affairs. Secondly, Father Theodore became his personal priest. And finally, he treated the girl so tenderly, as if they were lovers. The prince smiled contentedly as he looked at the girl. The man's fingers reached for the second fork. Handing the fork to Rose, he said it was now her turn to feed him. The girl was puzzled. Couldn't he eat himself? Sighing, the girl decided to get it over with quickly, and holding out the food on a fork to the prince, told him to eat. The man remained silent. Rising, Rose was in a panic. The man said that as he thought, the food gets better when she feeds it to him. The girl sighed with relief. She thought she had poked him too hard with her fork and said that the cook was very skilled. Rosetta bowed to the prince and said that it was time for her to go. She continued to not understand why the prince was behaving this way. Why does he smile every time their eyes meet? The girl blushed, and the thought came to her mind that perhaps His Highness liked her. However, she immediately rejected it, deciding that it was some kind of nonsense. They just became closer and had a similar relationship with Valerian. The laughing man pointed his finger at the girl, asking if they were really friends. The man sat at his desk, thinking that the girl was apparently avoiding him. As he continued writing, the prince wondered if she was upset because he was so busy. The prince invited Theodore as a priest and returned to active fulfillment of obligations. He did all this to hinder the Empress and strengthen his position in the palace. Armand thought that he tried very hard because this was the only way he and Rosetta could be together. But now he doesn't even see her. What to do if she leaves him? Standing up abruptly, the man decided that now was the time. He decided that he wanted to show the girl his strong side. The man made a powerful swing with his hand. The girl sitting in the chair watched the prince practice with his sword. The girl smiled and thought about why His Highness invited her to the training ground. Biting her thumb, the girl wondered if the prince could have guessed that she used to be a knight. Unfortunately, the girl was too beautiful, and the prince was unable to impress her. Looking at the men exercising, the girl thought that most of them would most likely be kicked out, because their skills had not reached the required level. However, one of the men caught the girl's attention. He was quite good-looking. The girl wondered who this man was. She hadn't seen him last time. Then someone called out to the man, calling him by name, Alex. The man standing next to Alex tried to catch his breath, saying that he seemed to have gotten stronger, but Alex denied this, saying that he still needed to train. The girl remembered that the man's name was Alex, and he was talented enough to be able to protect the prince. He couldn't be let go. Turning to the girl, the prince noticed that she was not looking at him. He noticed that she had been looking at a certain guy for some time now. Armand was furious about this. Approaching the guy, he asked if his name was Alex, to which the guy responded in the affirmative. With a grim face, he ordered the boy to fight him. The guy looked at Armand in horror and did not understand what he had done to deserve this. The swords in the men's hands crossed in front of the girl, and a metallic screech was heard. The girl was glad that everyone was very cheerful. She did not notice the gloominess of what was happening. The carriage wheel clattered on the pavement as the girl and the man rode back. The man closed his eyes and thought that it was too much. The prince shouldn't have fought the guy at full strength. However, looking at the girl, I thought that such a victory must have impressed her. However, the girl suddenly spoke up, addressing the prince, saying that she wanted to talk about Alex. The man crossed his arms over his chest. He was unhappy with this turn of events. Rosetta told Armand that Alex was a good swordsman, and if he spent time with him, he would surely become a valuable warrior. The man looked at the girl indignantly. She did not appreciate his efforts in the battle. The man sighed, touched his temple, and said that it was a good remark and he would do as the girl said. The happy girl thought that Alex would have training tomorrow and she would not give up. But suddenly, the girl realized that the prince easily agreed with her proposal. It seemed that His Highness recognized her as a friend and respected her opinion. Perhaps this time the future can be changed. Entering the chambers, the prince said that he would take a bath, to which the girl asked if she should prepare one for her. The man turned around shyly to look at the girl, who was smiling. Despite the girl, he said he wouldn't force her. Rosetta immediately rejoiced, saying that she would wait for him here. But then the prince turned around, opening his shirt completely, saying that he had changed his mind, because one cannot reject someone's kindness. The prince added that he would be glad if she gave him a massage, to which the girl thought that there was no need to take off her clothes for this. As she turned towards the door, she thought that perhaps he really was crazy and said that she would wait outside until he finished. However, the prince did not let her go and, grabbing her wrist, told her to wait. The girl blushed but continued to look at the prince. The man also looked intently at the girl without saying a word. The couple continued to stand, holding hands, neither of them saying a word. Finally, the embarrassed girl pulled her hand out of the prince's and spoke hesitantly. Running out the door at lightning speed, she shouted that she needed to bring something to the bathroom. The man extended his hand towards the door, calling the girl by name. The man continued to silently watch the departing girl without removing his outstretched hand. The girl, leaning against the closed door, thought about why he was saying such unexpected things, why he suddenly called her to the bathroom with him. The girl admitted that, of course, she had to protect His Highness even in the bath, but everything had already been prepared there, and now she would have to explain her escape. Suddenly, Mr. Rock greeted the girl as he passed by and asked her why she was standing there. The girl, noticing a basket of ducklings for a bath in the man's hands, realized that this was her salvation. The girl snatched the basket from him, saying that she would lend him the ducklings for a while. The man was amazed and only managed to shout after the girl that these ducklings were for Melanie's niece. Falling to his knees, the man was sad because he was preparing this gift for his niece Melanie. Holding the duckling in her hands, the girl announced that she had returned and asked if His Highness would like to get into the bath right away. The prince calmly threw the robe off his shoulders and told the girl that they would start with a massage. The basket with the ducklings fell out of the girl's hands and they merrily jumped around the floor, squeaking. The blushing girl looked at the prince with her mouth open. Lowering her head, the girl immediately asked for forgiveness for her behavior. The practically naked man continued to look at the girl. The man lay down on the couch, covered himself with a blanket below his back, and told her to begin the massage. The girl concentrated on performing the massage. She didn't think that she would ever see the prince's back naked. Looking at the man's back, the girl thought that these latissimus dorsi muscles were just, after which her thoughts broke off. Suddenly the girl hit the prince's back with her fist with all her might. The man gasped and raised his head in bewilderment. The girl immediately asked for forgiveness and blushed. Rubbing the place of the blow, the girl asked the prince if it hurt. The man immediately calmed the girl down, saying that it was just a little ticklish. The man was gloomy and cursed mentally. He thought that Rosetta was probably trying to find an excuse to leave, and he felt uneasy thinking that he was forcing her. The girl continued to knead the prince's back, accidentally touching a sensitive spot. The man blushed and said that she could stop if she was tired. Rosetta calmed the man, saying that everything was fine and that he knew that Rosetta was strong. The man, trying to control the trembling in his hands, thought that it was only difficult for him. The man remembered a bathtub with cold water, which was unpleasant to wash in. He just had to endure it for a little while. Wiping the oil off her hands, the girl asked the prince if he would now go to the bath. Without turning to the girl, the man asked for another second because there was a very pleasant smell here. Rosetta was puzzled. He had just been so kind, and now he was cold again, after which she said goodbye to the prince, saying that she needed to wash her hands. The man sat down on the couch, sighing. Relieving tension, Armand thought that everything was very close. The man sat relaxed in the cool bath. The girl looked at the surprisingly relaxed Armand, bathing in a bathtub with cheerful ducklings. Rosetta turned around, thinking she could finally relax. But when the girl took the next step, something unexpected happened. Stepping on the wet floor, the girl slipped. The only thing the girl managed to think about while she was serving was that she didn't look at her feet. The man watched in panic as Rose fell. Trying to stop her from falling, he grabbed her elbow. Rosetta sat in the bath in the arms of the prince, who caught her. The girl blushed, apologized, tried to get up, but the man asked her to wait. Putting his arm around the girl's waist, he tried to pull her closer to him. Armand wrapped his arms around the girl, holding her tightly to himself. The girl turned her head to look at the prince and understand what was happening. Before she could understand anything, the prince's lips captured her lips, kissing her hard. When the man broke the kiss and looked into the girl's face, he heard her trying to say something with her disobedient lips. Jumping to the other side of the bath, the girl told the prince not to do this. The prince asked excitedly what was the matter, and it seemed to the girl that His Highness was going crazy again. Looking intently at the girl, the man told her that she had misunderstood. Realizing that things were bad, the girl took the first thing that came to hand, a cheerful duck. The girl threw the duck right at the prince's forehead, saying that she asked him to stop. The object hit the target right on target, and the duckling jumped around the floor, squeaking cheerfully. Rose jumped up in fright. The prince lost consciousness after being hit in the head by a duck. The girl looked tiredly at the prince, who was unconscious again. The man opened his eyes slightly, regaining consciousness. Sitting up on the bed, he asked if he had fallen asleep. The girl immediately confirmed this, saying that he had fallen asleep as soon as he found himself in the bathroom. She thought that the symptoms of the prince's madness were beginning to appear again. The prince thought about the symptoms, because the priest Theodore treated him daily, and everything was fine. The man doubted that the kiss was a dream. The prince looked at the quiet girl standing in front of him. He wondered if she was pretending, but he immediately rejected the idea, considering his memories to be erroneous. The man asked if his symptoms had returned, but the girl heard a noise. The girl extended her hand, stopping the prince and telling him to wait because someone was coming. The prince was surprised. He did not understand how the girl determined this. There was a creak and the door to the prince's room opened slightly. When the doors to the prince's room opened completely, the person entering could see that the prince was sitting on the bed and a girl was standing next to her. Valerian entered the prince's chambers, greeting him. The prince greeted the archmage, saying that they had not seen each other for a long time, and asked him to sit down and that they would bring him tea. The man refused the tea, saying that he was already tired of it, while the girl was wondering why the man had arrived without warning. Remembering the hug in the bathroom, she wondered if he could have known what had happened. The magician explained that there was a reason for his unexpected appearance. Showing the spoon, Valerian said that it was magical and could detect poison. The prince asked in surprise about the amazing spoon. The girl smiled happily. This was exactly what she asked for. The girl remembered how she gave the magician a list of existing poisons and asked him to create an object that could detect them. The man boasted that this was the best of the existing items of its kind. The others worked, but worked worse. Armand noted that it was amazing, but did not understand why he was showing it to him. Looking at the girl, he considered it dubious, but decided not to refuse help. Valerian smiled slyly and asked who knows. After which, he asked if the prince would agree to an exchange if he asked for this maid. Rose was beside herself with this. The man's thoughts ran wild, but pulling himself together, he asked what the magician was talking about. Rosetta clenched her fingers into a fist, wondering what this obnoxious man meant. The magician explained to the prince that it was this maid who had approached him with a request. And upon hearing this, the girl understood why he had so willingly agreed to help the prince. The girl was incredibly angry. She wondered if he would understand if she gave a sign. The girl's gaze resembled the gaze of a hungry tiger, ready to pounce on its prey. Rose was indignant that the man had gone crazy. Feeling the girl's gaze, the man shuddered, realizing what punishments she wanted to bring down on his head. Backtracking, Valerian explained that they were currently short-handed. He coughed and said that, in principle, he could take someone else. The girl stood with her arms folded across her chest and continued to kill the man with her gaze. The prince could not understand whether the magician had chosen Rosetta by chance, but he ordered them to look for people without his help. However, Valerian said that this was impossible because he needed support from only His Highness. Armand froze in amazement, looking at the man, not realizing what he had said. He was surprised that Archmage Valerian was on his side. Armand decided to clarify, asking why, since the first heir had probably offered him large sums of money. The man did not deny this, but said that in the whole world, there is only one person he trusts. Without taking his eyes off the girl, he said that the significance of their bond could not be conveyed in words. "And this man supports His Highness!" Rosetta pressed her hands to her chest, touched. Summing up his speech, he said that this is why he too will help the prince. Valerian asked the prince if this answer would suit him. Squeezing his hand, Armand agreed with this answer. Smiling broadly, the prince said that he understood him because he also had such a person in his life. Armand told the man that he thought he should now cherish their good relationship. The girl looked at the man with admiration. She thought Valerian was a very amazing person. The man took out another special item, showing it to the girl and the prince. Armand could not understand what was special about the crystal ball. The magician said that this was a special crystal ball and it was able to detect any curse. The prince wondered how he could detect the curse. It was the first time he had heard of such a possibility of the crystal ball. Valerian smiled smugly, saying that it was his ball. The couple looked at the wizard, the girl delighted, the man surprised. The magician noticed that he was not very knowledgeable about light magic, so it was a little difficult for him to use such a ball. Everyone looked at the orb as the man said that it would only work once, and he had already spent a lot of rare materials on it. After which he added that the use of such magic requires a colossal amount of holy power. Armand thoughtfully repeated the magician's words about holy power, after which he said that he knew the right person for this job. An ecstatic Theodore looked at the men, saying that a prince and a great magician had approached him, and it was a great honor for him. Valerian looked at Theodore in bewilderment, wondering why this man was so glowing with happiness. "Point to the ball with your hand," the magician advised the priest to put his hand on it. The man explained that the ball would find any curse that was within the room. When Theodore infuses the holy power, the cursed places will appear in red in this ball. The prince immediately pointed out that Theodore should not try too hard because his safety was the most important thing, to which the man told His Highness not to worry. The priest began to gradually pour in his strength, making efforts. Under his hands, the ball began to fill with red dots. The three looked at the ball in amazement, not knowing what to say. Valerian told me to wait. He was surprised. The prince looked at the ball silently, his face gloomy. Rosetta opened her mouth. She could only say 2 words, that's it. They all looked at the crystal ball. The glowing scarlet color had not a single blue tint. Looking at the magician, the prince asked what was the probability that the ball could be wrong. Valerian said that it was impossible because the ball acts once, but very effectively. The prince fell silent again, thinking about something. Rosetta looked at the prince, realizing that the entire room was filled with curses. The girl clenched her hand into a fist, angry at herself. It was her mistake, because she hadn't noticed anything during all 4 time travels. When she was a knight, she checked the room, but it was too late. There could only be a few options here. Firstly, the curse would either wear off in a couple of years. The second option is that someone simply got rid of these curses before checking. There is only one conclusion. There is a traitor among them. The girl continued to look at the prince, thinking that, of course, there was no evidence of this, but the whole room was cursed. Anyone would decide that there was a traitor among them. Judging by the gloom on the prince's face, he realized this too. The man thought that he should have rejoiced at the luck that had given him Rosetta. How he is drowning in the abyss of problems again. Does he not deserve his happiness? The man seemed to be in a vacuum, hearing again the voice of his dead mother. "You see and understand everything yourself." The woman continued to whisper in his ear that when he loses something dear, it is always very scary and painful. The boy seemed to be standing in the crowd again, realizing that it was pointless to strive for the unattainable. The woman continued to hug him by the shoulders, saying that he, better than anyone, should understand this. He should cast aside empty dreams. The man stood with his eyes closed, tears flowing from his eyes. The girl tried to call out to His Highness. The man opened his eyes and looked at the girl. Rosetta stood facing the prince, holding out her hand, promising that nothing terrible would happen and that they would cope with everything. The man stood with his arms crossed over his chest and looked at the girl, who was still holding out her hand to him. The girl reminded him once again that she promised to protect him, which meant that everything would be fine. The man looked at the girl and felt the warmth from her words. Suddenly, Theodore also called out to His Highness, confirming the girl's words. Putting his hand to his chest, the man said that they were ready to give their lives for him, and a chuckle was heard from the side. Touching his face thoughtfully with his finger, Valerian said that, as he had said, he would be on the prince's side. The prince bowed his head, closing his eyes and thanking everyone present. Turning to them, he said that they had something very important to do first. They needed to destroy this room full of curses. The next day, the palace was very busy. The woman stood with her hands pressed to her chest and sobbed. The prince asked her what happened. Without holding back her emotions, the woman screamed, "Who could have done this? They must find the culprit and punish him." The man asked the woman to calm down, saying that he was completely fine. However, the woman continued to cry, saying that she heard that he was going to destroy the room, but did he think it through well, since his safety was their top priority? The girl watched as the woman placed her hand on the prince's shoulder, and as he thanked her for her worries. The girl thought that now she knew that there was a traitor among them. And despite the woman's reaction, Madame Roblon cannot be ruled out as a suspect. After all, it was she who brought you the poisonous flowers. The girl did not understand whether the woman was really worried about the prince's case, or whether she was simply trying to get rid of suspicion. Pressing her hands to the man, the woman said she believed in his decision. The woman said that getting rid of the room was probably right, but it was better to look for evidence sooner or to postpone the destruction. The prince thanked Betty again for her concern, and Rosetta wondered whether she was wrong or not. The clock struck, reminding those gathered that a lot of time had passed. The prince announced that he had to go to the meeting, after which the woman apologized for keeping him. Bowing to the prince, the girl asked him to take care of himself. The prince looked at the girl with a smile, promising her this. The embarrassed girl, with her mouth slightly open, looked at the man. The man walked down the white corridor to the meeting that would decide the fate of the room. After hearing about the curses, the man moved to a shelter, but officially changing his place of residence was not easy. The room that Armand had used for generations was used by the heirs of the Ragnar Empire. This was an important part of the story, and the prince's desire to get rid of the rooms caused resistance from the nobles, which is why the meeting was called. One of the men confidently said that the curse was nonsense and asked whether the priest would not have noticed anything earlier. Another man noted that the curse detection ball was also very dubious and that it was some kind of nonsense. Someone started to say that rumors that His Highness was going crazy were possible, not noticing that the prince had already arrived. The men sitting at the table were a little embarrassed by this. Armand cleared his throat and said that it seemed like many people wanted to speak, so they should start the meeting. One of the men raised his hand, asking permission to speak first. The prince looked closely at the speaker, realizing that he knew him. The speaker was Count Mortmar and was the Empress's brother. Sitting down more comfortably, the prince allowed him to begin. The man said the priests searched his room for several hours and found nothing. The prince casually remarked that the priests did not have the necessary abilities for this. The man cleared his throat, considering his answer. After which he said that insulting the Temple of Fenlir is an insult to the state religion. Turning to the archbishop, he asked if they had checked the room and found traces of curses. Looking at the prince, he said that this meant that his item that detected the curse did not work, and he did not even know where this thing came from. The crown prince took advantage of these words and began to speak. He mockingly said that some weirdo had managed to deceive his younger brother, and now it had come to a meeting. Feeling his victory, the man pointed his finger at the prince and said that it was possible that his brother was unwell. Both princes looked at each other without looking away, and there was a tense silence between them. The prince became angry and called Greyhan a real bastard. A female voice rang out, noticing that she had already asked the prince to be more careful with his words. The empress, a beautiful blonde in a black dress with a look of authority on her face, entered the assembly room. All the men stood up from their seats, bowing their heads to her and greeting her. Grinning, the woman asked the prince if she had the right to be there. Armand asked with a smile if there was a place where the eldest member of the imperial family could not go. Sitting down, the woman said that she was in a hurry when she heard that the prince was ill. She was so worried that she did not even have time to pick out an outfit. The prince smiled internally because he could appear at a banquet in such a dress. However, the prince was not afraid of her words. Only idiots like Greyhan could be afraid of her. Feeling his mother's support, the prince began to talk about how His Highness was not feeling well and was making his own mother worry, and that was why there were strange rumors circulating among the people. Looking at the speaker, Armand said that he asked to refrain from such baseless accusations, to which the man asked if he was interested in rumors. The prince chuckled. He was pleased that he had decided to mention his madness during the meeting, and now he would see how it would turn out for him, after which he asked what these rumors were. Greyhen confidently said that they said that His Highness the Crown Prince was crazy. Armand was pleased with this statement and, smiling happily, asked if it was true. Leaning on his elbows, he said that everyone knew that the local priest examined him daily, and he had said nothing of the sort, and as Count Mortmar had mentioned earlier, such a thing was an insult and an attack on the honor of the state faith. The man, in turn, began to nervously wipe the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief, saying that yes, in general, he agreed with this statement. The man's hand slammed down on the table. Greyhan jumped up from his seat and started shouting about how priests couldn't know everything, and Armand was only confirming the rumors by following the liars. A woman's hand in a beautiful lace glove rose up, stopping the prince's speech. The woman lowered her head and said that she shouldn't raise her voice, at least out of respect for her brother, because he was very soft-hearted. Looking at the prince, she said that he could not, on a whim, suggest destroying such an important room for the empire, and if this would calm him down, she would give permission and her soul would feel better. However, she continued that there was something else they should talk about. Looking at the prince, the empress said that she heard that he had a rather close relationship with one of the servants. Artificially worrying, the woman said that she was his mother and therefore worried that he had a lover before the wedding. He blindly believed in the existence of curses and can't prove it in any way. Is it possible that this woman deceived him? The man clenched his fist. He knew that one day the empress would learn of Rosetta's existence, but he couldn't understand how she dared to insult the girl. Closing his eyes, the man urged himself to calm down. At the right time, when he could take revenge, it would come. Suddenly someone knocked on the door of the meeting room. Everyone turned towards the door. I don't understand who could have come. Smiling happily, the man who came in said how, with such superficial knowledge, they could make such loud statements. Those present were amazed by the appearance of this man. Those around doubted whether they really saw him. The man who entered, bowed, introduced himself, Valerian Windsorfried, and he greeted the princes and the empress. The empress spoke with displeasure, saying that no matter how great a magician he was, he had no right to barge into the meetings. Her speech was abruptly interrupted by Armand, who was looking at the magician, saying that it was he who invited him, after which the man asked not to worry so much, otherwise the empress's fragile heart could suffer. The woman was unhappy. Everything did not go according to her plan. One of the men asked why the prince had invited the magician, to which he replied that the object in question had been created by him. One of the men immediately asked indignantly whether it was true that His Highness's chambers were cursed. The prince calmly confirmed this to Duke Runiel, who asked why the high priest had found nothing. The high priest, realizing the mess he was in, began to try to somehow whitewash himself. The man said hesitantly that the curse was quite difficult to detect without long-term observation. The count immediately cried out, asking whether the man who was supposed to serve His Majesty had jumped to conclusions. The high priest fell silent, looking questioningly at Greyhan, expecting help. The prince pretended that he had nothing to do with it, and that this topic did not concern him in any way. The high priest bowed his head, realizing that he had no choice. After this, several decisions were made at the meeting. Firstly, the empress and Greyhan did not support the priest, and it was decided to send him to the Vatican to discuss the priest's situation. They didn't destroy the room. It would take a long time to break the curses, so they simply closed it. As for the crystal ball, the meeting ended with Valerian explaining how to create it. The prince walked down the corridor, wondering where the girl was. He had a lot to tell her. Suddenly the man heard the girl calling him. Turning around, he saw a girl smiling and asking him how the meeting went. The girl didn't have time to say that the prince was probably tired, as he hugged her, kissing her on the back of the head. Addressing the girl, the prince asked her to stand like this. The girl stood excitedly pressed against the prince and felt her face burning. She felt very comfortable and at peace in the prince's arms. Suddenly, the girl noticed Valerian, who, with his arms folded across his chest, was looking gloomily at the hugging couple. The three continued to stand in the corridor. Valerian continued to grow darker as he looked at the tenderly embracing couple. Looking at the girl, the man mentally asked what kind of relationship she had with this degenerate. The girl, looking at the magician, still mentally said that they have no relationship. They are the master and the knight, Lena. The girl tried to push the prince away and saying that there are other people here. Pushing the girl away, the prince said that it was his fault. With a sweet face, he bowed his head down and asked for forgiveness, saying that he was sorry for causing her inconvenience. The girl looked at the prince, who was acting like a guilty cat, thinking that he had finally noticed it himself. Looking at the prince, the girl thought that he was very cute, like a cat that had been caught playing tricks. Valerian continued to look at the girl, mentally ordering her to come to her senses. The embarrassed girl asked the prince if he was tired and whether she should take him to his room, and offered to bring him some relaxing tea, to which the prince agreed. The man looked at the girl, who turned to him sharply. She said that His Highness needed rest, and therefore he should leave. Valerian was shocked by this turn of events. He did not expect this from the girl. The girl was surprised that the meeting had just ended, and the prince had already received a new room. Armand told the girl that the matter was serious, and therefore they had to act quickly. Bringing a glass of coffee to his face, he said that, in addition, in 3 days, a banquet and hunting festival would begin. The girl remembered the festival, but she had far from happy memories. It was there that she first lost His Highness. If she wants to protect him, she must take part, but only partners can be present. The girl thought that perhaps she should have continued to say that she was going to die soon. Then she could have asked to accompany the prince. And then she remembered the dress she had ordered from the shop, asking if it had been sent to Lady Runiel. The prince was surprised by her question. The dress had not been sent anywhere. The prince said that the dress suited her perfectly. Rosetta was surprised it was true, but in the girl's opinion it was not meant for her. After which the man, looking at the girl, clarified that the dress was bought exclusively for her. The man extended his palm towards the girl, after which he asked her heartfeltly if she would go to the festival with him. Rosetta opened her mouth and began to speak hesitantly. The girl covered her mouth with her hands, realizing that she almost asked why he chose her. After which, she completely covered her face with her hands, thinking what would happen if she refused. The prince did not understand the girl. Was she really so touched that she lost the power of speech? The girl thought that there were only 3 days left, and he would not be able to appear at the final alone. Otherwise, Graham would remind him of this forever. The girl also thought about what would happen to Lady Runiella, who had done nothing wrong, but she felt sorry for the girl. The girl told the prince that she was a maid and did not have the proper status. The prince could not appear there with her. If they were in a different position, she would certainly be happy with such a proposal, to which the prince said that they had decided everything. The girl froze in shock, not understanding how the prince had not understood her words. Armand said that the girl's origin would not be a problem. She was the only one to whom he would give his heart and body. When the girl asked how their Lady Runiel was, since she was his fiancée, he replied that he didn't know where she heard it. The prince said that he was not his father and had no intention of doing anything so immoral and would never dare to tie the knot with several women at once. After which he looked at the girl, addressing her affectionately, Rosie. The man said that on the day of the banquet, he would tell her something official. The girl froze when she heard the prince say that this was why she had to be next to him. The next day, the girl was inattentive while cleaning the hallway, and she kept thinking about the same thing. While washing the dishes, she remembered all the unusual actions and unusual words. Putting together the puzzle of events, the girl began to guess what the reason for such behavior was. The plate slipped out of her hands. The plate shattered into small pieces when the girl realized that the prince liked her. The girl felt that if he really loved her, then this was very joyful and exciting news. But first and foremost, she was still a knight. A knight who had witnessed the prince's death several times before. She and the prince had a strong bond, but could she handle it? The girl was already lying in bed and thinking that these were useless worries, and if the prince confessed, she would be able to refuse him. There was a soft sound of footsteps. Without opening her eyes, the girl thought about what these steps were, what else he wanted to tell her. The man approached the girl's bed, after which he called her affectionately, calling her by name. The girl sleepily opened her eyes, looking at the man who entered. The next moment, the prince was already lying on the girl, trying to kiss her. The girl clutched the pillow with her hands. The clock struck, reminding us of the time that had passed. The man and woman's lips parted, letting out a feverish breath. The worried girl tried to make the prince wake up, but he continued to say what he wanted. Looking into her eyes with a magical gaze, he said that she wanted him too. The excited and agitated girl with a red face looked at the prince. The man took the girl by the wrist. At that moment, she thought about how the priest treated the prince every day. However, it was not possible to completely get rid of the symptoms, the girl thought, sighing under the man. Apparently, he was over-nervous at the meeting, she decided, and with a ragged breath, she tried to call the prince. The girl fell silent, thoughts disappearing from her head. The man pulled away from the girl, rising above her. Rosetta stopped feeling the man's caresses and opened her eyes, not understanding why he suddenly froze. Armand clutched his head and asked the girl why he was here. They both sat on the edge of the bed in absolute silence. Gathering his strength, the man told the girl that he wanted to hear something and hesitantly asked if he had attacked her. Bowing her head, the girl quietly confirmed his guess. After waiting for an answer, he asked to clarify whether he had attacked her with the intention of beating her, and the girl again confirmed this. Trying to defuse the situation, the girl noted that everything was fine and she was in complete control of the situation. The prince clasped his hand on his knee and said that he had let it happen again. He fell to his knees in front of the girl and asked her for forgiveness. He hung his head and said that he had nothing to say in his defense, even if he had 10 mouths to feed. Rosetta waved her hands excitedly, asking what His Highness was doing and asking him to rise. Despite the girl, the prince continued to say that he had acted terribly and that his condition should not justify an attempt to humiliate her. Please, looking at the man, the girl said that there was no need to apologize. She understood that it was not easy for him and asked him to get up. Armand said that this had never happened before. Rosetta looked at the prince, waiting for him to continue. Armand said that when he became a beast, he always gained weight, took it out on people, but he never tried to do what he did to her with anyone. The girl was surprised by what was said. Why then was there such a difference in the conduct with her? The prince had only one guess on this matter. After that, he gently took her hand in his. He said that his behavior was a reflection of unconscious desires. Rose froze in shock rather than him wanting something like this to happen. She looked at the prince and wondered if he really liked her. The man said that no words could make amends for his guilt. He was sincerely sorry and promised that this would not happen again. Looking at the girl and pressing his hand to his chest, he said that if he tried to do something crazy, then she should throw him out and maybe even hit him. The girl asked in confusion why he should do this and thought that in that case he might even die. However, the man did not let up and asked her to promise this. The man admitted that he did not want to kiss her while his vision was clouded by madness. The girl asked in a quiet voice what this meant. The girl leaned closer to the prince, asking if he really in his right mind wanted the same thing. Crossing their fingers and looking into her eyes without looking away, he asked why she was asking about this, after which he moved even closer to the girl. Their lips parted, both wanting a kiss. However, suddenly the man moved away a little, silently looking at the girl, after which he also stood up without a word. Turning his back to her, he said that now was not the best moment for a kiss. Leaving the confused girl on the floor, he apologized for waking her and said that now she could relax. The girl, slowly coming to her senses, sighed deeply, after which she plopped back down on the bed with all her might. Throwing her hand over her forehead and closing her eyes, she thought that he definitely wasn't indifferent to her. The girl was surprised at how long it took her to realize this. Morning came, life in the castle began to spin again. A gloomy Valerian stood and demanded an explanation from the girl. He asked the confused girl why this scoundrel hugged her yesterday. The girl stood there, fiddling with her fingers. She stuttered, not knowing how to start the conversation. The girl's face turned red when she said that the man would not believe her, because it seemed that the prince liked her. The man was surprised that the prince had confessed to her. Looking away, the girl said that the prince had not confessed to her yet. But then she looked at the man who asked what about her. Valerian wondered what he felt, Rosetta, after which he asked her directly if she liked the prince. The blushing girl, stammering and looking away, said that of course not. How could she allow herself to do such a thing? After which she asked the man not to talk nonsense. How dare she fall in love with him? The man clenched his fist. He was dissatisfied with the girl's words. He believed that this prince had no right to fall in love with Rosetta. However, he was worried that the girl was resolutely denying everything, after which he decided to ask what she would do if the prince suddenly confessed to her. The girl fell silent, looking at the floor. She said that if she refused him, they would break up, then she would not be able to protect him, and this made her even more worried. The man listened silently to the girl's conclusions, after which the girl said that in addition to all this, the prince has Lady Runiella. Looking at the man, the girl said that for this reason she could not accept His Highness's feelings, and this was natural. The man was extremely happy with the girl's words. Hugging the girl, he said that she was right and that getting involved with such a degenerate would be a waste of time. Leaning towards the girl, the man said that when she first told him about the prince's engagement, he was skeptical. But then he heard the Duke's words and realized that it was possible. The girl, smiling happily, said that they would see what happened at the banquet. The man asked if there would be a girl there, to which she replied that she would be there, but not as a servant. Embarrassed, the girl admitted that she would be His Highness's companion. The man smiled grimly, thinking that Rose was not letting her guard down for a moment, and then said that he would go too then. The girl was surprised because usually a man does not go to such places. Taking her hand, the man said that he would have to do it to protect her, after which the man raised her hand to his mouth, kissing it tenderly. The girl froze in confusion, looking at the man. The carriage moved forward, the wheels clanging loudly on the pavement. The girl sitting in the carriage thought that the man was behaving very strangely. He said that he would accompany her and asked why she did not want to reveal their relationship to the world, wondering if she was ashamed of him. The girl said that if they told, it would be awkward to pretend in front of His Highness that they were strangers, and some unpleasant misunderstanding might also occur. The man looked at the girl gloomily. He had nothing against misunderstandings. Rosetta rode in the carriage and wondered what the man had been thinking about lately, why he had become so insolent. Melanie saw a girl walking down the corridor. Maloney said they were just talking about her. Rosetta asked what the collection was. The girl excitedly said that something amazing had happened. Rosetta could not understand what had happened. She asked excitedly if this concerned His Highness. However, the girl reassured her, saying that it did not apply to the prince, but rather applied specifically to her. The girl did not understand how this applied to her. While setting off the fireworks, the girl said that they had heard that Rose would be the prince's partner at the banquet, and rumors had already spread throughout the palace. The girl became embarrassed, saying that she didn't know how this happened, mentally wondering where they found out about it. Suddenly, Melanie took Rose's hands in hers, saying that from that moment on they promised to help her. The girl did not understand what exactly she needed help with, since there were still 2 days before the banquet. Melanie said that they would prepare her for the celebration, and unfortunately these days would not be enough. Taking the girl's reaction, I asked if she also liked their sincerity. Melanie said they even dedicated their rare weekends to it. Rosetta was amazed that they spent their weekends. Rose didn't understand why the girls went to such extreme measures, but Melanie pulled her by the hand, saying that she hoped the girl would understand them. In order to prepare Rosetta for the banquet, a huge amount of cosmetics was selected. The girl applied cream to her hands, after which she lay on the couch while all the other girls worked on her body. Rosetta thought she was lucky that she could just lie quietly while the others helped her prepare for the banquet. Her thoughts were interrupted by Melanie, who asked if she had had dinner that day. The girl tried to answer, but then the cream that Melanie was smearing on her face got into her mouth. The girl indignantly told her not to talk while she was smearing the product on her face. Rosetta wondered why she had to ask her about anything then. Melanie went on to say that she probably hadn't had time yet, and so, until the day of the banquet, during snacks, she should only eat a piece of bread, but nothing else. Rosetta tried to object to this, but immediately got cream in her mouth. Melanie again said that she asked her not to talk. The most long-awaited time for the girl has arrived, the night, under the cover of which it is possible to commit a crime. Walking barefoot on the cold floor, the girl walked towards her desired goal. She walked into the kitchen in her nightgown, staring at the vegetables. The girl was too hungry to sleep. Looking at the products, she thought about whether being beautiful was really that difficult. Perhaps it was even more difficult than learning the art of a blade. As she reached out for the bread, she thought about just eating one piece. However, she suddenly shuddered when she heard a voice calling her name. Melanie stood in the kitchen doorway, asking if the girl was planning to eat more while she wasn't looking. Turning around, she smiled nervously, saying of course not, thinking about how she, a swordmaster, couldn't notice the girl approaching her. Melanie told her that on the day of the celebration, the prince would come personally to accompany her, and until then, she should be more responsible. Rosetta could not refuse the girl, considering that she was so kind to her. While Rosetta was suffering from the weight, trying to calm her hungry stomach, the day of the banquet arrived. The girl began preparing for the banquet early in the morning. The milliner was making the final adjustments to the dress. Melanie was doing her hair. Everyone was trying to help the girl look perfect. However, the girl didn't care about this at all. She looked impatiently at the door, waiting for the prince to appear. She had not seen him since that night and was eagerly awaiting his appearance. Just the thought of meeting him made her nervous. The girl sighed, trying to calm herself down. She was preparing herself that if he confessed to her, then she would calmly refuse him, and she would not have to worry about anything. The girl suddenly opened her eyes, hearing a male voice asking if she was there. The door began to open, but it was not yet possible to see who had come. The girl looked at the door excitedly, waiting. Her expectations were met. Armand really did enter the room. The man looked at the girl attentively, without saying a word. The girl looked at the prince and was nervous. She did not understand why he was silent when he looked at her. The worried girl even thought that such outfits did not suit her, who was used to the uniform of knights. Suddenly, the prince said that this was too much. Everyone present looked at the prince in surprise. However, the man continued his sentence, smiling, saying that she was too beautiful. The girl immediately relaxed and smiled, greeting the prince. Looking at this picture, everyone else froze in emotion. The carriage wheels were clattering very quickly along the pavement as the couple hurried to the banquet. Looking at the girl sitting opposite him, the man asked if it was possible that the girl was uncomfortable. The girl said that she was fine, but she thought that she did not dare show that she was embarrassed. Trying to change the subject, The girl asked if the prince was hot because his clothes looked too warm for summer, to which the man asked if there was anything else she could say. The girl asked in bewilderment what the prince meant. The man smiled and said that he wanted to look good for one special person, so he chose the best outfit. Leaning forward, leaning on his elbow, he asked the girl to appreciate his outfit. The girl looked at the prince in amazement, calling on the saints. The girl did not understand why he was behaving this way, and hesitantly said that he looked very noble, to which the prince replied that her words were an honor for him. The man said that by the time they arrived, many nobles would already be in the palace, and therefore all attention would be focused on her, and asked her to inform him if anyone disturbed her. The girl decided to ask what would happen in that case. Putting his hand to his neck, the man slyly asked the girl what she thought he could do. The girl looked at the prince with huge eyes, not daring to say anything in response. Realizing that the girl would not answer him, he simply asked her to stay close, to which Rosetta agreed, thinking that it would be increasingly difficult to refuse him. It quickly became dark, and finally the carriage arrived at its destination. Giving his hand to the girl to help her down, the prince called the girl to come with him. He waited patiently for the girl to offer him her hand. Finally, the girl carefully offered him her hand, gently touching his palm with her fingers. The couple entered the hall holding hands, at which moment a greeting was given in honor of His Highness the Crown Prince. All the people turned to look at the entrance. The herald announced that His Highness Armand Baldwin von Ragnar, Crown Prince of the Great Empire of Ragnar, had arrived. He also announced that the prince's partner was Rosetta Mayfield. People also began to whisper that the prince had brought a lady with him. By naming the girl's last name, they tried to understand what kind of family it was. Someone mentioned that he had heard that this girl was a servant, and Rosetta expected such a reaction. In her past lives, people said that she became His Highness's knight because she seduced him with her body. Suddenly, someone blocked their way. Valerian bowed in greeting to the prince. The man asked him quite casually how he was doing. Whispers immediately ran through the crowd, saying that the rumors were true and the Archmage was now really on His Highness's side and looked very happy. People wondered what the prince had done to deserve such adoration from the Archmage. The man looked at the girl without stopping, thinking that today she was simply dazzling, while she, in turn, turned her face away, feeling how he literally looked at her without stopping. Armand admitted that the presence of the magician surprised him greatly, to which Valerian said that he simply had to appear, since His Highness had come here. The girl was thinking that she was glad that the man knew how to separate business and personal life. At this time, the prince said that he appreciated the words of the magician, but he should not have forced himself. The prince, noticing the magician's attention to the girl, asked if he had any business with his partner. Valerian, smiling calmly, said that he was simply amazed by her beauty. Hearing this, the girl mentally took her words back. The prince, growing gloomy, thanked him for the compliment. The girl felt how the awkward situation was heating up. The couple moved on. They needed to greet the emperor and empress. Bowing before the throne, the prince said that he and his father had not seen each other for a long time, and His Majesty confirmed the prince's words. Reacting to the exchange of greetings, the empress spoke with a smile. She said that this was the first time their son had brought a lady with him, and that His Majesty would like to know more about her. Rosetta smiled sweetly, understanding what the woman was up to. After which, holding her dress, she bowed down, saying that she greeted the emperor and empress of the Ragnar Empire, announcing that she was Rosetta Mayfield from the family of Baron Mayfield. The empress looked with displeasure at the girl, who had prepared for such a situation and studied etiquette in advance. And the woman narrowed her eyes, considering her next line of attack, after which she asked how the girl works in the palace of Armand. Valerian watched the situation closely from the side. Realizing that the situation was getting tense, he moved forward, interrupting the empress's speech. He bowed, greeting the empress and the emperor, after which he immediately asked for forgiveness for interrupting Her Majesty. The woman generously pretended that everything was fine. Rosetta thought that, as always, Valerian arrived on time. The emperor greeted the mage, asking what brought him here. Valerian declared that he and the prince had formed a special relationship, so he could not refuse him. Rosetta watched everything that was happening, thinking that now the nobles and the imperial family personally saw how friendly the prince and Valerian were. All this will help Armand, strengthening his position on the path to the throne. The girl smiled, thinking that people would certainly want to see just such a ruler on the throne. However, being a prince's partner was much more difficult than being a personal knight. The girl thought that her lips would cramp up. Suddenly, a man approached them, asking how His Highness had been feeling lately. The man was Duke Runiel, Lady Runiel's father. The prince said that thanks to him, he was in good health. The man expressed relief at the news and asked him to discuss something in private. The girl, realizing that they might be talking about a potential marriage, thought that she needed to leave quickly, after which she told His Highness that she would try the treat and rest. She was a little hungry. However, the man immediately asked if everything would be okay, to which the girl responded with consent. The man asked her not to go anywhere and to wait for him. He reminded the girl that he had something to tell her. The girl tasted the cake, wondering if the prince was going to confess. She wondered if he refused the Duke's offer, wouldn't Lady Runiella be upset about it? In this case, she will feel very guilty. Suddenly someone approached the girl, exclaiming loudly. The girl from the fashion boutique, sarcastically asking if this was the first time Rose had tried such a dish. This girl was Ashley Bubbles, and the last time they met she made a fool of Rose. Rose asked, smiling affectionately, who it was, and then answered that it was Lady Bubbles, from a weak and pitiful family. The girl spread her arms out to the side, saying that it was very rude of her, to which Rose asked if the girl thought that she would actually say such terrible words to her. Approaching the girl, she said that she simply repeated the phrase that Ashley said in the boutique. Her face reminded her of that incident, so she couldn't hold back. The girl blushed with anger, while Rosetta, mockingly, told her that the girl needed to return to studying etiquette, because the Viscount would certainly be disappointed if he heard her speeches. In this speech duel, Rosetta was clearly winning, her opponent was receiving blow after blow. Ashley was incredibly angry. How could this impudent woman consider herself better just because of an expensive dress? Trying to calm down, the girl said that yes, they had met last time, after which she decided to correct this by introducing herself and asking what Rosetta's name was. The girl calmly introduced herself and her name, thinking that now she could change the subject. Ashley mockingly said that it was the first time she had heard the name of such a family, to which Rosetta thought that she had encountered such a phrase for a long time and was already bored with it. The girl mockingly said that it seemed that Rose did not really know anything about high society, and she could show her a decent studio, to which the girl asked in surprise if the dress she was wearing was not good enough. The girl looked intently at the dress that Rosetta was wearing. Looking embarrassed, Rosetta said that since her appearance, everyone has been looking only at her, and this even embarrasses her. After which she laughed, saying that if the girl thought this outfit was bad, then she asked to name the studio that would provide a better option. Ashley was incredibly angry at the girl's reaction, thinking about how to respond to her. She didn't want to fool herself, this dress was simply amazing. Looking at the girl, she thought that she was tired of the clothes from the boutique, but she had to wear them since there was nothing else. Ashley thought that everyone would probably be wondering where they could find such a beautiful dress. She clutched her dress in her fist, holding back her emotions. How infuriating the arrogance of this servant was. Did she really think that the prince was more favorable to her than anyone else? After which she cheerfully asked who cared about Rose's cheap shop. However, she was immediately interrupted by others who said that they were very curious. The people around her said that the girl was simply too proud and was making a fuss over nothing, and in her place they would have died of shame. Why did she refuse such an opportunity? Ashley noticed that the behavior of people around her had changed. She didn't understand what was happening because this had never happened before. Trying to vent her anger, she shouted to the maid to bring her some wine, after which she grabbed a glass from a maid passing by. The girl drank wine without stopping, thinking that she would get this servant drunk and teach her a lesson. However, Ashley's eyes suddenly widened. The girl, who had just taken a sip of wine, spat it back out, splashing it in all directions. The people around her shouted that she had ruined their dress and that this girl was nothing but trouble. Holding a glass of wine in her hand, Ashley asked what was in the glass and why the wine was so sour. The maid next to the girl rushed to her, saying that she would wipe everything off now. Taking a closer look at the girl, Rose noticed that it was Melanie. Rosetta was surprised by this turn of events. Most likely she added vinegar to the wine to protect her. Melanie was very pleased. She would not allow anyone to hurt their Rosetta. Ashley attacked Melanie, saying that she had done something with the wine. Melanie apologized and asked why she was blaming her. The finally angry girl swung, saying how dare she and whether she knows who is in front of her. The glass fell out of his hands and broke into small pieces on the floor. Melanie, who was covering her face, opened her eyes and there was no blow. Rosetta intercepted Ashley's hand as it attempted to hit Melanie. The girl looked at Rosetta in surprise when she heard her icy voice. Continuing to speak in her icy voice, she said that the girl was simply not used to the taste of expensive wine, and therefore she should stop blaming others for it. Ashley even trembled from suppressed anger. She tried to say something, but because of her emotions, she could not utter a word. The frightened girl could not understand where Rosetta got so much strength from. Smiling kindly, Rosetta told Ashley to be careful, or she would get into trouble if she didn't stop acting like that. Suddenly, another female voice asked them to stop this mess. The women turned towards the voice in surprise. It was Lady Runiella asking them how they could have caused a scene in the ballroom. Had they really lost their minds? Approaching Ashley, she said that insulting the prince's partner was the worst decision. Did the girl think about how it would affect her in the eyes of the world? Ashley tried to protest, but the girl said that she did not want to listen to excuses. Approaching Rosetta, the girl slightly bowed her head and introduced herself, saying that her name was Paisley and she was the daughter of Duke Runiel. Rosetta did not understand why the girl was helping her, because in her eyes, she should have looked like the prince's lover. Paisley asked the girl if she minded if they talked on the balcony, and Rosetta agreed. The girl stood on the balcony, admiring the beautiful view. Rosetta wondered if the girl was going to insult her in private. She propped her forehead on her hand and thought that she still didn't know what to say. She was sure that anyone would be embarrassed to be near their fiancé's mistress. Paisley handed Rosetta a glass of wine, asking if she liked sweet wine. Rose extended her hand towards the glass, saying that she liked it. Rose, who had expected such behavior from the girl, took the glass in her hands. The girl tasted the wine, realizing that it was very tasty. At this point, the girl asked Rosetta not to be too formal with her because she would like to address her by name, and she did not object. Rosetta was about to take another sip of wine when she heard Paisley calling her name. She said that she knew that Rose was not in a relationship with the prince, and from these words the girl froze with a glass in her hand. Noticing Rose's surprise, she said that the prince would not have a mistress. Rose said that yes, of course, she was not his lover. Waving her hand, she said that she was not his mate, and was only there because he had no other options. But Paisley didn't believe it, saying that the prince would rather go alone than with a man he didn't know. Looking at the girl, Rose did not understand what she was thinking about. They definitely had a misunderstanding. The girl, tense with such thoughts, tried to relax. Looking at Rosetta, the girl admitted that she had no feelings for the crown prince. Rosetta was amazed. She had no idea about it. At this point, the girl continued speaking, saying that she was not interested in the prince at all. Rosetta froze when she heard that the girl was interested in her. Paisley said that when she saw how easily Rose put Ashley down, she knew there was something special about her. Rosetta began to worry, wondering if the girl had noticed a splash of mana or something like that. At this point, the girl said that they would have a lot to talk about, but that would come later. I turned to the entrance to the balcony. She said that another guest wanted to see her, and she should leave them already. Rosetta looked at the man's shadow, wondering when His Highness had arrived. Having said goodbye to the girl and said that they would see each other, Lady Runiella left the balcony. The girl was amazed. Could Paisley really have arranged a personal conversation with the prince for her? A man entering the balcony called out to a girl. Looking at her, he said that he had something to tell her. The man asked the girl if she had drunk a lot because she smelled of alcohol, but according to his observations, she was not drunk. Rosetta reassured the prince by telling him that she would not get drunk from one glass of wine. The prince said that he was pleased to hear this, because one cannot talk about such topics with drunk people. The girl stood there, fiddling with her fingers, nervously awaiting further conversation. Coming closer to the girl, the man said that his position was still unstable. After these words, the man raised his hand, touching the girl's neck. Holding a lock of her hair in his hands, he said that he loved her. But he loves her so much that he cannot control his emotions. Rose looked at the man, putting her hand to her chest. She expected this, but she still couldn't verify what was happening. Her heart beat too fast when His Highness was nearby. She didn't understand why she could never push away the lips that were approaching her. And she also didn't understand why she had to search within herself again and again for the determination to refuse him. Perhaps the reason for these whys was her love for him. The girl's eyes reflected only the image of a man. She also loved him very much. Suddenly the girl asked why the prince liked her. The man said there were too many reasons, turning his head to the side, but the girl still asked him to name them. The man said that he liked her blue eyes, which looked straight at him. He also likes her blushing cheeks and her lips that curl into a beautiful smile. The man said she was a little shy. Besides this, she is strong at heart, although she seems very fragile. The girl's voice conveys all her thoughts without hesitation. Touching her cheek, he said that all her features were very sweet and amazing. Smiling, the man asked how he could not love her if she breathed life into him. In response to the confession, the girl said that it was too much. The girl asked how she could push him away after such words. Putting her hand on his chest, she said that she loved him too. The man looked at the girl without looking away and as if not breathing. Armand hugged the girl and asked if she would allow him to be with her. The girl, moved to tears, agreed. The man put his hand into the inside pocket of his tailcoat. The man opened the box and said that he wanted to give her a necklace that was similar to his, since he was worried about her jewelry, which was less shiny. The girl thought that the same jewelry was very cute, after which she thanked the prince. Moving even closer to the girl, the man asked if he could kiss her. Smiling, the girl quietly agreed. Hugging, he kissed the girl. It was the most desired kiss in his life. Without thinking, the man moved closer and closer to the girl. The girl looked at the man with excitement. They did not take their eyes off each other, and there was only one thought in their heads. The man really wanted to embrace her, but he couldn't do it here. He thought about how he couldn't let Rosetta hate him. Understanding him at a glance, the girl asked if they should return to their house. The man looked at the girl excitedly, thinking about her words. Realizing what was said, the girl waved her hands sharply, saying that she meant that it was time for them to go home and did not mean anything in the hidden meaning. And she was very embarrassed that she had expressed herself unclearly. The man agreed, saying that they had spent a lot of time there and that they could leave. The carriage drove quickly to the prince's palace, carrying people whose lives had been completely turned upside down. The couple who had confessed to each other sat opposite each other. They didn't even dare touch each other. Looking at the man, the girl thought that before it seemed to her that the love story that Melanie liked was complicated, but now she suddenly understood everything. Having arrived home, the girl thought that they would go to their rooms and rest. The girl suddenly felt like it was just a dream, after which she called the prince. Looking at the prince, the girl offered him a drink. Armand looked at the girl, not understanding what she meant. There was a bottle of wine and glasses on the table. The girl thought that she didn't want to leave the feeling that nothing had happened. Without touching their glasses, the couple sat on the sofa, hugging and kissing each other. They kissed each other passionately, occasionally stopping to take a breath. While kissing the prince, the girl thought that she had gone crazy. When the man, kissing her, pushed her onto the sofa, she thought that they kissed completely differently on the balcony. Breaking away from the girl, he looked at her affectionately, calling her. Rosetta didn't even suspect that he had such a side. The man gently caressed the girl's neck with his lips, and she sighed deeply. He continued kissing the girl without stopping, intertwining their hands. Rose did not understand how unexpectedly they found themselves in such a position. However, suddenly the man tore himself away from the girl. He sat up, rubbing his face with his palm to come to his senses, after which he said that they should wait, and that was enough. Without removing his hands from his face, the man said that he did not want to do anything immediately after he confessed, and besides, he was also drunk. The girl looked at the man with a dazed look and said what she wanted. She wanted the prince to be safe, and I also wanted to see him when he turned 34. The girl thought that even if he didn't like her, all she needed was for him to be healthy. Rosetta looked the man in the eye without stopping, honestly and directly saying that she wanted him. Holding on with all his might, the man asked her one last question. Would she regret it? The girl, smiling, looked at the man, saying that this would not happen. The man, unable to restrain himself, attacked the girl. Morning came. The sun was shining brightly, warming the earth. The girl, with her mouth slightly open, looked at the marks on her neck. The girl looked at her reflection and thought that this was an absolute nightmare. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by a man who entered the room wearing only trousers. Asking if she had slept well, the girl asked if His Highness had woken up yet. Suppressing a chuckle, the man asked what she called him, since yesterday she had called him something completely different. The girl remembered that yesterday, in a fit of passion, she asked the man to stop, calling him by name. And the man asked the girl to repeat and repeat his name because it drove him crazy. The girl, with her mouth slightly open, looked at the man. She thought that she had gone completely mad. How could she call the prince by name? Smiling nervously, the girl said that she thought it was time for her to return to work since her day off was over. The man was surprised. He said that she could no longer work as a maid. However, the door was already closing behind the girl, who wished him a good day. The man stood amazed, looking after the girl. He did not expect her to run away from him so quickly. The girl walked down the corridor, holding her head. She thought that if she touched alcohol again, she would end up with a dog. She tried not to think about the most important thing, because entering into a relationship with someone you were protecting was very dangerous for a night. The girl thought that if His Highness died again, time would turn back. And this time, she will have to watch her beloved disappear, and not just her master. The gloomy girl wondered if she could stand it. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by a male voice asking someone if he had seen a girl. The girl looked at the prince who was talking to the man. She wondered if he was looking for her. As she turned around, the girl thought that this couldn't happen. The girl walked away from the man who didn't see her. Only one thought flashed through her head. She needed to run. The girl stood around the corner with her head down. The prince was more persistent than she expected. Suddenly, the girl's thoughts were interrupted again by someone calling her name. The girl saw Melanie, who asked where she was going in such a hurry. Rosetta said that she was going to work. Melanie was very surprised. Was she really going to clean up? Melanie was puzzled. Apparently something was wrong with the prince. It seemed like something went wrong. Rosetta thanked the girl for her help yesterday, to which Melanie replied that she should be the one thanking her because she owed her a lot. Handing Rosetta a ribbon, she said that she had prepared a gift. Giving the girl the gift, Melanie said that it was a thing for adults and told her to hide it quickly. Rosetta was excited. She asked why she was giving her such a thing. Melanie was surprised by this question, saying that it was written all over her neck and that the previous night had apparently been fun. The girl shuddered, opening her mouth in surprise, realizing that everyone had seen them. Clenching her hands into fists, she told Melanie that she had misunderstood them. His Highness and she had only become a couple yesterday. The girl was shocked. She couldn't believe that they hadn't had a romantic relationship before. Winking at the girl, Melanie congratulated her, saying that she would run because if they were caught chatting, they would be punished. The girl thanked Melanie for the gift, but thought there would be problems with it, so she hid it in her pocket. A day later, the girl was still hiding from the man around the corners. A day later, the situation had not changed. The girl was still running from the prince, who was looking for her all over the palace. And then another day passed in which Rosetta did not change her new habit of hiding from the prince. Rosetta continued to run away from Armand. She felt guilty, but she could not yet understand her own feelings. Opening the door to her room, the girl thought that it had been a difficult day. Suddenly, the girl stopped, stumbling, as she heard a man's voice greeting her. Opposite her, on the ottoman, sat a man with his arms folded across his chest. He asked the girl if she thought they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The man was very unhappy and kept looking at the girl. Smiling nervously, the girl asked His Highness what brought him here. The man, without changing his expression, said that he had come to see the face of his beloved. The girl continued to smile and get nervous, and said that yes, she was very busy and couldn't see him. The man's face darkened by her words, and he was surprised, saying that, according to the head maid, Rosetta had no assignments. Laughing nervously, the girl said that she simply had to look for work herself. After listening to the girl, the man bowed his head. Standing up, he asked the girl if her attempts to escape unnoticed when they met were a coincidence. The girl realized her mistake. She had taken too long with her thoughts. The man called the girl, touching her lips with his thumb. Looking the girl in the eyes, he said that according to her, she needed him, so why was she running away now? Smiling, the girl said that she just wanted to make sure that His Highness was safe. Armand said that this was a pathetic excuse for her escape, but the girl thought completely differently. Moving even closer to the girl, he ordered her to stop talking and open her mouth. Bending over the girl, pressing her against the wall, he kissed her. The girl clenched her fist, trying to stay conscious. The girl asked the prince to wait, because this was not what she wanted. Suddenly, a familiar ribbon appeared from the girl's pocket. Looking down, the man saw a red ribbon quietly falling from the girl's pocket. The girl was shocked. She completely forgot about the gift she received a few days ago. The man chuckled, saying that the girl did not want kisses because she had other inclinations. The girl, with her hands tied with a red ribbon, was lying on the bed. The man was telling her that if she wanted, he would do everything. Trying to pull her hands out of the tape, the girl remembered Melanie. Morning came and the palace was filled with the sounds of people rushing about their business. The naked girl lay in the arms of a man, thinking that she had not gotten enough sleep again. Sitting up on the bed and turning to the prince, the girl said that it was time for her to work. The man asked who dared to force his beloved to work. Covering herself with a sheet, the girl said that she really was with the prince, but that did not free her from her obligation. If the girl doesn't work, she won't be able to stop the attempt on the prince's life, and she won't be able to see Valerian, and she won't be able to interrogate suspicious people anymore. The man, looking at the girl, said that he understood that her work was important to her. Smiling slyly at the girl, he said that he was very lonely and asked if the girl really wanted to leave. The girl looked at the man with embarrassment and excitement, honestly admitting to herself that she liked hearing him confess his love to her and say that she was beautiful. She loved his smile, and she liked kissing, although it was a little embarrassing. However, despite this, the girl understood that if she spent time in bed with him, she would not be able to protect him. The stronger her feelings for him, the more fear she felt, fearing to lose the prince. Rosetta told the prince that she had a meeting today. When the prince asked with whom, she replied that it was with a friend. The man looked at the girl with displeasure, asking if this was the man she was talking about. The girl froze, thinking about how he guessed that it was Valerian. The girl wanted to be honest, but apparently His Highness was jealous, and therefore it was better not to reveal the truth. Thinking that she wanted to protect the prince, and this white lie said that she needed to see Melanie. The man listened to this and told the girl to have fun. Looking at the prince, the girl suggested that tomorrow they go out to eat somewhere or watch a performance as lovers usually do. The man was very happy with the girl's offer, saying that he would find a suitable place. The girl stood in the doorway, calling out to Valerian. The man stood with his hand clenched into a fist. He asked about what happened between the girl and the crown prince. A few days ago, the girl promised him that she would refuse Armand if he confessed. He trusted his only sister. That's why I didn't fall for the rumors that Rosetta had hickeys on her neck. Everyone believed that she and Armand were a couple. Anger filled the man when he saw how Rosetta awkwardly hid her neck. She did not look him in the eyes. The girl acted as if she had committed a crime, so the man asked again what had happened between her and the crown prince. The girl blushed and smiled shyly, saying that she and the prince had unexpectedly become lovers. The man looked at the girl with wide eyes, not expecting such an answer. The man did not understand how this could happen unexpectedly. Whether the prince forced her to do something, the girl immediately calmed the man down, saying that this did not happen. The man looked at the girl with his mouth open when she said that she liked him too, and so she agreed. Valerian thought that he had always considered her a sister. For this reason, men always thought that her possible relationship would seem awkward to him, but then why was this thought repugnant to his whole being? Valerian congratulated the girl on the fact that she now had a man. The man clenched his fist again when he heard that they were going on a date tomorrow, Rosetta asking about what she should wear because he knew so much about it. Restraining himself, the man asked where they were going, and the girl asked why he was asking. Smiling, the man said that the outfit depends on the location, to which the girl immediately began talking about the location of their date. Looking at the smiling girl, he realized that jealousy was exactly what he was experiencing. The man could barely contain his energy, he finally understood. All this time he thought that he wanted Rosetta to be happy because she was his family and childhood friend. However, this was just a childish delusion. Looking at the man, the girl asked what Duke Runiella and the prince had talked about at the celebration. The man said that the Duke wanted to help the prince, so he went over to His Highness's side. The girl asked if they had talked about the engagement. The man reassured the girl, saying that the prince had refused, declaring that he loved another. The girl lowered her eyes and smiled happily at these words. Looking at the girl, the man thought that he still couldn't give Rose to such a man. The girl walked, thinking that the prince was happy with the idea of going on a date, but he had a lot of work lately. Would everything be okay? Suddenly, the girl froze when she heard the prince's voice. Looking at the girl, the man told her that he missed her very much. The girl looked at the bouquet given by the prince. The girl inhaled the wonderful scent of flowers and was incredibly happy. The girl asked the man if he had finished his work, to which he asked if work was really the most important thing for her. He had started before dawn and therefore had completed all his duties. The girl asked about the flowers he gave her. The man explained that he gave her flowers because she herself was born on a day when roses bloom. The girl was surprised to realize that he remembered the words she had spoken to him long ago. The girl said that she was sorry because she had not prepared anything for His Highness. The man said that her smile was enough for him. The girl looked at the man and began to say that he was beautiful, that his eyes were like diamonds, his nose was high, and his skin was very soft. The man looked at the girl in amazement. He did not expect such compliments from her. The man, very embarrassed, said that the girl was even more beautiful. The girl was amazed by this funny reaction and decided that she wanted to tease him some more. With a mock sigh, the girl said that when she called him handsome, people called her crazy and she felt very sad. Stunning the man, she said that since they had already started talking about the past, she remembered how she drank poison instead of him. And then she was captured. The man was only able to call her by name. The man looked down, asking what he should do about it. Rosetta laughed cheerfully, said that she was just joking and asked him not to be nervous. Smiling, the girl said that everything is fine, even if there are difficulties. They will be able to overcome all this because the prince is with her. The man looked at the girl excitedly, saying that he thought so too. Rosetta walked holding her dress. She looked around. The girl said that she had heard about this place. People had to wait for months for a free table. Why then was it so empty today? Armand, without answering questions, simply said that he hoped that she liked it here. The girl excitedly thought that he had really bought out all the seats for one evening. The girl looked at the prince, thinking that he had not cared about luxury before, and she did not know that he would do such a thing. What should she do? At this time, the prince advised her to order any dish. Looking at the girl, I thought that this date should be wonderful. If everything goes well, then Rosetta will say that she loves him. The man knew it was too early, but he wanted to propose to her soon. Leafing through the menu, the girl asked His Highness to help her with her choice. Thinking that he wanted to be with her forever, he said that of course he would help. Suddenly, the door to the restaurant opened and a male voice greeted the prince. The couple turned to face the entrance, waiting for the man who had addressed the prince. Valerian walked calmly down the corridor towards them. Putting his hand to his chest, the man said that he had to interrupt them because of an urgent conversation. The girl looked at the man in surprise, wondering what he was doing there. Echoing her thoughts, the prince also asked what the magician was doing here. The man said that he wanted to tell the prince a lot, but he could not do it in the palace. Looking angrily at the man, the prince asked if this really deserved to interfere with the date. The girl looked at the men, thinking why they were behaving like this. Even if it was urgent, Valerie shouldn't have come right now. Even though he helped her, it was a date. To ease the tension, the girl stood up, saying that everything was fine and they could have dinner together since they had gathered. Valerian immediately thanked her. Armand immediately asked since when the maid was allowed to call her Rosetta. Looking at the man, the girl said that she allowed him to do this at the last celebration. The prince wondered why they had started calling each other by name. The archmage was a pleasant young man, and his appearance matched Rosetta's tastes. The man thought that if he showed that he was jealous, he could hurt the girl. Pulling himself together, the man asked what kind of urgent matter brought him here. Valerian looked at the prince. Folding his hands in front of him, he said that he had learned that someone from the first prince's entourage had purchased poison. Armand and Rosetta were thrilled by this news. When the prince asked what kind of poison it was, he replied that it was called moonberry and had neither color nor smell. The man said that once this poison enters the body, the poisoned person becomes excited, but after 5 minutes, the victim dies. Rosetta clutched her dress in her hands, thinking that this poison had never been mentioned before. This situation showed that the first prince was angry that His Highness's chances of gaining the throne had increased. Armand looked at the girl, saying that he would have to take part in the hunt. Valerian said there was no need to panic because the poison could be detected using the teaspoon he gave the prince. The girl looked at the magician, chuckling in confusion. The girl began to realize that the matter was not urgent at all. Suddenly, a waiter entered the room, asked for forgiveness, and brought the first course. The man placed a dish in front of the girl, saying that it was pasta with mushrooms and boiled eggs. Suddenly, Valerian asked the man to wait. Rose looked puzzled at the man, who, smiling, said that she did not eat mushrooms. After these words, a tense silence hung over the table. Holding back his emotions, Armand asked how he knew about this. Smiling, Valerian said they were discussing the mushroom salad that was served at the banquet. I tried to smooth things over, and the girl actively confirmed that it was true. A tense silence fell over the table again. Clenching his hand into a fist, the prince wondered if the magician was trying to provoke him. The girl felt the prince's emotions very well, so she got up from the table, saying that she was full and did not want any more, and also reminded him that it was time for them to go to the theater. Resting his chin on his clasped hands, the man said that he agreed with the girl and that he also had a stomachache, so he had better return to the palace. After which he asked so quietly that only the girl could hear why she was still addressing the prince so formally. It was very strange. The girl looked at the magician in confusion. She thought about only one thing: why was he doing this? The prince noticed that the girl continued to look at the magician and called out to her. Taking a step towards the girl, he reminded her that it was time for them to go. The couple sat in a beautiful theater. They had their own box on the balcony. The girl looked down, thinking that their seats were very comfortable and the view was wonderful. The performance was also very exciting. However, she still couldn't concentrate. The girl realized that His Highness looked very sad. Suddenly, the man put his hands on his knees, calling the girl by name. The man stood up and walked to the edge of the balcony, saying that she knew that he was very jealous. As he closed the curtains, the man turned to face the girl, telling her that she had better not speak too enthusiastically about anyone in his presence. Looking up at the prince, the girl asked if it was because of Valerian. However, she suddenly sighed and her hands began to tremble. The man leaned over the girl and, cupping her face in his hands, kissed her, literally pressing her into the seat. After a long, furious kiss, the couple pulled away from each other, taking a deep breath. Leaning his knee on the seat, the man ran his thumb over her lips, taking away the moisture. The girl could only quietly say that they were in a theater, to be honest. When the elegant crown prince takes such a risk because of her, she does not feel guilty, and it is even pleasant. Ruffling his hair and pushing aside the tie on his shirt, the man said that he really wanted to get rid of her dress right now. The girl looked at the prince, her heart beating madly in her chest. Stroking the girl on the head, he said that he couldn't do this in a public place. The girl looked at the man, not realizing that it was all over. The man sat further away, not touching the girl, squeezing his hands. Rose did not understand why he was holding back. The girl did not understand why this bothered her. The man said that sometimes it seemed to him that he loved her more than she loved him. The girl excitedly said that this couldn't be. The man asked for something that was important to him. He asked to be called by name. Wondering if he was acting this way because of Valerie, the girl asked how she could do that. The man immediately folded his arms across his chest. Now the prince appeared to the girl as an offended cat. The girl looked at this offended cat in amazement. Stuttering, she tenderly called the man's name, who, hearing this, froze in amazement. Realizing what was said, the man smiled tenderly with love, looking at the girl. The man extended his hand, stroking the girl's head and telling her that she was doing well. Before the couple continued their evening, he asked to be called that always. He didn't want to be on the same level as the stupid wizard. Late in the evening, the carriage carried the couple back. Pressing himself against the girl and hugging her around the waist, he bowed his head towards her, saying that he really liked it. The girl turned to the prince, asking how he could have liked it if he had not watched the performance. The man replied that it was much more interesting to watch her. The carriage continued on its way, when suddenly the man asked the girl if she knew that this carriage was poorly soundproof, and that they still had a long way to go. Pressing his face close to the girl's ear, the man quietly asked if he could touch her. The girl was taken aback by such a question. The man did not move away from her ear when the girl addressed him formally again. The man immediately corrected her, saying his name, and the girl obediently repeated. Pressing her palm to her cheek, the girl said that she had a condition. The man looked at the girl, smiling, and told her to tell him, because he had long been worried that she was not asking him for anything. The girl thanked the prince and, pressing her hand to her chest, asked him to take her to the hunting festival. The man looked at the girl in bewilderment. He agreed with the girl, explaining that he would be leaving with the hunters and that when he returned, it would be a long time and that she hardly needed to exhaust herself by waiting. But the girl corrected him, saying that she wanted to be with him during the hunt too. Hearing this, the man said that he would never do that. The girl looked at the man in surprise, saying that if he was worried about her, then he should not forget that she was strong. However, the man was unperturbed. Folding his arms across his chest, he said that he refused. The girl was so angry that she said that in this case, she would never kiss the man again. The man turned to the girl in amazement, asking what she meant. The girl, screaming, said that there would be no more kisses and that she would not call him by his name either, and that she would not do anything else. From the carriage, which did not transmit sound well, the indignant cries of a girl were heard. The man, looking at the girl, did not understand how their conversation took such a turn. Reaching out his hand to her, the man said that it was simply impossible. The girl became even more angry, screaming for the prince not to touch her. The girl gave an ultimatum, saying that she would not allow him anything until he took her with him on a hunt. Looking at the evil girl, the man thought that she was sweet. Even when she behaved like this, he just couldn't resist. The man looked at the girl, who hugged herself. He thought that she would soften. The carriage continued to lead them home, the man wondering if everything would be okay. However, the prince's fears were confirmed. The girl avoided him. From that day on, she never called him by his name, nor did she allow him to kiss her. The man sat sadly on the couch, thinking that they seemed to be back at the beginning of their relationship. He could only hold her hand. At that moment, the man made a serious decision. The man was not going to agree to the girl's request. He decided to seduce her so that she would break her promise and kiss him. The prince had a good reason to refuse the girl, even at the cost of kisses. The reason was that every time he returned from hunting, something terrible happened to him, so he did not regret the refusal. The girl walked silently down the corridor. Remembering her behavior with the prince in recent days, she thought that it was very difficult for her. Approaching my door, I noticed that it was slightly open and the light was on from inside. The girl looked at him worriedly, asking why His Highness was still awake. The man looked at the girl silently, his eyes burning with fire. The girl froze, looking at the man, wondering if he was having another attack. The man sat in bed and looked at the girl without saying a word. The man spoke abruptly, asking the girl if she had come to play, hearing his speech. The girl thought that he was speaking normally and asked how he was feeling. The man got up from the bed and walked towards the girl. As he walked, his hands untied the belt of the robe that covered his body. Having completely removed his robe, the man took the girl's hand, placing it on his chest. Looking at the prince, the girl asked what he was doing. The man calmly admitted that he was trying to seduce her. Running her hand over his abs, he asked her if she liked it. The girl blushed deeply and asked him excitedly. After which, she suddenly darkened and told the man that he was in complete control of his actions. The girl told the confused man that he never calls her by name during his attacks. Touching his cheek with his finger, the man admitted that he had forgotten, and the girl was outraged by this. Putting his hand on the back of his head, the man said that he remembered some things. But of course, not everything. When he asked the girl if she treated him as if he were a cat, he said that he remembered how she played with him with a feather duster. Apparently she had cats before. The girl was shocked that the prince remembered her behavior. The excited girl waved her hands, asking if he really remembered this. The prince reassured her, saying that everything was fine. As he closed the distance between them, the man admitted that he enjoyed receiving a kiss as a reward when he behaved calmly. Pressing himself against the girl and whispering in her ear, he said that he was so excited that he went crazy when she was not around. Armand said that he had been through a lot, and this time it was his turn to seduce. Hugging the girl, the man slowly pulled the ribbons of her apron, untying it. The drugged girl no longer resisted the man. The girl, pinned to the bed by him, thought that at this rate she would no longer be able to resist him. The girl with an unhappy face lay naked in the prince's arms. Turning to face him, she cursed silently. If this man didn't have such a beautiful face, there wouldn't be any problems. The girl placed her hand on her forehead, realizing that now she would not be able to get permission. The girl walked forward, thinking that now she would have to follow him secretly. As she flew through the door, the girl asked Valerian to save her. The man, who was reading a book at that moment, turned towards the girl. He asked the girl if she thought that coming to him for help without even sending a letter was rude enough. In response, the girl asked if he really thought that after what he did a couple of days ago, she cared. The man abruptly admitted that he had actually been waiting for her since she had not contacted him. Leaning towards the girl, the man said that it seemed like she didn't want to communicate with him unless she needed his help. The girl froze after the words the man said. She felt very guilty towards the man and apologized. However, the man said that there was no need to apologize and he was also quite rude, so they should forget about it. He asked the girl what she wanted from him. Pressing her hand to her chest, the girl excitedly asked him to help her get into the hunt. Valerian asked the girl if she really wanted to go to the festival. The girl clasped her hands and said that yes, she wanted to secretly stalk His Highness and protect him, and the man asked if it was worth the risk. Looking away, the girl sadly said that she didn't know, but she had a bad feeling. The man clenched his fist as the girl asked him in a gentle voice to help her. Pressing her hands to her chest, she said that the man knew that she could not cope without him. Valerian smiled, saying that his rose was indeed very convincing. Looking at the girl, the man thought about how he could refuse such a sweet face. The girl excitedly thanked him. The girl spread her arms out to the sides and wanted to hug the man, but stopped abruptly. The man noticed this immediately. He asked the frozen girl what was the matter. Had her lover really forbidden her to touch him? The girl waved her hands and said that it wasn't that. They just had a complicated relationship, and she hadn't explained anything to Armand yet, so she didn't know whether it was worth maintaining their former closeness. The man decided to forget about it, immediately asking since when she started calling the prince by his name. Taking a step towards the girl, the man asked what kind of intimacy she was talking about. As he closed the distance between them, he asked if this would be considered intimacy, after which the man kissed the girl on the cheek. The man pulled away from the blushing girl, asking if a light kiss on the cheek was allowed. The girl indignantly shouted the man's name. The man calmly said that a child can kiss his sister if she doesn't know, to which the girl asked in what place a man is a child. Addressing the girl, the man said that she was the first one who started treating him like a baby. The girl was defeated by such arguments and could not say anything against them. Having told the man that she could not refuse him, she asked him to return to the topic of the festival. The girl checked the horse that the prince would ride on the hunt. Checking the weapon, she made sure that it was also in order. The girl also checked the food and made sure that no poison had been added to it. Only clothes remained, so the girl offered her help in dressing. She remembered how in a past life Armand died because of a poisoned needle that was hidden in his shirt. Reminding the girl that she should call him by name, he said that she was very cheerful today and taking her chin in his fingers, suggested that she have some fun before leaving. The girl immediately began to hit him on the hand, telling him to stop because her heart would stop. However, the girl suddenly stopped, hearing the prince's question whether she had prepared anything for him. Traditionally, before the festival begins, women give their partners something valuable. However, the girl was so carried away by ensuring his safety that she completely forgot about the gift and now stood there completely confused. Moving closer to the man, she apologized because she forgot about it, the man reassured her, saying that it was her first time attending the festival and this was to be expected. She should just relax, because he was joking. While putting on his shirt with the help of the girl, he asked if she still wanted to go with him. While buttoning his shirt, he told the girl that he could look for better clothes for her. The girl thought that the prince was worried that the other nobles would not treat her with due respect. Reaching out her hands to help him button his shirt, the girl said that she felt more comfortable in these clothes and that if it became difficult, she would leave. While buttoning his sleeves, he replied that if anyone offended her, she should remember his name and tell him. The man's face darkened as he imagined this situation, and he said that he would make the scoundrel's life miserable. The girl smiled tensely, thinking that it was not her place to refuse him now. Changing the subject, the girl asked if there would be fireworks at the festival. The man nodded, saying that there would be even more lights than they had seen last time. Taking the girl by the hands, he invited her to look at them together. The girl smiled happily. After a successful hunt, she would definitely watch the fireworks with Armand. As she left the castle, she hoped that everything would go well. The party for the festival included several people, among them the old steward Malcolm, as well as the knight Richard. Due to concerns about the prince's health, the priest Theodore was also invited. And, of course, she, the prince's partner, was part of the detachment for the festival. The girl was riding in a carriage and thought that the hunting grounds were, of course, safe. However, she was still very worried about the man's safety. Finally, the carriage arrived and everyone was informed that His Highness the Crown Prince had arrived. The man got out of the carriage, offering his hand to the girl. Looking at the girl, people whispered about the simple dress she was wearing. Rose wondered if this was really their best insult. Of course, she didn't want to be the target of ridicule, but it was the easiest dress to move in. It was only for the sake of protecting His Highness. The man, sensing the girl's anxiety, wanted to tell her something, but the girl interrupted him, said that she remembered and asked him not to worry. The girl thought that she needed to look around. A little later, she would pretend that she felt ill and slip away. The girl's thoughts were interrupted by a female voice that called her by name. Opening her fan, the girl said that she wanted to congratulate Rose. Lady Runiella said she had heard that all was well between Rose and the prince.